Our story begins 2 years ago, when a young man and his father were suddenly transported to an ancient world. To survive, the father and son duo decided to put their modern knowledge to good use. They worked tirelessly, recruiting soldiers and buying horses, but just as everything was finally ready, and they planned to rise up and overthrow the imperial tyranny in one fell swoop. A cultivator suddenly dropped right out of the sky. Realizing this was actually a world of immortals, he immediately changed his mind about the rebellion. He decided he and his father should seek immortality instead, though things didn't go quite as planned. After several days of serving that immortal the finest food and drink, the man claimed only the young could cultivate. His father sighed, fearing his own time was short. He told his son to go on alone, promising to find a way to make money for his cultivation resources. But the son wouldn't hear of it, insisting that since they arrived together, they would cultivate together. He reasoned that a cultivator is still just a man, and like any man, he can die. He understood that if they couldn't enter the sect together through the front door, then they would simply have to find another way. Deep down, he was certain the man carried the secrets of cultivation on his person. A little later, we hear the sound of mocking laughter echoing through the air. The village head reported that every villager had already been tested. Only Wang Ergu possessed a low-grade human root, which was a bit of a disappointment, really. The father stepped forward, pleading with the immortal to test his son as well. The immortal agreed, telling the boy to place his hand on the stone and focus his spirit. The stone lit up, and the village head eagerly asked if his son was finally destined for immortality. The immortal simply shook his head. The spiritual root was broken and utterly unqualified. The villagers whispered that even the chief's son had failed, suggesting they should all just give up. No one expected that Chuan would fare even worse than old Wang's son, Ergu. After all, Ergu at least had a chance to go off and become a deity, unlike poor Chuan. Seeing this, the father whispered to his son that it was time for their secret weapon, taking him down. But Chuan told his father to wait and stay calm, as he wasn't finished quite yet. He turned to the immortal and asked if his father could also be tested for a spiritual root. The village head scoffed, wondering why they would bother testing the old man now. He told them to forget it, noting that the father was far too old for such things. Even if he possessed a root, the path of cultivation would be closed to someone of his age. Chuan insisted it was just a test out of simple curiosity, nothing more, really. The immortal relented, remembering that this family had saved his life once before. He agreed to a simple test and told the village head to place his hand upon the stone. And then, something entirely unexpected happened. It was the legendary 9-rotation heavenly immortal root, a sight rarely seen in any lifetime. The father gasped in shock, realizing that he actually possessed the talent for greatness. As he touched the stone, a mysterious voice suddenly echoed inside his mind. He wondered what this strange voice could be, speaking to him from within his own head. And then it clicked. It was a system. Yes, a system had finally arrived. He couldn't help but laugh internally, thinking to himself that he knew this would happen. After all, a transmigrator couldn't possibly exist without a cheat code, and now, everything was finally falling into place. His father possessed the talent of the earth itself, leaving the village head completely speechless. The immortal turned to the father, Brother Chun, and pleaded for him to return to the Qingyun sect. Chuan paused, reminding the man that he had just said his father was far too old for cultivation. The immortal stammered, explaining that Chuan didn't understand the sheer rarity of a 9-rotation heavenly immortal root. Besides, at only 50 years old, Brother Chin was practically at the perfect age to start his journey. He promised Brother Chun that if he joined the Qingyun sect, any request he had would be granted. Deep down, the immortal was already calculating the massive rewards the sect would give him for finding such a genius. He was determined to take him, and Chin replied that going with him wasn't entirely out of the question. However, he had one firm condition: his son, Chuan, had to come along with them. The immortal hesitated at the thought of bringing the boy, but Chin quickly asked if there was a problem. He told Immortal Yu that if it was truly too difficult, they should probably just forget the whole thing. He suggested looking for another sect that might be interested in this 9-something root. The 9-rotation heavenly immortal root. Yes, that was the name of the thing he was offering. The immortal panicked, begging Brother Chin not to look elsewhere and agreeing to the terms immediately. To be honest, he was terrified of what would happen if he let such a rare talent slip through his fingers. He feared the sect master would literally skin him alive, so he knew they had to leave right away. He assured them it was no trouble at all, urging the father and son to start their journey together. And so, without wasting another moment, our protagonists prepared to set off for a brand new life. As they arrived, Chuan couldn't help but marvel, wondering if this beautiful place was truly the immortal's sect. A voice suddenly challenged him, asking who he was and what his purpose was for being there. Chuan was momentarily confused, pointing out the obvious fact that the immortal himself had brought him here. Immortal Yu quickly stepped in, identifying Chuan as the boy from the village with the lowly earth spirit root. The immortal offered a brief, somewhat dismissive apology as he finally remembered who the boy was. Chuan thought to himself that it was a good thing his father was so impressive, or he'd likely be forgotten entirely. Immortal Yu suggested they wait for a moment, explaining that he had already sent word to the sect master. Expecting the leader to arrive shortly, he asked Brother Chun to step aside with him for a private word. Chen grew concerned, asking if there was some sort of problem regarding his son's situation. The immortal shook his head, gently reminding Chun that the path to immortality is long and spans many ages. He noted that while Chun was destined to achieve eternal life, the reality for others was quite different. He sighed, pointing out that his son's natural talent was, to put it politely, severely lacking. He advised Chun to prepare himself to eventually sever his ties with the mortal world and leave the boy behind. Chun was privately furious, offended that anyone would dare suggest his son was nothing more than trash. He vowed that even if he had to use every resource he owned, he would turn his son into a god. Suddenly, the sect master burst onto the scene, frantically searching for the legendary immortal seed. Immortal, you made the introduction, presenting Chun Jangwo as the one possessing the 9-rotation heavenly root. The sect master beamed, declaring that he knew such a talent couldn't possibly look like an ordinary person. He was practically trembling with excitement, admitting he had never actually seen a heavenly seed before. He stepped forward eagerly, demanding to get a closer look at the man who would change their sect's future. Chuan watched the scene unfold, inwardly fuming at the fat immortal who had the nerve to look down on him. He told himself that the man would be eating his words soon enough, silently urging his father to show them his true power. Chen Jangwo gave his son a reassuring look, fully prepared to lead these people right into a trap of their own making. The sect master peered closer, practically beaming as he noted that since they shared the surname Chun, they must be related. He went so far as to claim they were long-lost brothers, suggesting he could be like both a father and a mother to him. Deciding that there was no time like the present, he suggested they make things official right then and there. He eagerly began ushering them along, insisting that they head straight to the ancestral hall together. But then, Chuan spoke up, stopping the sect master in his tracks to ask a rather pointed question. The sect master paused, looking at the two children and wondering if they were also legendary immortal seeds. Immortal, you quickly clarified that they were not, explaining that one of them possessed only a lowly earth spirit root. He pointed out that the other boy, whom the sect master had just pushed aside, had nothing but a useless mixed spirit root. The sect master's mood shifted instantly, snapping that he felt insulted by the very idea of wasting his time on such people. He demanded to know why a piece of trash with a mixed root was even brought here, as such people weren't worthy of their gates. Immortal, you tried to intervene, quietly begging the sect master to stop his insults before things got worse. The sect master scoffed, asking if his high status didn't give him the right to say exactly what he thought. He looked at the boy with the mixed root again, still convinced that as a sect master, he was above such commoners. He wondered aloud if he wasn't allowed to be a bit elitist when dealing with someone so clearly untalented. But then, catching Chun Jangwo's cold gaze, he pivoted instantly, suddenly praising Chuan's handsome and refined appearance. He declared that the boy looked like a literal immortal descended to Earth, a true hero among the younger generation. He concluded with a flourish, swearing that the boy was, without a doubt, a divine being in the making. The sect master's sudden change of heart was truly something to behold. He was acting just like the gossiping Auntie Zhao from the village entrance. It was a display of pure opportunism. He quickly turned to Qin Jangwo, insisting that his previous insults had all been a simple joke. He begged the man not to take it to heart, repeating once more that he was only kidding around. With a forced smile, he told Qin Jangwo not to mind him and beckoned for the boy to come closer. He offered some snacks as an apology to the boy with the earth spirit root, trying to smooth things over. Realizing Chuan wasn't Qin Jangwo's son, he still urged the boy to take the gift, acting as though he were being incredibly generous. He claimed he didn't give such things to just anyone, though, to be honest, he was proving to be even stingier than Auntie Zhao. Chuan looked at the meager offering, wondering who the sect master thought he was fooling with such a tiny gesture. Immortal, you whispered for the sect master to stop being so cheap, pointing out the darkening expression on Qin Jangwo's face. The sect master cleared his throat, admitting that perhaps it was a bit small as he turned back to Chuan. Telling himself not to be so tight-fisted, he pulled out a storage bag for the boy instead. He explained that inside were 1,000 snacks and several elixirs specifically meant to aid in his cultivation. He even presented a high-grade magical treasure called the Cicada Sword, formally offering it as an apology. A high-grade treasure was much more like it, though Qin Jangwo played along, politely insisting it was too much. Suddenly, a voice boomed asking for the immortal seed as the disciples bowed low to greet the Supreme Elder. The other elders followed suit, showing deep respect as the Supreme Elder made his grand entrance. The top brass of the sect had arrived, and the elder immediately demanded to know which one possessed the heavenly immortal root. Chuan whispered to his father to stay quiet, reminding him that they were the precious prize in this situation. He told his father it was time to introduce himself properly, and Qin Jangwo was more than happy to oblige. The sect master addressed the Supreme Elder, introducing Qin Jangwo as the legendary possessor of the 9-turn heavenly immortal root. The Supreme Elder marveled at the sight, exclaiming that this was indeed the legendary immortal seed. He noted that the boy was more than just impressive, he was truly something special to behold. In his eyes, the boy clearly possessed the potential of the Great Earth, but then he turned his attention to the two younger ones. The sect master introduced the handsome and elegant young man as Qin Chuan. He added that Chuan was the son of brother Jangwo, though he couldn't help but slip in the nickname Ergu, which was a bit much, really. Chuan felt the introduction was incredibly half-hearted, wondering if his father really had to be so dismissive. The elder realized why the immortal seed and his son looked so displeased, immediately blaming that fool Chun Sheng for the tension. He muttered that the idiots around him must have said something wrong yet again. Deep down, he knew that simply trying to please the immortal seed wasn't going to be enough. He decided the best approach was to start with the child, calling out to little Chuan with a gentle smile. He introduced himself as the supreme elder of the Qingyun sect, pointing out that the short, chubby man with no social cues was actually his own son. He admitted his son had spoken out of turn earlier, showing a rare moment of parental accountability. The elder offered an apology on his son's behalf, as Chuan politely acknowledged the supreme elder's presence. Chuan remarked on how young the elder looked, apologizing for not being able to bow properly since his hands were full. The elder waved it off, telling him it didn't matter in the slightest. He declared that from this day forward, Chuan wouldn't have to bow to anyone within the Qingyun sect. Noticing the boy was still clutching his command token, the elder wondered if he simply didn't know how to store it away. He offered to teach him the way, but Chuan quickly corrected him, calling him grandmother out of respect. The boy admitted that his talent was dull, and he hadn't even begun his journey on the path of cultivation yet. The elder laughed it off as if it were a minor detail, telling him to just take the gift and not worry about it. She presented him with a spirit blood-cleansing pill, explaining that it had the power to significantly improve one's natural talent. Qin Chuan was stunned by her generosity, realizing that his father's importance must be even greater than he had imagined. The elder urged him to take it immediately, promising that she would personally protect him while the medicine took effect. She told him there was no need to be shy, especially since her own son and his father had become sworn brothers. In her eyes, that made him her own grandson, and as the saying goes, one should never refuse a gift from an elder. With a polite nod, Chuan thanked his new grandmother for the precious gift. The elder turned to Jangwo, confident that once Chuan consumed the pill, his potential would reach new heights. She was certain his talent would become top tier and his cultivation level would see a massive boost. Jangwo suggested she double-check the results, though Chuan felt he didn't really need such a pill in the first place. But then, the elder's face fell in total disbelief as she realized something was very, very wrong. Panicked, the sect master rushed forward, desperately asking what had happened to his son. The result was baffling. He was only at the first level of chi refining, and worse, he possessed a miscellaneous spirit root. The elder muttered that it made no sense, as even a commoner should have gained a high-grade spirit root from that pill. Chuan noted that if it worked for everyone else but not him, his spirit root must be far more complex than it appeared. He wondered if a miscellaneous root meant he had every element within him, potentially allowing him to practice any technique. We see the adults looking on with pity, assuming the poor boy was simply too heartbroken to speak. Feeling responsible for the failure, the elder decided to give him the precious jade bamboo golden phoenix armor as compensation. She saw it as a way to make amends, though Chuan was mostly just trying to process the name of the armor. Her son gasped, pointing out that this was a mid-grade spirit treasure capable of automatically gathering spiritual energy. It could even block any attack below the golden core stage, a level of generosity that was, frankly, quite shocking. The elder sighed, lamenting that it was such a pity for Chuan to have such poor natural talent. Chuan, however, wasn't bothered. He figured his cultivation was just a bit slow, and really, what did it matter? With a father of such legendary status, he knew he'd never lack for pills or medicine, but he noticed the hour was getting late. The elder quickly instructed her son to arrange a residence for the father and son, and the sect master happily obliged. As he was told to follow along, Chuan realized that living with his father would mean being placed on a pedestal. He worried that such a high status would ruin his plans. After all, every great protagonist starts from the bottom. He quickly spoke up, telling his grandmother that since he had already received such a grand gift, he had a request. He didn't want to keep breaking the rules, and insisted on starting his journey as a mere miscellaneous disciple. The idea of him being a low-level servant shocked them, but Chuan insisted it was perfectly fine. He wanted everything to be handled strictly according to the sect's regulations, and eventually, the elder gave in. She agreed to his wishes and called over a disciple named Xiaoyu to handle the arrangements. Xiaoyu nodded, understanding the task, and signaled for Chuan and his companion to follow him. He gestured for the other guy to come along too, while Chuan grumbled to himself that no one in this sect seemed normal. Suddenly, the sect master called out for them to wait, announcing that he would be going along as well. Wu Guoqiao looked at Jangwo with concern, pleading with him not to say he wanted to be a servant too. He pointed out that even by the strictest sect rules, a man of his stature shouldn't be living in the servant quarters. Guoqiao practically begged him to stay, claiming the sect simply couldn't function without its leader. Jangwo clarified he was only going to check the living conditions, as he couldn't let Chuan suffer in a place like that. Relieved, Guoqiao told him that was fine, but made him promise that he would definitely come back. Watching the sect master's display, Chuan couldn't help but feel that having such a leader was, frankly, a bit embarrassing. As they walked, Xiaoyu humbly insisted that Chuan should just call him by his name instead of using such formal titles. We see them arrive at the Spirit Field District, a place filled with precious herbs that require the utmost care to cultivate. Xiaoyu explained that only female miscellaneous disciples worked here, suggesting to Zhang Wo that they should keep moving along. But Zhang Wo stopped him right there, deciding on the spot that Chuan should be stationed here among the girls. Xiaoyu hesitated, wondering how on earth he was supposed to make that work. In the end, he figured that as long as this father and son were happy, the sect rules could take a back seat for once. When Zhang Wo asked if there was a problem, Xiaoyu quickly assured him that everything was perfectly fine. Of course it was. He promised to go and contact the manager of the area immediately to set things in motion. Chuan, however, felt his father was being a bit too hasty in deciding his entire future on a whim. Zhang Wo just laughed, pointing out how vibrant and beautiful the female disciples of the Qingyan sect were. He told his son that if he could find a daughter-in-law among these talented women, his work would be done. It was all part of his grand plan to expand the Qin family tree, and suddenly, the idea of being surrounded by female disciples didn't sound so bad. Chuan took a good look around and realized his father actually had a very impressive eye for talent. A manager named Dongxue soon appeared, looking every bit the elegant, immortal cultivator they expected. Xiaoyu introduced Chuan, explaining that he would be staying in the Spirit Field District from now on. Dongxue frowned, suggesting to Xiaoyu that placing a male disciple here might not be the most appropriate choice. She worried that having a man in the Spirit Field District would lead to all sorts of inconveniences for the women. Xiaoyu leaned in, explaining that Chuan wasn't a typical servant, but rather a new kind of manager for the area. He clarified that Chuan wouldn't be involved in the daily chores, which seemed to ease the tension slightly. Chuan told Xiaoyu not to worry, promising to look after these fairies personally, and he was more than happy to do so. Dongxue tried to protest, but Xiaoyu cut her off, making it clear there were no buts, and she simply had to follow orders. Accepting the situation, she signaled for Chuan to follow her into the district. Zhang Wo asked if he could stay too, but he was quickly told he'd be heading straight to the kitchen instead. He figured as much. Meanwhile, Dongxue gathered the female disciples, telling them to put down whatever they were doing. We see her introduce Chuan to the group, announcing that from this day forward, he would be living and working alongside them. Chuan didn't miss a beat, giving the ladies a cheerful wave and a bright hello. The girls were instantly skeptical, whispering among themselves about whether there had been some kind of mistake. After all, there was a strict ban on male disciples working in their area, let alone living in the same quarters. One of them wondered aloud if perhaps this young senior brother Chuan held some kind of special, high-ranking status. Dongxue told Chuan to take a moment to get acquainted with everyone while she handled the logistics. She went to arrange his living quarters, but not before giving a firm command to the group. She declared that in her absence, everyone was to follow Chuan's arrangements, a move that left him admiring her icy beauty. He told himself her personality was just a bit cold, and that they would surely get along better over time. The disciples crowded around, curious if Chuan's status was truly as extraordinary as Dongshue's order implied. They teased him, asking just how special he was, perhaps even more powerful than an outer sect elder. Chuan joked, asking if they would believe him if he said his father was the late emperor. The girls gasped in awe, though to be honest, some of them weren't entirely sure what a late emperor actually was. One girl admitted her ignorance, while another explained that in the mortal world, people are ruled by emperors. She reasoned that the emperor of one's ancestors must be the late emperor, which sounded very impressive indeed. They concluded that this would make Chuan a prince, and they were more than ready to follow his lead from now on. Chuan was more than happy to play along, waving them over with a wide, welcoming grin. He announced that he had brought a small gift for everyone, a little something to mark their first meeting. He began handing them out, insisting that every single person take 2 pieces for themselves. The girls could hardly believe their eyes as senior brother Chuan made sure no one was left out. They whispered in shock, noting that an outer sect disciple usually only receives 3 spirit stones for an entire month. One of them wondered if they could actually use these stones for their own cultivation as well. Chuan assured them there was no catch and told them to accept the gifts with a clear conscience. Deep down, he knew his father was a bit of a gold sink, but this was a small price to pay to win their hearts. It was a brilliant trade-off, really, and the girls were already swooning over how generous he was. They realized Chuan must be truly influential to give so much to all 30 sisters in the group. With everyone holding their 2 stones, they decided then and there that Chuan was the best brother they could ask for. Some even shouted their love for him, which, to be honest, was a bit much, even for Chuan. He told himself that if he'd known cultivation was this much fun, he never would have bothered with a rebellion. Suddenly, Dongxue returned and demanded to know what was happening, but Chuan stepped in to shield the girls. He explained that he was simply in a good mood and wanted to share some resources with everyone. And then, with a smooth gesture, he offered a share to Dongxue as well, telling her these were for her. We see him notice just how much authority Dongxue commands here. He found that icy discipline rather attractive. He figured that since he was staying here anyway, it was only a matter of time before she accepted him. Dong Shue ignored the charm, sharply asking the disciples why they were still standing around instead of working. Chuan told her to wait a moment. If she didn't want her gift, that was fine, but she shouldn't stop the others from taking theirs. The girls whispered that since Chuan had even pressured senior brother Yu, his status must be incredibly noble. They decided it was better to accept the gift than to cause trouble, so they finally took the stones. Chuan beamed, telling them that was the spirit and encouraging everyone to take their share. Dong Shue cut through the chatter, telling Chuan it was time to go since his living quarters were finally ready. He followed her lead happily, and soon they arrived at a modest building that was to be his new home. She informed him that she lived right next door and told him to call her if he needed anything at all. Chuan wondered why she always looked so cold. After all, it wasn't as if he owed her any money. One of the disciples told him not to mind it, explaining that senior sister Dong Shue was always like this. She added that Dong Shue was actually very kind and often protected the servant disciples when they were being bullied. Chuan realized she was the type who was cold on the outside but warm within, which, to be honest, only made her more interesting. He thanked them for the information, finding the situation far more intriguing than he had first expected. He then pulled out another gift, offering a bottle of chi-gathering pills for everyone to share among themselves. Deep down, he couldn't help but marvel at how incredibly generous the sect master had been with these resources. He laughed to himself that she called this a mere bottle, then began handing out 3 pills to every person. The girls showered him with gratitude, telling him over and over just how wonderful he was for doing this. One girl even asked if he had a partner yet, wondering aloud if she might have a chance with him. Chuan told them not to be so formal with the titles and insisted they all just call him Brother Chuan. He promised the sisters that from now on, they could come to him every month to collect their snacks. The air was filled with their cheers as they thanked Brother Chuan for his overwhelming kindness. One even joked about wanting to start a family with him, but he decided that was a conversation for another day. He laughed and told them they would talk another day, urging everyone to return to their cultivation until they met again tomorrow. The disciples couldn't help but marvel at how senior brother Chuan was truly a man of justice and incredible generosity. A little later, we see Dong Shue returning, prompting Chuan to ask what she needed now that senior brother Yu had already given his orders. She explained that since he had just started his cultivation and reached the bone-strengthening stage, he should come to her place to eat. He realized once again that Dong Shue was a classic ice beauty, cold on the outside, but clearly warm-hearted underneath. However, when he saw the meal, he had to ask if something was wrong, wondering if they actually had some secret grudge. He looked at her skeptically, asking Dong Shue directly if there was some hidden enmity between them that he didn't know about. She seemed genuinely confused, pointing out that they had only just met today, so how could there possibly be any resentment? He joked that if there was no grudge, she must be trying to poison him, gesturing wildly at the dish she had prepared. It was supposed to be braised pork with potatoes, but looking at the plate, he found that description to be a bit of a stretch. When he asked why she wasn't eating any herself, she simply replied that she had already reached the earthbone stage. She reminded him that she was already at that level and had gone through the trouble of making this specifically for him. He told himself to let it go. After all, this was the first time a girl had ever cooked for him, so he should show some respect. But after one taste, he decided to make a quick exit, muttering that he would just go back and eat his own food instead. She watched him go, wondering to herself with a hint of genuine doubt if her cooking was really that terrible. Back at his own place, Chuan realized for the first time in his life that his own cooking was actually quite delicious by comparison. On the following afternoon, we find him greeting the sisters again, wishing them all a very pleasant day. They greeted Brother Chuan warmly, excitedly asking if he had come by specifically to spend some time playing with them. One of the girls chimed in that it was impossible, as Brother Chuan was surely far too busy with his important cultivation. He loved this feeling. It was perfect, allowing him to enjoy himself while simultaneously gathering all the latest news about the sect. He thought to himself that being able to relax while cultivating was truly the best way to live. Since he had some free time, he asked the girls what they usually did and if anything interesting had happened today. They told him nothing fun had happened, though there was something annoying. That man had come back this morning to harass Dong Shue again. Chuan's expression darkened as he realized some blind fool was actually trying to lay a hand on one of his people. He muttered that if he caught the guy, there would be hell to pay, making the girls marvel at how domineering he sounded. One girl swooned, telling him he was so handsome she wanted to give him everything, but he quickly told her that wouldn't be necessary. Then, another girl remembered hearing a rumor early this morning about someone who had just joined the sect. Apparently, this newcomer had refined their essence into chi and reached the first level of chi refining overnight, which left Chuan stunned. Everyone was calling this person a heaven-sent genius, claiming the sect had never seen such a talent before. He wondered for a moment if they were talking about his father, but then the girls added another detail. They mentioned that this person was exceptionally dignified, possessed an extraordinary aura, and was incredibly beautiful to look at. Well, if the person was handsome, then it definitely wasn't his father, but this sudden arrival was still a problem. He worried this newcomer might steal his father's spotlight, which would eventually mean fewer cultivation resources for the family. If that happened, his own easy life would be over, so he decided he needed to find someone to ask about this tomorrow. Suddenly, Dong Shue appeared, sharply asking the girls why they were all crowding around Chuan instead of finishing their work. The girls scattered as she turned her gaze to Chuan, asking why he wasn't inside his room focusing on his cultivation. She warned him that by distracting them, he was delaying their duties, and if the work wasn't done, neither of them could afford the consequences. He simply replied that he was hungry and was just looking for something to eat, which, to be fair, was a perfectly valid excuse. He offered a quick apology, admitting that this was indeed his fault for interrupting their schedule. To his absolute surprise, he noticed that this supposedly cold woman was actually blushing at his words. Chuan quickly changed the subject, telling Dong Shue that since she was there, he wanted to ask about the spiritual herbs in the field. He wondered if their growth was due to the nature of the herbs themselves, or if the soil here possessed some special quality. She explained that the field and the herbs complement each other, and while the plants are special, there is more to it. The soil itself contains a trace of spiritual energy, which even causes ordinary weeds to sprout within the spiritual field. Unlike common wild grass, these weeds absorb a bit of spiritual essence the moment they break through the earth. A look of realization dawned on Chuan's face, and he told himself that if that was the case, he had a new plan. He figured he could start planting other things in the field, finally putting his grand plan to get rich into motion. He felt the excitement building, but Dong Shue interrupted his thoughts, asking if he had any other actual questions. She mentioned she was busy, but he had one more vital concern. What exactly were they going to eat tomorrow? She simply replied that there would naturally be food for him, leaving the matter settled for the time being. Meanwhile, we turned to Zhang Wo, who seemed to be going through something, though it wasn't quite what we expected. He approached the sect master with a humble request, but the master insisted there was no need for such formalities. After all, Zhang Wo was the only person in the history of their sect to achieve something so remarkable overnight. Having jumped from a mortal to the chi refining stage so quickly, the master promised to grant him absolutely anything. Somewhere else, Chuan felt a sudden chill, wondering which little brat was talking about him behind his back. Back at the main hall, Zhang Wo admitted he was worried about Chuan, as it was the first time father and son had been apart so long. He expressed a deep desire to go see him, a request the sect master found incredibly simple to fulfill. The master called out for Xiaoyu, who appeared immediately to attend to his command. Zhang Wo watched her curiously, wondering what was wrong with the girl, though the master assured him everything was fine. He then instructed Xiaoyu to take his junior brother to see Chuan and to make sure he was well looked after. Zhang Wo quickly declined, joking that with Chuan's personality, he'd likely end up serving the boy instead of the other way around. As Zhang Wo hurried off, the other disciple asked if he should still go, only to be met with a very blunt refusal. The master warned him that if he ever tried to act like Zhang Wo's equal again, the next beating would be far worse. He muttered about their difference in status, though the disciple weakly protested that it wasn't his fault. He insisted that Zhang Wo was the one who had addressed him so familiarly first, not that it mattered much now. A little later, Chuan was surprised to see his father, who noted with a grin that his son seemed to be living quite well. Zhang Wo teased him about finding a partner so quickly, commenting on how remarkably pretty the young lady was. He even complimented her cooking skills, though to be honest, it was just a simple meal on the table. Chuan tried to steer the conversation away from his love life, asking his father what had actually brought him there. Xiaoyu politely excused herself to let the father and son talk, deciding it was the best time to make her exit. Zhang Wo called out for her to visit often, prompting an embarrassed Chuan to tell his father that he'd had quite enough. He urged his father to get to the point, and Zhang Wo leaned in, confessing he had discovered something very interesting. It turned out the cultivation technique provided by the system seemed far superior to anything the sect master had given him. Chuan wasn't surprised at all, reminding him that a golden finger is meant to be a bit of a cheat code, after all. He then asked where the master's technique was, thinking they shouldn't let it go to waste and should give it to him. Zhang Wo admitted he thought it was useless now, so he had simply given it back to the sect master. Chuan could hardly believe his ears, staring at his father in complete and utter shock. He lamented his father's lack of business sense, realizing he could have sold that technique for a fortune. Zhang Wo explained his reasoning. He simply assumed Chuan would be using the superior system techniques anyway. Chuan sighed and told him to hand it over then, waiting a moment for the system to respond. Zhang Wo explained that since Chuan wasn't the sect master, the technique simply wasn't meant for him to use. Chuan could only plead with his father to use a bit more common sense, feeling utterly exhausted by the man's logic. Zhang Wo told him not to worry, promising to have Xiaoyu bring it over later so Chuan could focus on his romantic pursuits. Chuan insisted he was focused on cultivation, asking his father to stay a moment longer because there was something they needed to discuss. He mentioned hearing rumors about some arrogant newcomer in the sect who had somehow broken through from a mortal to the chi refining stage. He asked his father if he knew who this idiot was, worried that such a person might eventually threaten his own position. He suggested they find a way to deal with the guy, but Zhang Wo just stared at him, asking what he had just said. Chuan wondered if his father's hearing was failing along with his brain, repeating that they needed to find that fool. He asked again if his father understood the plan to get rid of him, which, in hindsight, was a very poor choice of words. Zhang Wo finally snapped, shouting that he was the idiot in question before lunging at his son. Chuan scrambled back, wondering why his father was suddenly so angry and desperately begging him not to hit his face. Watching from a distance, one might think the bond between this father and son was truly something special. The old man certainly didn't hold back, though Chuan took comfort in the fact that at least no one was threatening his status. After his father finally left, Xiaoyu returned, shocked to see the state Chuan had been left in. He joked that his father was just jealous of his good looks, then asked her what she was doing back so soon. She explained she was there to collect the dishes and mentioned they would be having strawberry mapo tofu for dinner. Chuan stared at her, asking if she realized how absurd that sounded, before deciding that as long as she was happy, it didn't matter. She simply smiled and told him she would be back again in the evening. Not long after, we see senior brother Yu arriving at the scene, looking just as surprised as everyone else. He announced he was looking for Chuan, only to realize with a shock that he wasn't the only one there. The old man called out to Chuan, his voice carrying a rare sense of gravity. He explained that these jade slips contained techniques of various attributes, and Chuan was to choose just one to practice. However, he gave a stern warning. He must never attempt to practice them simultaneously. Doing so would cause the techniques to clash violently, and with that final word, Zhang Wo took his leave. Chuan watched him go, thinking that if he didn't train them all at once, his unique, miscellaneous, spiritual veins would be utterly wasted. In his mind, only children make choices. As an adult, he naturally intended to have everything. As he debated which to start with, a voice cut through his thoughts, asking if he really hated her cooking that much. It was Xiaoyu, urgently calling out for Chuan to wake up from his stupor. He groaned, asking her how he was doing and pleading with her to stop shaking him so violently. If she kept it up, he feared he might actually die, so he quickly asked how long he had been unconscious. She told him it had been 3 days, noting that since he hadn't eaten a bite of her cooking, he had narrowly escaped a disaster. He hadn't expected that practicing multiple water attribute techniques at once would knock him out cold. And yet, we see that he had reached the 3rd level of chi refining, a true case of finding a blessing within a misfortune. He couldn't help but wonder what realm he might reach once all 5 elemental techniques were fully mastered. Xiaoyu interrupted his musing, asking if he was even listening to a word she said. She repeated her question, wondering if he truly hated her food so much that he'd rather starve himself into a coma. He assured her it was a misunderstanding, claiming he had simply been so absorbed in his cultivation that he forgot to eat. She offered to reheat the food, leaving Chuan to wonder how she could be so cold-faced while doing something so ridiculous. Deciding to put the culinary danger out of his mind, he settled back down to continue his training. He soon reached the peak of the 3rd level, confirming that his miscellaneous roots were indeed far from ordinary. Chuan sighed, noticing that Dong Xue had finally given up on serving him her rather questionable culinary creations. He wondered why it was getting so late, and she still hadn't arrived with the usual delivery of vegetables. Stepping outside, he greeted a group of disciples, noting it had been quite a while since they last spoke. He asked if they had seen Dong Xue, but they quickly looked away, claiming they hadn't seen her at all. Something felt off. Their expressions were far too strange, and he sensed that something had gone wrong. He wondered if they were simply being cold because he hadn't handed out any snacks over the last few days. He apologized to the sisters, explaining he had been far too busy with his cultivation to visit them properly. To make amends, he began handing out treats, making sure there was enough for everyone to have a share. However, to his surprise, they told him they didn't want the snacks anymore, a rare occurrence, to be sure. They insisted they had no use for them, even claiming they didn't need him to go hunting for them anymore. One of them addressed him formally as senior brother Chinchuan, telling him not to waste his resources on them. At this point, he knew something was definitely hidden, and he demanded they tell him exactly what happened. The girls were taken aback by his sudden display of power, which felt as formidable as an outer sect disciple. They whispered that he must have reached the chi refining stage, wishing Dong Xue had possessed such strength. If she had, they lamented, things wouldn't have, but they stopped themselves mid-sentence. Chinchuan pressed them harder, his voice rising as he demanded to know what had happened to Dong Xue. He reminded them that in her absence, he was the one in charge of these spirit fields and deserved an answer. Finally, they confessed that Dong Xue had been attacked and injured, which immediately sent a shock through him. They explained that after she left his room yesterday, she had suddenly felt a strange surge of spiritual energy. After a brief session of cultivation, she had actually managed to reach the 1st level of chi refining. Chinchuan realized Dong Xue had broken through, wondering if it was because he had been practicing different techniques simultaneously. The overflowing spiritual energy must have benefited her, and reaching the 1st level of chi refining was certainly a good thing. That level met the standard for outer disciples, and Dong Xue, seeing how hard he had been working lately, wanted to prepare something special for him, so she headed straight to the outer sect dining department. He cut them off, already guessing the rest. The classic story of arrogant people looking down on others, no doubt. It was no wonder the other disciples had suddenly become so distant and cold toward him. They explained that as mere servants, going to the dining department without permission was technically breaking the rules. He dismissed that nonsense immediately. He wasn't about to let anyone get away with laying a hand on his people. He told them to follow him to the dining department to show those outer sect bastards exactly what the real rules were. To be honest, they were about to receive a very rude awakening. At the department, a bully wondered what kind of day it was, having just taught a lesson to one arrogant servant. Now another group had arrived, making him question if the Qingyun sect had any discipline left at all. He mocked them as nobodies, though he couldn't help but notice these servants were getting prettier by the day. Qinchuan's voice cut through the air, demanding to know exactly who had laid a hand on Dongxue. The bullies laughed, asking if anyone recognized him, wondering if he meant the charming girl from this morning. One of them remembered her well, specifically noting her impressive figure with a leering grin. He claimed it was a pity, but a lowly servant simply didn't deserve to eat alongside the likes of them. Another added that senior brother Zhou had been kind enough to invite her to eat with them, but she had refused, claiming she had to deliver food to some important person. An important person, indeed. They mocked the very idea that a mere servant could possibly know anyone of actual importance. Qinchuan looked at him coldly, asking if he was the one who had laid a hand on Dongxue. The bully sneered, asking what if it was him, since Qinchuan was nothing more than a lowly servant leader. He taunted him further, asking if a mere servant actually had the courage to strike back. He dared Qinchuan to try, but Qinchuan simply replied that he didn't want to get his hands dirty. The bully laughed, telling him to stop pretending and go ahead and call for help if he could. He joked that if Qinchuan were truly someone important, then he himself must be a true disciple. Suddenly, a sharp voice rang out, calling his behavior insolent and demanding respect for true disciples. The newcomer asked how he dared to insult such a rank, leaving the bullies completely stunned. We see the crowd recognize him immediately. It was senior brother Yu, an actual true disciple. The bullies panicked, wondering if this legendary figure had really been summoned by a mere boy. One of them realized the truth, noting that Qinchuan had just crushed a jade talisman moments ago. Since senior brother Yu appeared right after that, there was no doubt who had called him here. They began to wonder about Qinchuan's true identity, shocked that he could summon such a person with such effortless ease. To be honest, they were starting to regret their life choices. The bully, Zhou Sanggu, trembled as he bowed, offering his terrified greetings to senior brother Yu. Ignoring the bullies entirely, Yu turned to Qinchuan and warmly asked why he had been summoned. He wondered why Qinchuan was at the outer sect dining department when he could eat at the inner sect. At that moment, Sanggu realized he was finished. This servant was clearly a person of immense power. He stood there frozen, while Qinchuan calmly told senior brother Yu that there was no need for the inner sect. He remarked ironically that as a smelly servant, he wasn't even allowed to enter this outer sect kitchen. Senior brother Yu scoffed, asking who would dare speak such nonsense when Qinchuan could go anywhere he pleased in Qingyun. Qinchuan pointed directly at the bully, calmly identifying him as the one who had spoken those words. He added that the man had accused him of putting on an act, claiming Qinchuan wasn't even worthy of eating with him. Dongxue chimed in, explaining through her tears that she only wanted Qinchuan to have a decent meal. Terrified, Zhou Sanggu stammered that he had no idea who Qinchuan really was, begging for mercy from the great master. He pleaded for his life, while the onlookers whispered that Sanggu had finally kicked a steel plate this time. The crowd began to wonder if Sanggu would actually die here, though most assumed it wouldn't go that far. After all, as a true disciple, Yu was forbidden by sect rules from killing disciples of the outer sect. Senior brother Yu smiled coldly, agreeing that while he couldn't kill an outer sect disciple, crippling someone's cultivation was perfectly within his rights. He then turned to Qinchuan with a question. He asked how Qinchuan wanted to handle him, and Qinchuan wondered aloud if destroying a cultivation base was difficult. Yu assured him it was easy, producing a specialized treasure that could get the job done instantly. Seeing how simple it was, Qinchuan asked if he might be allowed to handle the punishment himself. Senior brother Yu agreed, though he seemed a bit surprised by the request. To be honest, so was everyone else. To ensure no one could claim he was abusing his power, Qinchuan offered Sanggu a fair chance. He proposed a one-on-one duel. If Sanggu could win, his cultivation would remain untouched. Senior brother Yu immediately protested, noting that Sanggu was an outer sect member while Qinchuan was only at the third level of qi refining. He reminded Qinchuan that he only possessed a miscellaneous root, but Qinchuan insisted on the duel since Sanggu had suggested it first. With all the disciples watching, Qinchuan asked senior brother Yu to step back and not interfere with the outcome. Sanggu couldn't believe his luck, thinking that facing a miscellaneous root was a gift from the heavens themselves. Qinchuan knew perfectly well that his opponent was at the third level of qi refining, making this the ideal first stop on his cultivation journey. He decided to use the man as his first target, leaving the crowd stunned that the boy actually dared to challenge Senior Sanggu to a duel. The onlookers wondered if he had lost his mind, considering Sanggu was known as a genius among the outer sect disciples. Looking at the boy's appearance, they assumed he had only just begun his training, which meant his miscellaneous route would be a massive disadvantage. Dongxue pleaded with him to let it go, telling Qinchuan that they had already made their point and there was no need for more. She begged him not to get hurt over someone like Sanggu, but Qinchuan realized that even his friends didn't truly believe in him yet. To raise the stakes, he added a new condition. This would be a battle to the death, where life and limb were both on the line. He turned to senior brother Yu, noting that since he wasn't a true disciple, there should be no legal issue if he ended the man's life. Yu was internally panicking, wondering what kind of madness had suddenly possessed his young ward. He knew that if anything happened to Qinchuan, the sect master would likely skin him alive for failing to protect the boy. He urged Qinchuan to think twice, and the crowd was baffled to see a true disciple acting so nervous over a simple duel. Sangu, meanwhile, began to think the boy was all bark and no bite, feeling a sudden sense of relief that he might actually survive this. He told senior brother Yu that since the boy was brave enough to propose it, he would be a coward not to accept the challenge. Sangha challenged him to sign the life and death contract, a grim document that would seal their fates in the coming fight. We see that this is the ultimate pact of cultivation combat. Once signed, there is absolutely no room for regret or turning back. Senior brother Yu looked at Chunchuan and finally realized the boy's resolve was far firmer than he had initially imagined. Without a moment of hesitation, Chunchuan agreed to sign the contract. Yes, he was quite serious about this. Dongxue cried out for him to stop, but as Chunchuan looked at her, he noticed just how badly she had been injured during the earlier scuffle. Seeing her wounds, he decided the man deserved to die even more, even as senior brother Yu warned him not to be reckless. Dongxue sobbed that it wasn't worth risking his life for her sake, but Chunchuan simply asked who said he was doing this for her. He reminded them that from his very first day at the spirit fields, he had promised to protect all the girls there. Since this man had the audacity to insult him so directly, he would have to pay the price. It was time to fight. Chunchuan called out to the crowd, making sure everyone saw that it was his opponent who had proposed the life and death contract. He asked them to spread the word if anyone tried to cause him trouble later, ensuring the truth of this duel was known. Sangu sneered, telling the boy that if he was so intent on seeking death in the cultivation world, he would gladly oblige. With a shout that he wouldn't be holding back, Sangu drew his blade and lunged forward. To be honest, he looked quite confident. He assumed Chunchuan was frozen in fear by his overwhelming aura, telling the boy to simply stay still and die. Senior brother Yu cursed under his breath, realizing that because of the contract, he was legally forbidden from interfering. He lamented Chunchuan's reckless behavior, convinced that the boy's impulsiveness had finally led him into a disaster. He decided he had to notify the sect master immediately, but before he could even move, the exchange was already over. The crowd looked around for Chunchuan, wondering if he had been defeated in a single, pathetic blow. Instead, we see Chunchuan calmly telling the girls it was time to leave, remarking that the outer sect's dining hall smelled foul. When asked if the fight was over, he told them to be quiet and let him finish his dramatic exit in peace. The onlookers were left whispering, asking who had actually won this high-stakes death match. Some were certain that senior brother Chunchuan must have been the victor, despite the confusing speed of the clash. And yet, the man named Sangu was still standing there, seemingly unhurt. No one could quite figure out what had just happened. It had all happened in a single flash. One moment they clashed, and the next, the boy was simply walking away. They wondered why Sangu wasn't moving. Had he won? To the crowd, any other outcome seemed completely impossible. But deep down, Sangu felt something terrifying. His internal meridians and his very heart had been completely shattered. As the disciples called out to him, Sangu's body finally gave out, collapsing as the life left his eyes. The crowd was in shock, whispering that the boy had actually defeated senior brother Zhou. This father and son duo were proving to be more dangerous than anyone imagined. Senior brother, you realized the gravity of the situation. He knew he had to take this matter directly to the sect master immediately. Suddenly, an elder arrived, demanding to know what had just flown past, and why everyone was gathered there like a confused flock of sheep. The disciples stammered in fear, trying to explain to the elder that something terrible had happened to senior brother Zhou Sengu. The elder scoffed, asking why Sengu was lying on the ground like that. To him, it looked like a complete lack of decorum. One of the disciples stepped forward, trembling as he began to explain the events that had just unfolded before their eyes. The elder's face twisted in rage. He couldn't believe that someone had the audacity to commit murder in broad daylight within the sect. He demanded to know where the villain was, declaring that he would personally hunt him down and bring him to justice. He roared that the sect had no room for such evildoers, vowing to split the culprit in half the moment he found him. However, a disciple quickly warned him that he couldn't interfere, as the two had engaged in a formal life and death contract. The elder wasn't satisfied, arguing that they had no right to hold such a duel without the presence of a sect elder to witness it. But as it turned out, there had been a witness. The disciples pointed out that senior brother Yu had been there the entire time. The elder paused, surprised to hear that the elite disciple Yu Guangming was involved. He wondered what had brought him there. The disciples explained that Guangming had been called over by the villain himself, noting that the two of them seemed to be very close friends. They added that the two were likely still together nearby, asking if the elder still wanted to go and demand justice for Sengu. The elder's bravado vanished instantly. He snapped at them to shut up, deciding right then and there that he had never even visited the scene today. Meanwhile, we see Chunchuan stop and wait as senior brother Yu catches up to him. He looked back with a knowing smile. He teased the senior, asking if he had come back because he regretted giving away the soul-nailing spikes. Guangming laughed at the suggestion. Guangming assured him that since he had given him the magical tools, how they were used was entirely up to Chinchuan. He insisted he would never dream of taking them back, even offering to give him 20 or 30 more if he truly needed them. Chinchuan laughed and told him to hand them over, noting that everyone in this sect seemed to have more money than sense. Guangming brushed it off as a small matter, then curiously asked where his junior brother was planning to head next. He replied that since no one likes the servants, they were simply heading back to their quarters to eat their humble rations. Guangming told him he was being far too modest, explaining that the real reason he had chased after them was quite different. He was actually there on the sect master's orders to bring Chenchuan and all the junior sisters along with him. They were invited to dine at the sect master's great hall, a prospect that left the girls absolutely stunned. They realized with excitement that this meant they would finally get to meet the sect master in person at the great hall. One of them whispered that she never imagined she would ever visit such a prestigious place in her entire lifetime. They knew that it was only thanks to Chinchuan's incredible performance that they were being granted such a rare honor. They thanked Chinchuan profusely, while Guangming noted that bringing a few extra guests along wouldn't be a problem at all. Deep down, Guangming felt that since Chinchuan had shown such potential, it was best to let the sect master see him immediately. He turned to his junior brother with a smile, asking if he was ready for them to set off together. Chinchuan agreed, deciding that a trip to the sect master's great hall was indeed a fine idea. As they boarded the spirit boat, the girls marveled at the view, remarking on how beautiful the vessel truly was. It was a dream come true for them. They never thought the day would come when they'd actually ride on a spirit boat. They reminded each other to thank Brother Chuan for the opportunity, and he simply nodded in agreement. We see that they had already stopped calling him Senior Brother Chinchuan in favor of the much more affectionate Brother Chuan. They cheered, declaring that they would always support the best brother they could ever ask for. However, Chinchuan noticed something different, asking Senior Brother Yu if this was a different spirit boat than his previous one. Guangming admitted that thanks to Chinchuan and Uncle Zhang Wo, the sect master had rewarded him with this brand new vessel. Chinchuan complimented him, noting that Senior Brother Yu had certainly upgraded to a very impressive new spirit boat. He then jokingly asked what had happened to the old one, nearly tripping over his own words in the process. Guangming replied that if Chinchuan liked spirit boats so much, he would be more than happy to simply give him the old one. He even suggested giving him the new one instead, perhaps feeling a bit too generous in the heat of the moment. Changing the subject, Chinchuan mentioned they had left the scene early and asked what had become of that man named Zhou. This prompted Guangming to ask a question of his own, wondering what Chinchuan's current cultivation level actually was. He was shocked that a single sword strike had been enough to completely shatter Zhou Sangu's internal meridians. When the girls heard the man was dead, they were amazed that Brother Chuan had become so incredibly powerful. One of them swooned, declaring him a handsome hero for defeating the enemy and joking about wanting to start a family with him. Chinchuan told them they could discuss that later, claiming he was currently just at the ordinary peak of the 3rd level of qi refining. Guangming was floored. The 3rd level was one thing, but the peak, especially since he had been a mere mortal just 2 days ago. Chinchuan simply shrugged it off, suggesting he was just naturally gifted and possessed both good looks and talent. Suddenly, Dong Xue pulled him aside, her mind racing at the thought of someone reaching the 3rd level in only 2 days. Guangming realized that Chinchuan was even more of a prodigy than he imagined and felt he must report this to the sect master immediately. Chinchuan looked at Dong Xue and teased her, asking why she was pulling him away and if she also wanted to confess her feelings. Dong Xue told him to be serious, reminding him that he had actually killed a person and a fellow disciple at that. Chinchuan smirked and asked if she was suddenly developing a saint-mother complex by feeling pity for the enemy. He warned her that having such a soft heart was a dangerous thing in their world. He pointed out that in any story, those who are too merciful are usually the very first ones to meet a tragic end. Dong Xue paused, looking completely confused as to what a saint mother was even supposed to be. He explained that it was a case of misplaced sympathy, the kind that ignores right and wrong entirely. Dong Xue insisted she wasn't being soft, but was simply worried about how he felt after his first kill. She feared he might carry a heavy burden, one that could lead to inner demons during his future cultivation. Guangming let out a laugh, asking Dong Xue if she truly believed this man was suffering from any psychological burden. He then asked the group if they had any idea what Chinchuan actually did before he came to the mountain to practice. One girl guessed he was a prince, while another was certain Brother Chuan must have been a wandering hero. They imagined him as a man of great wealth and wisdom, begging Senior Brother Yu to stop keeping them in suspense. They assumed he was the young master of a great clan, but as it turned out, they were all very wrong. Guangming revealed that before coming here, Chinchuan was essentially a bandit, a total bandit. The girls were skeptical, noting that a common bandit surely wouldn't possess Chinchuan's refined temperament. Chinchuan took that as a compliment, though he noted that calling him a bandit was merely a colorful metaphor. Guangming clarified that Chinchuan was no ordinary man, even back when he lived in the secular world. On the surface, he seemed to be leading his village in farming, but in secret, he was actually planning a rebellion. A rebellion? The girls were impressed, thinking that such a bold move was exactly what they expected from him. They marveled at the scale of his ambition, which, to be honest, was quite large for a simple villager. One of them swooned again, declaring him a real man and finding herself liking him more with every passing second. Chinchuan wondered how Guangming knew about the rebellion, suspecting his own father might have let the secret slip. Dong Shue still couldn't believe it, arguing that even a rebel should feel something after taking a life, but she was mistaken. Guangming recounted the time he had descended the mountain to slay beasts and ended up wounded in Chinchuan's village. And it was in that moment that he overheard Chinchuan and his father calmly discussing exactly how they planned to kill him. Guangming asked if she truly believed a mortal who dared to plot the murder of an immortal would suffer from a psychological burden. Chinchuan was genuinely surprised, wondering aloud how his senior brother knew he and his father were planning to take him out back then. Guangming chuckled, noting that as a cultivator, reading the intentions and expressions of a mere mortal was quite simple. It was, in his professional opinion, an incredibly easy task to see through such a transparent scheme. Chinchuan felt a wave of awkwardness wash over him and decided it was best to drop the subject immediately. Guangming agreed, reminding him that they were brothers now and that the past was best left where it belonged. We see the ship arrive at the sect master's great hall, and Guangming signaled for everyone to disembark. As they approached, they spotted a figure in a rather undignified position, and Chinchuan doubted it could actually be the sect master. The figure looked up, greeting Chinchuan with a warm smile, as if he hadn't just been caught in a compromising pose. Chinchuan didn't hold back, asking the sect master why on earth he was sticking his backside up in the air like that. He suggested the man show a bit more decorum, but the sect master simply brushed it off as if it were nothing at all. The sect master then changed the subject, asking why Chinchuan had brought a group of labor disciples to see him today. Chinchuan persisted, demanding to know what he was doing in that position, which, to be honest, was starting to irritate the old man. The sect master took a deep breath, telling himself to be patient and urging Chinchuan to ignore the minor details. He encouraged the boy to focus on his cultivation, noting that it had been a few days since they last met. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. Chinchuan had already reached the peak of the 3rd level of qi refining, a total monster. Even Zhangwo was only at the 2nd level, yet here was Chinchuan, already on the verge of hitting the 4th. Chinchuan told him to calm down, suggesting the sect master stop acting like someone who had never seen the world before. The sect master regained his composure and asked again what business had brought them there. Guangming stepped forward to explain that Chinchuan and the labor disciples had been cornered and harassed at the outer sect dining hall. Guangming explained that he brought them here for a meal, which caused the sect master to explode in fury, wondering who would dare to be so bold. He demanded to know who was making life difficult for his nephew, asking if they had a death wish, while the others watched the sect master's outburst. Guangming calmly noted that the offender had already been cut down by Chinchuan, prompting the sect master to praise the boy's decisive action. He handed Chinchuan a token, telling him that if anyone else lacked the vision to respect him, he should simply show them this. The sect master declared that everyone would have to kneel before him, then ordered Xiaoyu to go and find some workers immediately. He commanded that a new dining hall be built in the spirit field area, insisting that the standards match those of the elite true disciples. Furthermore, he ordered that Chinchuan's residence be upgraded, though Chinchuan felt a bit awkward about the sudden special treatment. Despite Chinchuan's polite hesitation, the sect master insisted it be upgraded to the very best level available, no exceptions. He told himself that the nephew of Chun Sheng deserved nothing less, looking at the boy with immense pride. The sect master then asked how the meal had been, and Chinchuan enthusiastically replied that it was absolutely wonderful. He told his uncle that he had no idea what he had been eating over the last few days, which, to be honest, sounded like a bit of a complaint. He described the dishes as being quite unique, a word that immediately piqued the sect master's curiosity. When asked just how unique they were, Chinchuan promised to let him try some another day, which the old man found quite touching. After promising to make it happen, the sect master asked if there was anything else he could provide for his favorite nephew. Chinchuan mentioned that while his sword was excellent, it was sorely lacking a high-quality scabbard to match its power. He noted that his previous one was far too ordinary, and the sect master immediately gestured for him to come closer. He handed over a new one for Chinchuan to use, and the boy thanked the sect master for the generous gift. The sect master waved off the thanks, noting they were family, but then pointed out that since he'd accepted the gift, it was time for some answers. He asked Chinchuan to explain exactly what was going on with his cultivation, but the boy simply claimed he didn't know himself. The sect master was left in disbelief, realizing the little rascal was happy to take his gifts while keeping all his secrets to himself. The boy was playing dumb at the most critical moment, making the sect master realize that perhaps his own vision had been a bit too limited. The onlookers were stunned, never imagining that Chinchuan's background was quite this powerful. They noted how incredibly close he seemed to be with the sect master, though something about the dynamic felt slightly off. In fact, it almost looked as if the sect master was the one trying to win favor with Chinchuan. One of the observers couldn't help but feel an even stronger urge to follow the young man, regardless of the absurdity of the situation. When the others arrived, Chinchuan casually asked if they had eaten, inviting them to have a bite and not to be too picky. He apologized for the lack of good dishes, prompting the sect master to remind the brat that they were currently standing in his grand hall. The elders began to inspect him, confirming with shock that he was indeed at the 3rd level of chi refining. Actually, he was at the very peak of the 3rd level, leading them to call him a monster, though even that felt like an understatement. To reach such a height with a miscellaneous spirit root was nothing short of a miracle in their eyes. Chinchuan looked toward the elderly woman, wondering if she could control the group of old men who were making such a fuss. She told everyone to be quiet before turning to Xiaochuan, asking him to explain how he had suddenly reached the 3rd level. She leaned in, truly curious to hear the secret behind his rapid progress. To be perfectly honest, Chinchuan told her he had no idea. He simply practiced and practiced until he reached the 3rd level. She sensed that this father and son duo definitely possessed secrets regarding the path of the sword that had yet to be uncovered. Regardless, she decided that as long as they remained in the Qingyan sect, it would be a great blessing for them all. Chinchuan then asked if she had eaten yet, inviting her to join him for a meal, and she happily agreed. She sat down, deciding that she would indeed accompany him for a bite to eat. The disciples whispered in awe, realizing this woman was the supreme elder whose statue stood at the sect entrance. Seeing Chinchuan call such a legendary figure grandmother made them realize their understanding of his status was still far too small. The disciples were left scratching their heads, wondering how Brother Yu could have ever claimed Chinchuan was just a common bandit. It was a shock to everyone, including the Supreme Elder herself, who looked at the boy with newfound affection. She kindly asked if he had encountered any difficulties in his cultivation lately, and to her surprise, he admitted that he had. He explained that his recent training had been draining his resources far too quickly, leaving his pockets a bit light. Without a second thought, she offered him 5,000 spirit stones, asking if that would be enough to get him by. The sect master tried to interject, noting he'd just given the boy 3,000, but his mother quickly told him to shut up. She turned back to Chinchuan, asking what else he might need, while he played the part of the humble grandson living in the servant quarters. He sighed, mentioning how much he missed her, but lamented that his low cultivation made the journey to the back mountain far too long. To solve this, she immediately offered him her personal spirit boat, the fastest vessel in the entire sect. Chinchuan beamed, thanking his grandmother, and telling her she was the absolute best, which she clearly enjoyed hearing. The old woman was in high spirits now, delighted by her grandson's praise. She urged him to speak up if there was anything else on his mind, and after a brief pause, he admitted there was one more thing. There was indeed a small matter he wanted to bring to her attention. He hesitated for a moment, acting as though he were far too embarrassed to even mention it. She encouraged him to speak boldly, and so, feeling emboldened, he finally decided to share his request. He explained that a close friend of his had recently been injured by an outer sect disciple, and he wondered if she could help. He asked if she might be willing to provide some medical treatment for this sister of his. When the elder asked who it was, he called out for Dongxue to come forward and present herself. Dongxue paid her respects to the Supreme Elder, who noted that the girl was quite striking and elegant. The elder was puzzled, however, wondering why someone with a mid-grade spirit root was stuck working in the servant quarters. The Supreme Elder was genuinely confused, asking Dongxue why someone with a mid-grade spirit root wasn't already in the outer sect. Dongxue stammered, claiming she simply enjoyed farming spirit herbs, but the other servants weren't about to let that lie stand. They quickly spoke up, explaining that Sister Dongxue had stayed behind entirely for their sake. It turned out that outer sect male disciples often came to the servant quarters to cause trouble and harass them, and so, Dongxue had remained in the servant quarters specifically to protect her fellow workers from these bullies. Unfortunately, servants have no access to cultivation resources, which had left Dongxue's progress stalled and her strength low. Because she was constantly shielding others, she was frequently injured in these one-sided confrontations. The elder checked her and found a body full of hidden, unhealed wounds, before turning a sharp gaze toward Chunxing. She demanded to know how he was managing the sect, leaving the sect master to apologize profusely for his oversight. He promised to start a full rectification immediately, but Chinchuan stepped in, telling his grandmother that wouldn't be necessary. He declared that since he was staying in the spirit fields, he would naturally be the one to protect these sisters from now on. Besides, he argued that conflict between disciples wasn't necessarily a bad thing for the sect's growth. Deep down, however, he was thinking of something much more practical than growth. If fighting were banned, he'd have no way to establish his authority, or more importantly, no way to make a profit. The elder found his reasoning sound enough, and decided to let the matter of sect discipline drop for the moment. Instead, she focused on healing Dongxue, producing a glowing medicinal pill for the young woman. She noted it wasn't quite as potent as the one Chinchuan ate, but it was more than enough to heal her internal injuries. It would even slightly improve her natural talent, a gift that left Dongxue completely stunned and hesitant. She worried it was far too precious, but Chinchuan urged her to take it quickly while his grandmother was offering. He joked that such an opportunity wouldn't come twice, and the elder kindly insisted the girl accept the gift. The elder told her to take it right there, promising that no one would disturb her while she recovered. Dongxue bowed deeply, her voice trembling as she thanked the Supreme Elder for such a rare gift. The other servants whispered among themselves, noting how lucky Dongxue was to receive medicine from such a high-ranking figure. But they also knew she deserved it, considering how genuinely kind she had always been to Qinchuan. They joked that she spent every day racking her brain to cook for him, all because of how much she cared. It was clear to everyone that she wanted to do more than just cook for him. She likely wanted a future by his side. Qinchuan simply nodded, making a mental note of their words as he watched the scene unfold. Suddenly, the elder realized something was wrong. The pill's power was far too violent for someone of Dongxue's low cultivation. The servants panicked, immediately asking if Sister Dongxue was in any real danger. They pleaded with the Supreme Elder to step in and save her life before the energy overwhelmed her. They begged the other elders as well, reminding them all that Dongxue was a truly good person who didn't deserve this. The elder ordered everyone to move back, calling on the other elders to help stabilize the girl's heart and meridians. As they moved to assist, Qinchuan felt a strange sensation and wondered what was happening. He noticed that the violent spiritual energy within Dongxue was actually resonating with his own internal power. He stepped forward, asking the elders to wait and let him try to help, but his grandmother told him not to cause trouble. She warned him that this wasn't a game. A single mistake could cost the young woman her life. He reassured her, saying he liked Dongxue too much to be reckless, and asked her to simply watch what he could do. Suddenly, a dense wave of water attribute spiritual energy erupted from him, which was impossible for someone with his trash spirit root. The elders were stunned by the sheer purity of his energy, wondering how such a thing could even be possible. With just a single drop of his spiritual essence, the violent energy inside Dongxue instantly began to calm down. The elders watched in disbelief, realizing that what they were seeing was the power of the laws themselves. Dongxue bowed, thanking the Supreme Elder for the pill, but the elder told her there was no need for such thanks. In fact, she noted that Dongxue should probably be thanking Qinchuan instead. When she turned to thank him, he simply brushed it off, acting as if it were no big deal at all. The elder looked at them both, marveling at the father and son, one with a legendary spirit root, and the other possessing the power of laws. The Qingyun sect had truly struck gold this time. She knew this secret had to be kept safe before turning her attention back to Dongxue. Qinchuan blinked, suddenly sensing a change and asking why her cultivation felt higher than his own. Dongxue checked her internal state and realized, to her shock, that she had already reached the 6th level of qi refining. The 6th level? That was an incredible jump, prompting Qinchuan to ask his grandmother to test her spirit root immediately. The grandmother chuckled, telling him not to be so impatient as she beckoned the girl forward. She instructed her to place her hand on the testing stone, and Dongxue obeyed with a nervous heart. The result was undeniable. She now possessed a high-grade spirit root, a feat that left everyone breathless. The other elders were baffled, wondering what kind of medicine could possibly upgrade a spirit root like that. They called it a grand stroke of luck, knowing that no ordinary pill could ever produce such a terrifying effect. It was the power of the laws at work, increasing her cultivation by 5 levels and upgrading her very foundation. Dongxue tried to thank the Supreme Elder again, but was told once more that it wasn't necessary. As a new genius of the sect, they were happy to pave her way, noting that Qinchuan already had the top-tier techniques she would need. The elder suggested that Qinchuan could simply pass those techniques on to her when the time was right. Dongxue acknowledged the order, and with everyone full and satisfied, the grandmother declared it a happy ending for all. As they prepared to leave, Qinchuan noticed his grandmother reaching for something and asked what she was doing. She handed him a jade slip, explaining it was her personal transmission talisman, and told him to keep it safe. Then, her tone shifted as she warned him never to use that mysterious power of his again in public. It was a trump card, she explained, to be used only when his life was truly on the line. Qinchuan nodded, knowing that a man's wealth can often be his undoing, and his grandmother smiled at his quick wit. She assured him that she would place a restriction on the others to ensure today's secrets never left the room. It was better to be safe than sorry, and Qinchuan thanked her for her careful protection. A little later, as they traveled back, Dongxue looked up and remarked on how beautiful the starry sky appeared from the carriage. Qinchuan asked what was on her mind, and she admitted she was feeling a bit homesick before asking him the same. She wondered if a young master like him ever felt the pangs of missing a home. He looked away, quietly mentioning that since his parents passed away, he hadn't really had a home to speak of. The others shared his sentiment, admitting that they, too, were essentially alone in the world. One of them explained that they had been picked up by an old manager in the servant quarters as a child. They had never known a true family, which prompted a sudden, cheeky suggestion for brother Qinchuan. He joked that if Dongxue were willing to have a child with him, he might finally feel like he had a home of his own. Dongxue told him they could discuss that much later, and Qinchuan decided it was time to change the subject. He declared that from now on, the spirit fields would be their home, and his home as well. And so, with a new sense of belonging, the group finally headed back to their own territory. However, upon arrival, Chinchuan was stunned by the sheer speed of the sect's construction crew. In just a single afternoon, his humble courtyard had been completely transformed into something unrecognizable. We see Chinchuan standing in disbelief, thinking that these cultivators are truly beyond all reason when it comes to construction. Senior brother Yu explained that the dining hall was already finished, and this entire manor was now ready for them. He mentioned it would be convenient for the two of them, both for his visits and for him to pass down his cultivation techniques. Chinchuan was certain his father was behind this, wondering why the old man was so insistent on Dongxue staying there. Dongxue told him it was no matter, as she planned to move out and live with the other sisters once she learned the techniques. He told her to stop overthinking it, as moving out wasn't going to be as simple as she imagined. Old Shin wouldn't allow such a thing to happen anyway, so he suggested she just settle in and live there in peace. With a sigh, he invited her to go inside and take a look at what was now their new home. She insisted she would find a way to repay this favor, while Chinchuan noted that the house was actually quite impressive. He began pointing out the grand hall and the fine chairs, until something caught his eye that made him curse in shock. Startled by his sudden reaction, Dongxue asked him what on earth he was doing. She explained that she didn't like owing favors and had already guessed the general nature of what was expected today. She suggested that after they were together, they would be even, but Chinchuan quickly told her to wait a moment. He admitted she was beautiful and had a great figure, but he felt that these things required a bit more decorum. He told her not to rush, as that day might come eventually, but for now, they should focus on the cultivation techniques. She agreed, telling him that if he ever changed his mind, he should just find her and she wouldn't refuse him. As for the techniques, she decided it would be better to start their lessons the following morning. Chinchuan was utterly baffled, wondering how a woman who looked so cold could have such bold and uninhibited thoughts. Even as a transmigrator, he found it a bit much to handle, so he tried to push those thoughts out of his mind. Instead, he decided it was best to hurry up and study the remaining 2 cultivation techniques he had yet to master. He felt a wave of comfort wash over him, having never expected that after practicing all 5 techniques, they would actually begin to merge together, and just like that, he had reached the 6th level of qi refining. Dongxue remarked that his cultivation speed was truly remarkable, though he simply brushed it off as average. We see him notice a crowd gathering and wonder what they are up to, learning that since returning from the Sectmaster's Hall, the others felt their breakthroughs coming and had all reached the 1st level of qi refining. He noted that was quite good, as reaching the 1st level meant they could finally enter the outer sect. Dongxue confirmed that was indeed their plan, which, to be honest, was only human nature. After all, staying here meant remaining a mere servant, while the outer sect offered the status of a formal disciple. She asked if he was angry about their departure, but he simply wondered why on earth he would be. She pointed out that their breakthroughs were entirely thanks to him, and that without his help, they might never have set foot on the path of true cultivation in their entire lives. He dismissed the concern, noting that their legs belonged to them, and they were free to walk where they pleased. In his eyes, everyone has the fundamental right to choose their own destiny. However, he privately hoped that they wouldn't end up regretting the decision later on. She asked if he truly felt that way, and he replied with a shrug, asking what else he could possibly think. To him, the status of an outer sect disciple was like a test for them, one he had no intention of blocking. Seeing his perspective, she felt a sense of relief and told the others they could all come over now. The group rushed toward him, shouting for Chinchuan to look at their progress. They proudly announced they had reached the 1st level, thanking him for leading them onto the immortal path. One even shouted their love for him, causing Chinchuan to quickly tell them to stop right there. Chinchuan told them to save the talk of having his children for later, asking why they weren't heading to the outer sect. They asked why they would ever leave, noting that as long as they followed him, they had everything they needed. An outer sect disciple only receives 2 or 3 spirit stones a month, which, let's be honest, is hardly a fortune. Besides, those disciples have to go on dangerous missions, while here they only need to tend the spirit fields. And of course, there was still that persistent offer to bear his children, a plot twist he certainly hadn't anticipated. Things were developing in a direction that was quite different from what he had imagined. He urged them to think it over, reminding them that staying here meant they would always just be servants. They didn't seem to mind, arguing that with Chinchuan backing them, no one would dare look down on them anyway. If he was their leader, they were happy to be his loyal attendants, especially since staying meant, well, they were still very focused on that having children idea, which tells you everything you need to know about their loyalty. Feeling generous, Chinchuan announced that qi gathering pills were on him today, telling everyone to take as many as they liked. As they moved along, we see him notice another group and ask who all those people are. Dongxue explained that they were servants from the other sectors of the mountain. Today happened to be the designated day for all the servants to collect their monthly qi gathering pills. He asked why his own group wasn't in line, only to learn they'd have to wait for hours just for 3 measly pills. By the time their turn usually came, only the defective leftovers were remaining. A frustrating cycle, to be sure. But now that they had Chinchuan, they saw no reason to go and endure those cold, condescending stares from the officials. He realized they were treating him like a personal ATM, but then a different thought struck him. He decided that passing up free resources was a fool's errand, so he declared they would all go and claim their share. The others felt it wasn't really necessary anymore, but he simply looked at them, wondering if they understood anything at all. He told them it was like riding a bicycle to a bar. You save where you can so you can spend where it counts. As they started walking, the girls were left completely baffled, wondering what on earth a bicycle was. They were equally confused about the bar part, which, to be fair, wasn't a term they had ever heard before. One of them urged the others to stop overthinking it, as Brother Chunchuan was already walking away. We see them arrive at the distribution point, and good heavens, there really were a lot of people there. Dongxue noted that the sect had many servants, but unfortunately, she and her sisters previously had no cultivation. They used to be unable to push through the crowd, but now that she had her own cultivation, things were different. She wasn't afraid of the crowd anymore, though her friend pointed out that with Chinchuan leading them, they wouldn't need to push at all. Suddenly, a mocking voice cut through the air, wondering who exactly was speaking with such bold confidence. It turned out to be a group of men who recognized the girls from the Spirit Field district. The leader asked with a greasy smile if they had missed their big brother over the last few days. He repeated the question, leaning in as if he expected a warm welcome from the sisters. Chinchuan turned to Dongxue and asked, quite bluntly, who this particular idiot was supposed to be. She explained that he was Wang Hu from the housing district, a man who had been a constant nuisance. Before Chinchuan arrived, Wang Hu had frequently come to the Spirit District to harass the sisters, a classic villain move. Wang Hu ignored him, telling Dongxue she looked even more charming than the last time they met. He asked if she had reconsidered his previous offer regarding a certain dual cultivation method. When she told him to get lost, he only laughed, claiming he loved it when she showed a bit of spice. Chinchuan chimed in, suggesting that if he liked spicy things, he should go home and rub chili peppers on his backside. He added that the sensation would be much more soul-stirring, prompting a furious Wang Hu to demand who he was. The crowd began to whisper, noting that Dongxue never let men get close to her. Yet here, she was with this stranger. Wang Hu grew even more agitated as he watched Chinchuan boldly place an arm around Dongshue's shoulder. He barked at the boy to take his claws off her, declaring that Dongxue belonged to him alone. Chinchuan sighed, wondering if these low-level thugs could possibly find a more cliché way to start a conflict. He asked if they had anything fresh to offer, or if they were content being predictable side characters. One lackey pointed out that he seemed to be insulting them, which, to be fair, Wang Hu had already realized. Wang Hu decided that since the newcomer was so arrogant, it was time to teach him the rules of being a servant. He ordered his men to attack, but a man named Ergu suddenly rushed forward, begging them to stop. Ergu pleaded for mercy, explaining that Chinchuan was from his hometown, but Wang Hu wasn't in a listening mood. The brute decided that since they were from the same town, he would simply beat them both together. But before the violence began, he demanded they hand over their spirit-gathering pills for the month. Ergu quickly pulled out his own pill, offering it up to appease the bully. He begged for leniency, reminding Wang Hu that he had been serving him since the very day they joined the sect. Chinchuan paused, asking Ergu if he had truly been waiting on this man hand and foot all this time. He seemed genuinely surprised that Ergu had endured such treatment since the beginning of his journey. Wang Hu laughed, asking if Chinchuan wanted to join in on the service, which, naturally, was a terrible idea. He demanded the pills again, and Chinchuan simply asked if he was sure he really wanted them. Wang Hu told him to stop wasting time and hand them over immediately. Chinchuan smiled, telling him to see if he could actually swallow the pills he was about to receive. Suddenly, a massive amount of pills appeared, an entire vat's worth, in fact, leaving everyone in total shock. The crowd gasped, estimating that there must have been several thousand pills piled there. Even if they stayed to collect their allowance for 100 years, they wouldn't see a fraction of this haul. Chinchuan gestured toward the vat, inviting Brother Hu to come and take the spirit-gathering pills he wanted so badly. Stuttering in disbelief, Wang Hu demanded to know who Chinchuan actually was, his confidence completely shattered. Chinchuan simply replied that he was just an ordinary servant of the Lintian sect, telling him there was no need for fear. He urged Brother Hu to step forward, noting that a man of his stature surely wasn't afraid of a common laborer. He repeated that he was just a simple servant, mocking the bully to come and claim his prize if he dared. One of the lackeys whispered to Wang Hu that this newcomer didn't look like someone they should be messing with. Wang Hu snapped back that he already knew that, deciding right then that today wasn't the day for a confrontation. He muttered a classic threat about settling the score later before turning to make a hasty retreat. The onlookers scoffed, noting that Wang Hu shouldn't have tried to act tough without weighing his own worth against Chinchuan. They agreed it was pure folly to try and steal resources from someone as formidable as their brother Chinchuan. Ergu offered his sincere thanks, though he couldn't help but ask where on earth all those pills had come from. Chinchuan brushed it off as a trifle, turning the conversation back to Ergu's obvious mistreatment. Ergu tried to claim it was nothing, but Chinchuan noticed the distance that had grown between them in just a few days. He asked if Ergu had forgotten how he used to protect him back in their village, demanding the full story. Ergu finally sighed, explaining that after being assigned to the kitchens, things had started small. At first, the others only asked him to help out with a few extra chores and minor errands. But as time went on, they saw his gentle nature as a weakness and their demands became increasingly cruel. Chinchuan shook his head, disappointed that his friend had forgotten his lessons, and decided they would find an opportunity tonight. Chinchuan promised to help him get his revenge, but Urga hesitated, reminding him they were both just lowly servant disciples. He warned that Wang, who had a cousin who was an outer sect disciple, a much higher rank than their own. Chinchuan scoffed at the idea, asking if being an outer sect disciple was really supposed to be that impressive. He challenged his friend, asking why he couldn't be a man and act a bit more like his brother Chinchuan. He looked Urgu in the eye and demanded a simple answer. Would he stand up for himself or not? It was a direct question, repeated with intensity. Was he in or was he out? Urgu began to stutter another, but Chinchuan cut him off, telling him he could keep his excuses to himself. For the sake of their long friendship, he decided to give Urgu a little more time to think it over. He set the deadline. Urgu had until Chinchuan finished waiting in line for his turn. As we see Chinchuan approach the counter, the attendant realized who he was and insisted there was no need for him to wait. The junior disciple offered to personally deliver the pills to him, hoping to stay on Chinchuan's good side. Nearby, a disgruntled voice grumbled about why he should get special treatment, even if he did have some mysterious background. The crowd began to murmur that the sect was supposed to treat everyone equally, regardless of who they knew. They complained that they had been waiting for ages, and after all, he was just another servant disciple like them. He shouldn't have privileges, they argued, until the attendant snapped at them to shut up or leave without their pills. The attendant asked the crowd if they had any idea who they were talking about, mentioning the name of Zhou Sengu from the outer sect. The name caused a stir, but some were confused, noting that Zhou Sengu was a formidable senior brother. Then the news broke. Zhou Sengu had been killed yesterday, taken down by a single arrow from a powerful master. Some mocked that perhaps Chinchuan was just an acquaintance of the late Zhou, which meant very little now that the man was dead. The attendant looked at them like they were fools, revealing the truth. It was Chinchuan himself who had ended Zhou Sengu with that single arrow. Chinchuan looked around, wondering why everyone was suddenly bringing all of this up. He joked that they were making him sound like some kind of terrifying monster. Since the crowd seemed so concerned with fairness, he offered to simply wait in line like everyone else. But the disciples quickly changed their tune, insisting that Chinchuan go first and that they weren't in any rush. The attendant chimed in, telling Chinchuan that a man of his status shouldn't have to worry about such formalities. He dismissed the wait as a trivial matter and beckoned Chinchuan forward to receive his due. He then handed over the pills intended for Chinchuan and the fairies of the spirit fields. Chinchuan noted the large amount, but the attendant explained that someone of his unique standing required a different supply. It was only right, the attendant argued, as he presented the extra rations with a respectful bow. Chinchuan smiled at the gesture and turned to Urgu, asking him if he was paying attention. He remarked that if one has power and doesn't use it, they are simply a fool, a harsh truth in this world. He promised that as long as Urgu stayed by his side, Brother Chinchuan would look after him. With the pills in hand, he asked his friend one last time if he still had any doubts. Urgu finally found his resolve, declaring that he wouldn't return to the fire prevention unit after all. He decided that revenge was necessary, as he didn't want to bring shame to Chinchuan or the village chief of Wonyu village. Chinchuan laughed, telling him it was about time he remembered he had come here with his father. He told Urgu there was no reason to be a coward, especially considering his current connections. It seemed Urgu had been bullied for so long that he had forgotten the influence of the village chief. With a shake of his head at his friend's behavior, Chinchuan told him to follow him back. And so, Chinchuan decided that his first order of business would be finding Urgu a proper new job. As they walked, Dongxue spoke up, feeling there was something she needed to discuss with Chinchuan. She explained that the spirit fields had never actually seen a precedent for what he was suggesting. Specifically, the idea of a man staying there was unheard of, and if he planned to settle his friend Urgu nearby, she feared the other sisters would find the arrangement quite inconvenient. Chinchuan pointed out that he was a man himself, but she quickly stammered that he was somehow different. He couldn't help but notice her blushing lately. It seemed her icy persona was finally starting to melt. He told her not to worry, as he had no intention of keeping Urgu there, before calling his friend over. When Urgu asked what was happening, Chinchuan told him he was heading to the neighboring spirit beast zone. He had already sent word ahead, ensuring that Urgu wouldn't be arriving as a mere lowly servant. Instead, he was to be the deputy supervisor of servants, a promotion that left Urgu nearly speechless with gratitude. But Chinchuan told him to save the thanks for later and prepare himself, for tonight was the night for revenge. He insisted that Dongxue come along too, though she initially refused with a firm shake of her head. He playfully threatened to stop teaching her martial arts, earning himself a sharp look and a quiet insult. And so, under the cover of a dark and windy night, the time for settling scores had finally arrived. Urgu recognized the tools Chinchuan brought out, remembering them from the days they caught spies back in the village. Chinchuan grinned, noting how familiar they looked, and suggested that since Urgu knew them so well, he should pick one to give that bully Wang who the full interrogation experience. Urgu hesitated, his old fears resurfacing as he stammered that he might not be up to the task. Chinchuan sighed, telling him to stop being useless and to think of his father's expectations. He reminded him of the folks back in Wonyu village and how hard he had worked to finally make it out. He asked Ergu if he had worked this hard for a chance at immortality just to be treated like this. Ergu realized he didn't want to be bullied anymore. He wanted to live freely and be his own man. He wanted respect, but he wasn't quite sure how to go about getting it. Finally, he made up his mind. He was going to do it. After all, wasn't it time for revenge? We see that instead of weapons, Chinchuan had brought out two rather unassuming small bottles. Erga hadn't expected him to use such a method, thinking to himself that it was a bit dirty. Dongxue was confused by the term, wondering what could possibly be inside those two bottles. Chinchuan explained that one contained a special knockout drug, while the other was a bit more unique. When she asked what the second one was, he simply told her she would find out soon enough. In reality, it was a potent breeding stimulant meant for livestock, a truly mysterious choice, to say the least. A little later, Ergu returned and confirmed to Chinchuan that everything had been prepared as planned. He couldn't help but ask how Chinchuan had come up with such a creative, if slightly bizarre, way to get even. He admitted he learned it all from his father. Years ago, when the neighboring village tried to steal their land, his father had taken him out in the middle of the night. They had sneaked into the rival's camp and used this exact same trick. He asked his father if he had forgotten how it all ended. It was a hilarious memory. The next day, when those tough guys showed up to seize the land, every single one of them had shaky legs. They were all clutching their backsides as they were easily chased away. Yes, clutching their backsides, a rather undignified sight, to be honest. The realization began to dawn on the captives. They suddenly realized they didn't actually want to know the details of what was coming next. Terrified, they demanded to know what was happening, shouting for the men to get away and pull their pants back up. They begged for mercy, calling the act shameless. But as our protagonist knew, when you're dealing with shameless people, you have to use equally shameless methods. He then signaled to Ergu that it was time to begin. Ergu looked at him and asked if, once things were finished inside, Chinchuan would really be able to go through with it. Chinchuan confirmed that he could. He then told Dongxue to stay behind while he and Ergu prepared for the next step. He told Ergu to follow him inside. It was finally time for their long-awaited revenge. We see them approach their captive as Chinchuan mockingly asked if this wasn't the great brother who, wondering what had happened to his daytime bravado. He noted how withered and defeated Hu looked now. Hu, recognizing them, could only gasp out Ergu's name in shock. Hu accused them of plotting against him, but Chinchuan simply pointed out that since they were standing right there, it hardly counted as a secret plot. Hu cursed them, swearing that he would never let them get away with this, and promising to kill them both. The scene that followed was, to put it mildly, quite a spectacle of chaos and undignified suffering. It was a moment where all of Hu's former pride seemed to have completely faded away. Hu continued to scream insults, calling Ergu a bastard and a coward as the situation grew more desperate. He threatened that if he didn't kill Ergu, he would give up his own family name. A bold claim, considering his current position. Ergu mocked him, repeating the threat. He remembered how every single time Hu bullied him, he had made that same empty promise. Hu, still trying to cling to his authority, demanded to know why Ergu thought he could suddenly rebel against him. Panic finally set in. Hu begged Ergu to stay back and stop approaching, his voice trembling with genuine fear. He pleaded for mercy, admitting he was wrong and desperately begging Ergu to spare him. Ergu coldly reminded him that back when he was the one begging for mercy, Hu hadn't shown even a hint of compassion. He noted that Hu should have thought about this day much sooner. In a final act of desperation, Hu even tried calling him Brother Ergu. Hu sobbed out a final apology, but as we can imagine, it was far too little and far too late. Chinchuan considered going in to check on them, but decided against it. The sounds of deep-seated resentment were quite enough. He wondered if it wouldn't be kinder to end it quickly, but he knew that sometimes, a quick end isn't enough to satisfy a lifetime of hatred. Chinchuan noted that if Ergu didn't understand yet, he soon would, because some people in this world can only truly die when the exact right moment arrives. Just then, Ergu emerged, calling out to him. He told Chinchuan he was finished and offered his thanks, though Chinchuan dismissed the gratitude as unnecessary between brothers. He asked if the man inside was actually dead, but Ergu admitted that he wasn't. Deep down, Ergu confessed he didn't have the heart to finish it, earning a small, amused sigh from Chinchuan. He told Ergu to head back with Dongxue, prompting the boy to ask what Chinchuan intended to do alone. He repeated his earlier thought, some people can only meet their end when the time is truly right. And since he had been looking for a place to practice his skills, this seemed like a perfect opportunity. He decided to test a newly developed technique on the captive, a bit of experimental justice, one might say. He presented his would palm fire persimmon technique, expressing a cold hope that Hu would enjoy the experience. With a final, mocking goodbye, he left Hu behind, whose subordinates soon rushed in to check on him. Hu jolted awake in a panic, desperately asking if those two devils had finally departed. His men confirmed they were gone, mentioning that Chinchuan had taken one last look inside before leaving. Hu immediately began cursing his own men, furious that they had stood by while Ergu beat him. They offered a weak apology, claiming that their legs had gone soft with fear during the confrontation. They insisted they wanted to help but were simply paralyzed, which only served to make Hu even more livid. He ordered them to go to the inner sect and find his cousin, telling them to report that he was nearly murdered. He promised to give up all his resources for revenge, demanding to know if they understood his instructions. The men quickly agreed and hurried off to fulfill his request, leaving the defeated leader behind, who sat there, seething with hatred as he whispered the names of Ergu and Chen Xuan into the empty air. He sat there alone, swearing that he would make sure they both met a miserable and painful end. Nearby, his men wondered what was wrong with Brother Hu, though they noted his temper was never exactly pleasant. We see the subordinates deciding it was best to keep their distance, recalling the strange events of the previous night. One whispered that he had heard Hu screaming from inside his room, a sound so pitiful it hardly seemed human. A new figure arrived, sighing that Hu's temper was still as volatile as ever despite his many warnings. Hu's face lit up with desperate relief as he cried out, grateful that his older cousin had finally arrived. He immediately began to wail, claiming he had been victimized by villains and suffered a truly tragic fate. His cousin, Meng, told him to get to the point and cut the act. He wasn't in the mood for drama. To be honest, Meng only bothered with him because of the steady supply of pills and snacks Hu provided. He found it quite annoying that Hu spent every day using his name to bully others and cause trouble. Hu quickly explained the situation, laying out his version of the events that had led to his humiliation. He begged for revenge, but Meng noted that if the attacker wasn't a simple servant, things would be complicated. Hu realized that justice, or his version of it, wouldn't come cheap, and he looked at Brother Meng nervously. He offered up his entire life savings, promising everything he owned if Meng would only help him get even. Seeing the payment, Meng's attitude shifted instantly. He declared that anyone bullying his brother must have a death wish. Meanwhile, we returned to Ergu, who was busy thanking Chinchuan for helping him settle the score and finding him work. Ergu insisted he couldn't possibly accept the pills and snacks Chinchuan offered, but Chinchuan told him to take them. He reminded Ergu that years ago, he and his father had been looked after by Ergu's family in much the same way. Dongxue chimed in, telling Ergu to accept the gift, as Chinchuan would be genuinely unhappy if he refused. She noted that Chinchuan was always good to his friends, and with these resources, their lives would finally improve. Chinchuan assured him that once he began training with the Qin family, no one would dare bully him again, especially after hearing about last night. Ergu declared himself a real man now, though he admitted he was still a step behind Chinchuan, and offered his sincere thanks. Chinchuan thanked them both, gently explaining that the Lintian district didn't accept male disciples, so Ergu shouldn't take it personally. He mentioned that senior brother Zhu next door was a good man, and following him would ensure Ergu stayed safe from trouble. Ergu nodded knowingly, remarking that he understood this place was essentially Chinchuan's personal harem. He promised not to be a disturbance, leaving Dongxue to wonder what on earth he meant by the word harem. Chinchuan quickly urged Ergu to head over to Brother Zhu's place, and Ergu obeyed immediately, calling out a final goodbye. He vowed to work his hardest, while elsewhere, we see a group gathering as someone noted the area was getting quite lively. Everyone was present, and Chinchuan was surprised to see Wang Hu appearing so soon, wondering how his wounds had healed so quickly. Hu scoffed, claiming those few shallow cuts could never truly stop him, and declared that today, he would have his revenge. Chinchuan noted that while the wounds might have closed, Hu was still walking with a rather suspicious, tight-lipped waddle. Hu snapped at his sharp tongue and turned to Meng, pointing out that these were the people who had humiliated him. He begged Meng to teach them a lesson, but Meng seemed lost in thought, staring at the scene with growing hesitation. As Hu urged him to attack, Meng realized this idiot had led him to a residence far too grand for a simple target. Deep down, Meng was terrified, wondering what kind of powerful status someone living in such a mansion must actually hold. Hu cried out in confusion when Meng suddenly struck him instead, demanding to know why he wasn't hitting the others. Meng told him to shut up, denying any brotherly connection, before turning to Chinchuan to beg for forgiveness for his intrusion. He pleaded with the young man to act as if he had never even come, while Hu remained utterly baffled by the sudden betrayal. Meng cursed the fool under his breath, certain that Hu's inability to read a situation would eventually be the death of them both. Chinchuan observed dryly that it seemed Brother Hu hadn't come to apologize today, to which Hu could only sputter in helpless rage. Hu spat out the word thug, cursing the fact that Meng had taken his resources but refused to do the job. He told them all to wait and see, swearing a bitter oath that he would eventually find a way to kill them all. Chinchuan sighed, wondering aloud why some people find it so hard to just stay alive, and why Hu was in such a hurry to meet his end. Hu stammered in fear, telling him not to come any closer, but Chinchuan simply told him to remain calm. He promised not to lay a finger on him, noting that by his calculations, the fire at the ranch should be starting just about now. Suddenly, a strange and powerful heat began to radiate from within Hu's own body. As Hu screamed for Meng to save him, the older man could only watch in horror at such a terrifying display of power. Meng realized with a shudder that he hadn't even seen how it was done, concluding that this was a man one must never provoke. He addressed Chinchuan as junior brother, pointing out that since Hu was already dead, it would be best to pretend he was never there. He suggested they simply let the matter drop, but Chinchuan found the idea of dropping it rather amusing. After all, one doesn't simply bring a crowd to someone's doorstep to cause trouble and then expect to walk away when things go south. Chinchuan asked if he looked like someone who could be easily trifled with, prompting a nervous Meng to ask what he wanted instead. The answer was simple. Meng was to hand over his artifacts and every single thing of value he had on his person. Only then could he leave, but Meng bristled, offering an apology while warning the young man not to push his luck too far. He advised Chinchuan to show some mercy, claiming he wasn't actually afraid of him, which, to be honest, was likely a lie. Chinchuan found this quite interesting, asking with a dry smile if Meng actually intended to trade blows with him. As the tension rose, Dongxue stepped forward and softly suggested to Chinchuan that perhaps they should just let it go. She had heard that Meng was one of the top talents in the outer sect, far more dangerous than the Zhou Sangu he had faced before. Meng insisted he had no desire to become Chinchuan's enemy, but warned that if he were forced into a corner, he would fight back. He prepared himself for battle, standing firm as a supposed top talent of the outer sect, though we can see the situation was far from over. The onlookers could only marvel at how much stronger Chinchuan had become, whispering their amazement to one another. He hadn't even drawn his sword this time, leading one to admit they knew he was strong, but not this strong. To be perfectly honest, the sheer scale of his power had exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. Chinchuan noticed a change in the crowd, wondering why his usual supporter, Yue, wasn't the one cheering him on. When asked if he had finally agreed to start a family with her, he quickly decided that such a step was quite unnecessary. He turned back to his opponent, asking if he still wanted to fight, while Meng realized he was completely outmatched. Deep down, Meng was shaken. He had no way to fight back and couldn't even fathom how Chinchuan had performed such techniques. Offering a hasty apology, Meng admitted he was in the wrong and presented his own treasure, the Chu Wu Dai, as a peace offering. He begged Chinchuan to accept it, proving that when one stops making threats, they might actually keep their life. Chinchuan decided the man was a talent of sorts and, with a dismissive wave, told him he was free to go. He advised Meng to be more selective with his followers in the future, a lesson the older man claimed he would take to heart. With a final respectful bow, the top talent of the outer sect made his exit as quickly as his dignity allowed. The followers cheered, noting that sticking with Chinchuan always paid off, and swore to protect him at all costs. However, curiosity soon got the better of them, as they wondered how he had suddenly become so incredibly powerful. After all, his spiritual root was supposed to be inferior, and they were dying to know his secret. When one of them expressed a sincere desire to grow stronger, Chinchuan gave a small, knowing nod. He leaned in, telling them that he would share the secret with only one person. The secret, as it turned out, was simply to practice with unwavering diligence, which is often the hardest path of all. Turning his attention back to Dongxue, he realized she was still there and decided it was time for them to head out. And so, we see them depart together, heading off to discuss the much-needed reforms for the spiritual fields. We open on a master praising his disciple, noting how much his cultivation had progressed that day. But his pride turns to shock when he sees the state of his student, crying out in disbelief at the sight of Meng. The master is furious, declaring the situation preposterous since the boy had been perfectly fine that morning. He demands to know who did this, appalled by the cruelty of someone who would pierce through all four of his limbs. Deep down, Meng has already accepted his defeat, telling his master to let it go because his skills were simply inferior. The master pauses, wondering why Meng hasn't used any medicine for his wounds or reached for his Chu Wu Dai treasure. With a heavy heart, Meng admits that he gave the Chu Wu Dai to his opponent as a form of compensation. This revelation only fuels the master's rage, as he feels the insult has gone far beyond what is tolerable. He reasons that only a few in the outer sect could hurt Meng, wondering if someone from the inner sect was responsible. He dismisses the idea as nonsense, certain that even an inner sect member wouldn't resort to such extreme methods. Meng finally speaks the truth, explaining that his attacker wasn't from the inner sect, but from the labor bureau. He begins to recount the events, explaining how a simple worker from the labor bureau had defeated him. The master is incredulous that a mere laborer has a private mansion, but he refuses to let the injury to his disciple slide. He insists on a confrontation, while Meng begs him to stop, insisting he was the one in the wrong all along. Meng feels lucky just to be alive, but the master believes he is the only one who can truly judge right from wrong. He tells his disciple to wait there, determined to see for himself what kind of person they are dealing with. A little later, the master arrives at the gates and is immediately taken aback by the sheer scale of the place. He marvels at the luxury, noting that the mansion is grand enough to belong to an elder of the inner sect. He realizes why Meng tried to stop him, feeling a touch of warmth that his disciple was actually trying to protect him. However, since he has already come this far, he decides he must go inside and demand an explanation. He tells himself that if things go south, he can handle it, though he can't help but curse the sneaky nature of the situation. Convinced that no good can come from such secrecy, he prepares himself to deliver a proper thrashing to whoever is inside. Suddenly, a voice calls out, asking his father why he's there, to which the older man casually replies he's just stretching his old bones. Noticing Ergu is also present, the young man offers a polite greeting to the village chief. The chief beams, admitting that being called village chief still feels just right, before handing something over. Ergu offers his thanks, just as Dong Shuejing appears, prompting a surprised reaction from the group. The two exchange confused glances, each asking the other why they've suddenly decided to show up at this hour. Dong Shui greets the elder with grace, and the father responds warmly, clearly charmed by the young woman's manners. He asks how she's been getting along with his son, offering her a gift with a smile that says more than words. Ergu watches the exchange with a dry look, feeling the sting of blatant favoritism just because he isn't a girl. Seeing her hesitation, the son encourages Dong Shui to take it, assuring her it's perfectly fine. He adds that his father certainly isn't lacking in treasures, so she finally accepts with a polite bow. The father calls her a good girl and notes the late hour, suggesting they should head back to their cultivation. He mentions he has a private matter to discuss with Xiaochuan, and Dong Shui obediently takes her leave. Once they are alone, Xiaochuan asks what's on his mind, only for his father to look at him with a mix of frustration and affection. He scolds his son for being so passive while living near such a beauty, worried that at this rate, nothing will ever happen. He wonders aloud if he'll ever live to hold a grandson, causing Xiaochuan to sigh in exasperation. Xiaochuan points out that they are cultivators now and should focus on higher things, but his father isn't having any of it. The father declares that even if he were building rockets instead of cultivating, he still expects a daughter-in-law in the family. Xiaochuan finally gives in to the lecture, telling his father to stop the preamble and get to the point. Xiaochuan asks his father to get to his real purpose, and the older man chuckles, impressed by his son's intuition. He admits that nothing gets past him before dropping the news that he is preparing to head out. Xiaochuan wonders if the sect master is actually letting him go, or if perhaps there is another reason. His father confirms his suspicions, explaining that the system has assigned him a specific task. When asked if it's dangerous, he shrugs it off, telling his son there is no need to worry. He notes that he has a protector anyway, which eases Xiaochuan's mind as he asks about his father's current cultivation level. The father describes his progress as merely SOSO, despite having reached the peak of the 9th level of Qi refining. Xiaochuan is genuinely shocked, realizing his father is already on the verge of foundation establishment. His father points out that since Xiaochuan is at level 6, it's only natural for an immortal seed, like himself, to be higher. And here we see him decide to share a little something special with his son. He explains that he came across this particular item by chance just a few days ago. The technique is quite unique, but he is confident that Xiaochuan will be able to master it. He suggests using it alongside some pills to achieve twice the result with half the effort. The manual is titled the Nine Heavens Jade Thunder Scripture, a name that sounds incredibly powerful. Xiaochuan asks why his father isn't practicing it himself, though we know how parents tend to be. They always insist on saving the very best things for their children, after all. Xiaochuan teases him, guessing that the system probably gave him a technique that's even better than this one. Caught in the act, his father simply smiles, says his goodbyes, and prepares to depart. As an afterthought, he mentions he caught someone acting suspiciously at the door and gave them a bit of a thrashing. Xiaochuan asks if everything is all right and if the intruder was a man or a woman, only to learn it was just an old man. His father tells him to toss the intruder far away on his way out, calling him a little rascal with a smirk. The intruder, meanwhile, groans about being ordered around while nursing a body that is absolutely throbbing with pain. He feels as if he's been hit by 800 punches, shocked that such a villainous person exists within the sect. It's a pity he didn't see the man's face, but he finds some small comfort in the fact that his Chu Wu token wasn't stolen. He decides that once he gets Xiaoming's token back, he will report this entire villainous incident to the sect authorities. He is determined to find this person, absolutely certain he must track down the scoundrel who did this to him. Suddenly, a voice calls out for him to stop, noting with some amusement that he's quite durable to have woken up so fast. The old man looks up and asks if the young man living in that particular manner is the stranger's junior. The father admits that's more or less the case, prompting the old man to explain his business there. After explaining, the old man asks if the father could kindly return his beloved disciple's Chu Wu token. The father plays along, acting as if he understands perfectly, and tells the old man to follow him. The old man is overjoyed, thinking to himself that there are still plenty of good people left in the world, bless his heart. The father, however, is thinking that since the man targeted his son, he's lucky he wasn't stripped of everything he owned. He remembers Xiaochuan's request to throw the trash far away and wonders exactly where the best dumping ground might be. A little later, someone else stumbles upon a body and wonders who this pighead is lying on the ground. Judging by the robes, he realizes it's an elder, which leads to a rather sudden and vulgar realization. It turns out the man beaten to a pulp is none other than Elder Zhao. The elder finally blinks his eyes open, only to be greeted by the sight of his own disciple hovering over him. The disciple frantically asks how he is, and the master insists he is fine, despite looking like a bruised fruit. He claims his head is just a bit dizzy, leaving the disciple in awe of his master's supposed resilience. The disciple is skeptical, thinking that being beaten this badly can't possibly be fine, unless, of course, these injuries were caused by that same boy. He suddenly remembers the man from earlier and realizes that the person who came out of the manor must be connected to the kid. Since that man emerged from the same residence, he concludes they are definitely working together. To be honest, it's a logical leap. Elder Zhao declares he must find the sect master immediately, appalled that such a vicious person is lurking within their own sect. His disciple suggests waiting until his wounds heal, but the elder refuses, insisting on going exactly as he is, bruises and all. He wants the sect master to see the physical evidence of the villainy that has taken root in their peaceful community. As he hobbles along, onlookers wonder why he's bothering to go out in such a state. It's a bit much, really. We see the surrounding disciples whispering, noting they've never seen Elder Zhao look quite so pathetic and aggrieved before. Rumors begin to fly that he was actually beaten up by someone from the humble labor area. Someone points out that Brother Lu Meng suffered the same fate yesterday, leaving everyone shocked that the labor area is suddenly so dangerous. They wonder who could be so powerful, while Elder Zhao finally reaches his destination, crying out for the sect master to give him justice. The sect master looks at him, startled by the sight of the elder's swollen face, and asks what on earth happened to him. He notes that the elder's eyes are so swollen they're practically shut, which is a rather unfortunate look for a man of his standing. The sect master asks for the details of the incident, and Zhao begins to recount the events of the previous day. He insists that this is the truth and begs the sect master to severely punish the wicked person responsible for this mess. Hearing that the labor area is involved again, the sect master starts to have a very bad feeling about where this is going. He asks if Zhao saw the culprit's face clearly, and the elder confirms he saw it perfectly, offering up a visual description for the master's eyes. He points to the image of the man, but the sect master's reaction is one of pure, stunned silence. It's a face he recognizes all too well. The sect master asks with a trembling voice if he is absolutely certain it was this man, leaving Elder Zhao a bit confused by the tension. The master then asks how long Zhao has been with the sect, to which he proudly replies that he's been on the mountain since he was 6. Elder Zhao admits he can no longer remember exactly how many years he has spent within the sect. It has been a lifetime, really. He looks at the sect master, wondering if his long years of service are finally being recognized and if justice is about to be served. The sect master sighs and tells him simply to pack his things and leave the sect forever. Zhao is stunned, asking if he heard correctly, but the master merely repeats that it is time for him to head down the mountain. Alternatively, the master suggests that Zhao and his disciple could go and apologize to that young boy. Zhao is utterly bewildered. He cries out that they were the ones who were beaten, asking where the justice is if the victims must be the ones to apologize. The sect master explains that justice, in this case, is simply the reality of that father and son. Despite having joined the sect less than half a month ago, one of them has already reached the 6th level of Qi refining. The other is at the peak of the 9th level, the future sect master of Qingyun himself. The weight of the situation finally sinks in for Zhao. He understands now and is told to leave. Meanwhile, we see the young boy marveling at his progress. He has reached the 7th level, thanks to his father's cultivation technique. He hadn't expected to gain the power of lightning through this method, leading to yet another breakthrough. The 7th level feels like a distant dream come true. He wonders aloud just how long he has been cultivating. It has already been 3 days. He knows he isn't as fast as his father, but with enough resources, he feels unstoppable. He believes he can eventually reach the Great Earth threshold. Just then, a voice calls out to Junior Brother Chun. The boy asks why they look so happy, only to realize it's the same people from before. To be honest, they're becoming a regular fixture. He wonders if they think his spirit field is some kind of marketplace. Dong Shua tells him not to be so hasty. The older man introduces himself as Zhao, an outer sect elder of their Qingyun sect. He is also Lu Meng's master. Looking at the pair now, they don't exactly look like they're here to cause any more trouble. The boy remains cautious, asking Elder Zhao what business could possibly bring him back here again. Zhao begins by explaining that, just a few days ago, his disciple had provoked the young boy for no reason at all. He explains that he has specifically brought him here today to offer a formal apology to his young friend. The disciple steps forward, addressing him as Junior Brother Chun, and prepares to show a bit of humility. He admits he was reckless to clash with his junior brother before and asks him not to take the offense to heart. We see the wisdom in this approach. After all, it is quite difficult to strike a man who greets you with a smile. In the world of cultivation, one must pay attention to social graces and human relationships. It makes things move much faster. The boy responds that Elder Zhao is being far too polite, noting that sometimes a fight is simply the quickest way to get to know someone. He claims he and senior brother Lu felt like old friends from the start. To be honest, he is being remarkably magnanimous. Zhao tells Lu Meng to learn from this example, mentioning that he still has a few matters left to attend to. He prepares to take his leave, though he quickly changes his mind about rushing off just yet. He decides to sit for a while, claiming that as an old Taoist, he shouldn't meddle too much in the affairs of the youth. He suggests that since the boy and Lu Meng are both young, they should have plenty of common topics to discuss. The boy wonders what old Zhao is playing at. He feels lucky enough just to not be trading blows with Lu Meng. He struggles to think of what they could possibly chat about, but then Lu Ming breaks the silence. Lu Ming asks if junior brother Chun has had the chance to walk around since coming up the mountain. He has, of course. The boy mentions he has visited the Spirit Heaven area, the outer sect, and even drops by the sect master's main hall quite often. The mention of the main hall leaves Lu Ming stunned, wondering when he might finally be allowed to visit such a place. Seeing all the apology gifts, the boy asks if he wants to go, offering to take him along next time as a gesture of goodwill. Lu Ming quickly declines, not daring to trouble his junior brother, and tries to steer the conversation elsewhere. He asks instead if junior brother Chun has ever visited the markets and fairs located at the foot of the mountain. Lu Ming explains that the Qingyun market is jointly managed by the 4 great families under the Qingyun sect. The boy is surprised the sect has such a place, but Lu Ming hints there is much more to it than simple trade. He mentions a spot where one can enjoy fine wine, and where the young ladies are particularly refreshing to look at. Chen realizes his perspective was far too narrow. He had no idea Qingyun hosted such lively commercial interests. Looking at Chen's expression, Lu Ming assumes the boy is thinking something quite scandalous, which, to be fair, he probably is. Lu Ming notes that today's autumn air is crisp and refreshing, a perfect day for an excursion. He suggests they go together to appreciate the sights, asking senior brother Lu for his thoughts on the matter. Chen looks at him with a stern face, making Lu Ming wonder if he has completely misjudged the boy's character. Is he really not that kind of person? Lu Ming immediately begins to apologize for his perceived lapse in judgment. He admits he was being reckless and had no idea his junior brother was so upright. Truly, he never expected this. Chen exclaims in mock horror that such a den of vice could exist at the foot of their very own mountain. He tells Lu Ming to lead the way immediately, claiming that as a member of the sect, he must face this place head-on. He insists it is his duty to properly criticize such a location and restore the righteous spirit of the sect. He claims he is bound by duty, though we can see quite clearly that he is exactly that kind of person. Lu Ming is stunned, realizing that his junior brother is far more enthusiastic about this criticism than expected. Suddenly, old Zhao speaks up, announcing that he will go as well, strictly to help with the criticizing, of course. Chen asks the old man why he would want to follow them into such a vulgar and degenerate environment. Zhao realizes that in his sudden excitement, he let his true intentions slip out a bit too easily. He quickly claims he is only going to keep an eye on Chun, ensuring the boy doesn't pick up any unsavory habits. He argues that he must prevent Chun from returning and tainting the pure environment of the spirit fields. Old Zhao adds that Chen's father specifically asked him to keep a close eye on the boy, which, to be honest, is a very convenient excuse. Chen wonders if the old man thinks he's already part of the family, but he sighs and tells them all to just come along. Suddenly, Ergu appears, calling out to Brother Chen and expressing his surprise that such an errand was being planned without him. He insists on joining, claiming that following Chun was truly the best decision he ever made in his life. Chen reminds Ergu that they aren't just going for fun, they are representing the Qingyun sect itself. He explains that their mission is to strictly criticize such unhealthy trends. For Ergu, however, those trends sound quite appealing. The boy eagerly agrees, noting with a grin that this will be his very first time participating in such a criticism. Suddenly, Xiaolu appears, catching them off guard with her presence. Ergu immediately points the finger, stammering that it was Brother Chun who brought him along for this little trip. Trying to change the subject, Chen asks senior brother Lu how much further they have to go, only to learn they have already arrived. Lu Ming tells his junior brother to look down, and the sight that greets Chun leaves him completely speechless. Chen stares in disbelief, asking if this is really the market Lu Ming was describing earlier. To him, it looks less like a simple market and more like an entire fortified city. Lu Ming confirms that this is indeed the place. He explains that because many rogue cultivators live around Qingyun, the market had to be built on a much grander scale. Chen notices the massive crowds and is annoyed to find out there is an entry fee. Lu Ming explains that even a sect needs to fund its operations. Lu Ming approaches the guards, identifying himself as an outer disciple of the sect to gain passage. The guard verifies his identity and waves him through, telling the group they may proceed. However, the guard stops the others, much to Chen's confusion. It turns out sect regulations for outer disciples are quite specific. Outer disciples don't have the privilege of bringing guests for free. Everyone else must pay the entry fee, much to Lu Ming's embarrassment. Lu Ming apologizes to Chen, admitting he usually comes alone and had no idea such a rule even existed. Chen feels a bit awkward, thinking that Qingyun is far too stingy for imposing so many rules on its own people. The whispers from the crowd start immediately, noting that the leader of their little group is just a lowly outer disciple. It is a truly embarrassing display. They suggest it would have been better to just pay the entry fee quietly. Ergo leans in, whispering to Brother Chan that he came in such a hurry he didn't bring any spare change. Chen simply tells him not to worry, because when you're with him, money is the last thing you need to carry. He approaches the guard, admitting he doesn't have the cash, but wondering if a certain item might suffice instead. The guard grumbles that if he had a token, he should have shown it earlier instead of wasting everyone's time. He assumes it's just another outer disciple token, wondering why Chun is being so mysterious about a common item. Chen asks if verifying a simple identity really needs to take this long, while the guard finally takes a look. Suddenly, the guard's demeanor shifts entirely as he shouts for the entire squad to assemble immediately. The onlookers are confused, wondering what could possibly be happening with that specific token. Some whisper that it must be a fake, and if so, the boy has an incredible amount of nerve to try such a stunt. To forge a pass on Qingyun's own territory is essentially a death wish, or so the crowd believes. Chen himself is surprised, wondering if the token the sect master gave him is truly this powerful as the guards bow. The head guard trembles, apologizing for his earlier offense now that he realizes a true successor has arrived. He begs for forgiveness from the senior brother, realizing he nearly insulted the highest rank of disciple. The crowd is stunned. A true successor of Qingyun should be meeting with the great families, not visiting a market. And as we soon see, this isn't just any elite disciple from the inner circles of the sect. This is the personal true successor of the Qingyun sect master himself, a rank that commands absolute respect. Chen tells them all to stand up, casually explaining that he's just brought a couple of friends along for some fun. Chen tells them to stop making such a scene, asking if they can finally just head inside now. The guard quickly agrees, insisting that a true successor can bring as many people as he likes. He even offers to notify the leaders of the 4 great families, but Chen tells him to keep his arrival quiet. He commends them for their work and tells them to return to their duties. After all, he has no interest in formalities. If the 4 leaders showed up, he knew his chance for a fun night would be completely ruined. He quickly calls for Dongxue and Ergu to follow him, while Lu remarks on how impressive Chen truly is. Lu admits he never expected such a place to exist within the sect, but Chen tells him to stop using formal titles. Lu apologizes, explaining that he had no idea Chen was the sect master's personal successor and fears he caused offense. Chen tells him to drop the act, asking if he knows the 4 bonds that make men true brothers. When Lu looks confused, Chen lists them, studying together, fighting together, and facing trouble together. And the final bond, he explains with a grin, is exactly where they are heading right now. He urges them to hurry up, suggesting that since they've shared so much, they should forget about stiff etiquette. Lu is delighted to find that his junior brother is a man of culture, and he eagerly points the way. He tells them it's just ahead and asks them to follow him, while Chen offers a playful compliment to his guide. Chen suggests they go and critique the establishment properly, a sentiment they all seem to agree on. As they arrive, the atmosphere is lively, and they are greeted with immediate enthusiasm. A woman recognizes Lu immediately, calling out to him as the immortal Master Lu with a knowing smile. She mentions it has been quite a while since his last visit, though Lu quickly tries to shush her. Chen teases him, noting that Lu seems to be a regular at the very place they were meant to be critiquing. Lu can only stammer that it is strictly for research purposes, even as the staff welcomes the immortal back. Lu quickly introduces his companion, announcing to the staff that Chen is a highly distinguished guest he has personally invited. He asks them to prepare the Xian rank private suite, but the hostess apologetically informs the immortal master that there is a slight problem. It turns out the Xian rank suites are all currently occupied, leaving them in a bit of a logistical bind. She suggests moving them to a Huang rank room instead, noting that they simply arrived at a very busy time. Lu looks troubled, explaining that his status only allows him to book suites at the Xian rank or below. Chen watches this play out, thinking to himself that the universe seems determined to give him every opportunity to show off. He steps forward and asks the Mama-san to take a very close look at his own identity and status. He asks her quite directly what level of suite a man of his standing should be assigned. The hostess is no fool. She immediately understands and declares that such a noble young master is their most distinguished guest. She grants them the prestigious Heaven Rank No. 1 suite and personally invites them to follow her. She compliments Chun on his good fortune, promising him that the ladies at their establishment are truly exceptional. They soon arrive at the suite, and even Chun has to admit that the accommodations are quite impressive. He hadn't expected to find such an elegant room in a place like this, and the hostess is quick to agree. To show her gratitude for his visit, she offers to have the establishment cover all expenses for the Heaven Rank suite tonight. Chun waves the offer away, asking her if he looks like a man who is short on pocket change. He hands over a payment, demanding that she bring out their most expensive wine and their very best ladies. He tells her to summon them all for him immediately, and she scurries to comply with his request. But he isn't finished yet. He has one more grand announcement for everyone in the building. He declares that tonight, every single person's tab will be covered by young Master Chun. The hostess is stunned by the sheer amount of wealth on display and rushes off to make the arrangements. The hostess steps forward, addressing the crowd with a polite apology for interrupting their evening festivities. She asks for a moment of their patience, as she has a very special announcement to make to the entire room. The guests are puzzled, wondering why she is using a building-wide voice transmission for a simple message. They whisper among themselves, curious about what could possibly be important enough for Hongyang to announce personally. She tells them to listen closely, explaining that the guest in the Heaven Rank suite has a message for everyone. Tonight, every single expense at the Manhwa Pavilion will be covered entirely by young Master Chun. The room erupts in cheers as a man named Nyo Yudao raises his glass in a grateful toast to Chun. Another guest, Li Chuanfan, joins in the thanks, offering to show off a little performance in Chun's honor. Chun waves off their formalities with a smile, inviting everyone to join him in a collective drink. One observer grumbles to himself, annoyed that Chun is getting so much attention for what he considers a small sum. It clearly irritates him, but the celebration continues regardless as the wine begins to flow freely. The hostess instructs the ladies to provide the best possible service to their most distinguished guest. The first introduces herself as Chuntao from Shengjing, followed quickly by Xiaxiang, who greets him warmly. Then comes Qiulan from Jianghai, each woman eager to make a lasting impression on the wealthy young master. A string of introductions follows, with several more ladies proudly announcing they hail from the Jianghai region. Suddenly, a man named Wang Gang from the northwest chimes in, leaving everyone momentarily confused by his presence. The hostess quickly apologizes to Chun, explaining that the man was simply there to deliver the fruit platter. Chun tells them to skip the rest of the introductions and focus on taking excellent care of his two companions. Lu looks over in surprise, asking Chun why he is giving all the attention to them instead of himself. He asks if Chun isn't going to join in, but Chun simply tells them to go ahead and enjoy themselves. Chun tells himself that some beautiful sights are meant to be admired from a distance, without the need to get personally involved. Besides, he reasons that he already has Dongxue by his side, and he certainly isn't joking about that. He looks at the crowd, thinking that these women have been with far too many others, and he has no interest in leftovers. To him, Dongxue is far superior, though she reminds him firmly that she is only there to keep an eye on him. She warns him not to cross the line, but he simply brushes it off with a playful shrug. He asks her if she would prefer him to go embrace someone else and return home smelling of cheap perfume and powder. She finds the idea utterly repulsive, which leaves her wondering what he actually expects her to do. Eventually, she relents and tells him to just hold her instead, which, in his mind, is exactly how things should be. He feels a small sense of victory, certain he can handle her, just as the hostess addresses the crowd once more. To show proper respect for young Master Chun, she announces the arrival of the legendary Lady Huai. The name sends a ripple through the room, as Huai is known to be the absolute top star of the Manhwa Pavilion. Rumor has it she has never actually entertained a guest and remains pure, a rare thing in a place like this, naturally. The regular patrons are stunned, knowing that on any ordinary day, they wouldn't even catch a glimpse of her. As she appears, we see the crowd gasp, calling her a literal fairy because of her breathtaking beauty. One guest remarks that despite his many visits, this is the very first time he has ever seen Huai in person. Chen admits she is quite impressive, even briefly imagining what it would be like if she and Dongxue were together. But he quickly shakes the thought away, deciding it is better to let the idea go for now. Dongxue notes the woman's worldly air, briefly wondering if she would look better in those clothes, but she stops herself. She questions her own thoughts, wondering why on earth she would even consider doing such a thing for Qinchuan. The hostess smiles at the audience, telling the honored guests just how lucky they are to witness this moment. As it turns out, today is the very day that Huai is scheduled to make her official debut. The hostess wonders aloud which distinguished guest will be lucky enough to claim this rare flower. Suddenly, a voice rings out from the crowd, bidding 5,010 gold pieces. The room erupts in whispers, with people wondering if the bidder is mad or simply an incredibly wealthy young master. Dongxue turns to Chun, asking if he plans to compete for her since he seems to like her so much. She points out that 5,000 gold should be no problem for him, so why not join the fray? Chun admits that Huai is indeed beautiful and, more importantly, she is still untouched. While that fits his personal standards, he finds the idea of spending 5,000 gold for a single night quite steep. He tells himself that while he is certainly rich, he is definitely not a fool, or so he hopes. Dongxue quips that there isn't much difference, just as the hostess apologizes to the high-spending guest in room 2. We learn that Huai has her own set of principles, and money, apparently, isn't the only thing that matters. The crowd realizes that if money isn't the deciding factor, perhaps they all have a chance to win her favor. They urge the hostess to stop teasing and reveal exactly what the requirements are for the evening. The hostess explains that since her youth, Huai has always longed for the classic tales of scholars and beauties. Therefore, any guest who can compose an original poem will be granted the honor of entering her private quarters. The theme she chooses is the parting of lovers, a classic choice, if a bit sentimental. The patrons groan, complaining that as rough cultivators, they have no talent for such delicate literary pursuits. Shin thinks it's absurd to ask a group of warriors to write poetry, concluding that the girl must be lacking in common sense. Several guests beg for a different condition, but the hostess remains firm in her refusal. She reminds them that Huai's principles are absolute, even if someone were bold enough to try and use force. The hostess warns that if anyone tries to take her by force, Huai would rather die to protect her honor. One guest shouts for Huai not to worry, claiming that writing a simple poem is well within his abilities. Chun watches this with a smirk, thinking to himself that as a traveler from another world, poetry is his specialty. He tells himself that if he can't handle a bit of literary plagiarism, he might as well stop showing off entirely. With a confident air, he steps forward and calls out to the hostess, Hongyang, telling her to wait a moment. The crowd turns to look at young Master Chun, wondering if he is merely seeking attention with this bold move. Huai herself watches him, curious if he is trying to impress her or if he truly possesses such rare talent. He tells them all to watch closely, and then, with practiced ease, he begins to recite his chosen verses. As the last words leave his lips, the room falls silent before erupting into cheers for such a magnificent poem. One veteran cultivator remarks that in all his years of wandering the martial world, he has never heard a poem so deeply moving, though, to be honest, their praise doesn't matter much yet. The final decision rests solely with Huai, who approaches Chun with a look of genuine wonder. She softly asks him for the name of this beautiful and heartbreaking composition. Chun replies calmly, telling her the title is Cold Cicadas Chirping in the Chilling Rain. She offers her thanks, and then suddenly turns to leave, which, naturally, leaves the crowd very confused. Some wonder if Chin's poem wasn't good enough, but others quickly tell them to shut up and use their ears. They argue that this poem is a masterpiece without equal, though we see that some are just trying to flatter him. Others mock the situation, pointing out that since Huai left, all of Chin's posturing was likely for nothing. However, the hostess soon returns to announce that Huai has made her choice, and she offers Chun her congratulations. She invites him to follow her, as he has been granted the honor of a private meeting in Huai's personal quarters. The crowd erupts in disbelief, unable to contain their shock at what they just witnessed. Young Master Chun had truly won the favor of the lovely Huai, proving he was every bit as capable as rumored. One man mutters that he feels like a complete fool for ever doubting him, which, to be honest, he was. Another laments that his beloved Huai is about to give her first night away to a stranger. Chun himself is surprised, having never expected a single poem to cause such a massive stir. He realizes why the literary genius trope is so common in stories. It simply works. And he had to admit, using someone else's masterpiece felt remarkably satisfying. Suddenly, he notices his three companions and asks what on earth is wrong with them. They are all in tears, and one of them asks Chun Chuan why he is hiding his pain. He tells Chun that his heart must be absolutely breaking right now. Chun is genuinely confused, wondering why he would be in any pain at all. His friend assumes that's why Chun remained so indifferent to the other beautiful women earlier. He reasons that only someone who has experienced true heartbreak could write something so moving. It was proof, in his eyes, that Chun must have been deeply in love with his wife. He asks what forced them apart, but Chun tells him he has no idea what he's talking about. He reminds them he hasn't even had a girlfriend since arriving in this world, but they aren't listening. His friend tells him there is no need to feel embarrassed about his tragic past. He recalls how miserable Chun and the village chief looked when they first arrived at Wonyu village. He is certain that must have been when Chun was separated from his beloved wife. His fellow disciple even curses himself for bringing a grieving widower to a place like this. He tells Chun that a man as pure-hearted as him must have only been thinking of his lost love this whole time. The friend admits he feels utterly ashamed of his own shallow thoughts, but Chun quickly tells Wang Ergu to shut up. Chun snaps at him to stop talking nonsense, insisting he never had a wife, but Ergu demands to know how he explains the poem. In a moment of desperate frustration, Chun tells him he wrote the poem for him just to get him to be quiet. Ergu is left stuttering in shock at the suggestion, just as a servant approaches to address young Master Chun. The servant presents him with a special token, the official invitation to enter Lady Huai's private quarters. He asks Chun when he would like to visit. While nearby, the other disciples are busy jumping to their own conclusions. They whisper about how junior brother Chen's feelings for sister Dongxue must be incredibly deep and sincere. Another adds that it must be serious, considering the village chief even came to meet Dongxue a few days ago. The rumors spread like wildfire, leaving everyone wondering if the stories are actually true. One disciple asks the obvious question, will Chen actually go through with the meeting with Lady Huai now? They reason that he surely wouldn't dare visit another woman right in front of the girl he supposedly loves. To do such a thing, they conclude, would make him a truly heartless monster. Chen realizes he spoke too quickly and that he is now in a very tight spot. To be honest, he had played his hand a bit too well. He worries that Dongxue will completely misunderstand the situation, realizing he let his irritation get the better of him. The servant, oblivious to the internal crisis, asks young Master Chen once more for his decision. He presses Chun on when he plans to use the invitation, while elsewhere, a new arrival is looking for him. An older man asks the village chief where that brat Chen Chuan is, annoyed that he isn't answering his messages. He grumbles that the boy has already forgotten his own father now that he has a woman, which bodes ill for the future. The village chief tries to calm him down, explaining that Chen Chuan is currently very, very busy. Erga scoffs at the idea, telling the older man that Chen isn't busy at all, unless you count visiting a courtesan's private quarters. He mentions a night of passion, which causes Chen's father to explode in rage, calling his son a complete scoundrel. He shouts that the Chun family hasn't done anything so shameless in generations, and if Chun dares to betray Dongxue, he will personally beat him to death when they get home. He then turns to Dongxue and tells her to keep a close eye on him. The pressure finally breaks Chun, who snaps that he isn't going anywhere near that room. To be honest, he had very little choice. He tells the servant to take the token back and inform Lady Huai that he won't be coming after all. He asks the servant to simply arrange a place for them to stay instead. It seems the night of romance has been officially cancelled. When asked if he's truly sure, Chun insists he just wants to sleep, which, in this situation, is probably the safest option. The next morning, we see Lady Huai's attendant telling her to stop waiting, as she has been standing there all night. She delivers the news that young Master Chun said he wouldn't be coming, leaving the lady to wonder why. Huai is confused, reasoning that if he wrote such a beautiful poem for her, his goal must have been to win her heart. Her attendant calls her a silly girl, pointing out that it's actually a good thing he didn't show up, as she remains pure. This means her title as the top courtesan is safe, and their establishment, the Fengyue House, remains the best in the city. She argues that Huai got a masterpiece of a poem for free, so there's no downside. But Huai refuses to accept this. She notes that every man in the city looks at her with nothing but lust, yet Chun is the very first to reject her. Driven by a mix of curiosity and wounded pride, she decides she must go and ask him exactly why he turned her down. Meanwhile, Chun wakes up in a state of absolute panic, wondering if he somehow ended up sleeping with Dongxue. He is horrified, lamenting that the purity he guarded for over 20 years might have vanished in a single night. He worries that it's all gone in a confused blur, but a voice tells him to stop letting his imagination run wild. It turns out that after his drinking contest with senior brother Liu and Ergu, he simply passed out and had to be carried back. He looks around in confusion and asks Dongxue why, if nothing happened, she is currently sitting on his bed. She explains that the matchmaker thought they were traveling together and didn't bother to arrange any other rooms. Chun stammers, trying to confirm that absolutely nothing happened between them during the night. Dongxue shoots him a look, asking what else he expected to happen, before confirming that his virtue is intact. He breathes a sigh of relief, though deep down, he wonders why he feels a strange sense of disappointment. He tells himself that next time, he simply must stay sober. To be honest, that is easier said than done. Outside, Ergu watches them, convinced that Chun is a master of romance now that they've shared a room. And yet, senior brother Liu notices that Chin's expression is actually quite strange for a man in love. He observes that Dongxue doesn't look like someone who just spent a passionate night with a lover either. A sudden, terrible thought crosses his mind. Could it be that Chun is actually incapable of performing? Meanwhile, Lady Huai watches from afar, realizing that with such a beauty by his side, his rejection makes sense. She tells herself it's perfectly logical that young Master Chun wouldn't visit her private quarters under the circumstances. But she refuses to give up on such a talented man, driven by a curiosity she cannot quite suppress. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes toward them, and Chin shouts a warning as the world turns to chaos. Senior brother Liu is impressed that Chin's spells have improved so much, even as he demands to know who is attacking. He calls out to the hidden assailant, asking why they won't show their face and have a proper conversation. Chin scoffs, realizing the attacker is just some fool from the second-ranked Heaven Suite trying to show off. He wonders how anyone could be bold enough to strike at him, knowing he is a guest of the top-ranked suite. He reasons that no one from the four great families would be this brainless, which leaves the question of their identity. A mysterious voice replies, claiming they are only there to help and have no intention of letting him go. Chen reasons that no one from the four great families would be this brainless, which means this person must be from the Qingyan sect. Finding the situation rather interesting, he introduces himself as Chun Chuan and asks how exactly he has managed to offend them. He repeats the question, genuinely curious to know what he could have possibly done to earn such a hostile greeting. The voice replies that he hasn't offended them at all, they are simply doing what they want. Chen scoffs at the lack of martial honor, calling the attacker a piece of trash who relies on sneak attacks because they can't play fair. The assailant notices Chun has protective artifacts and decides to see how many he has left, calling forth a torrent of fire. Chen summons his swords in response, and the attacker is stunned to see he possesses even more magical artifacts than they do. Suddenly, the attacker begs him to stop as their own artifacts begin to fail, but Chen asks what they were thinking when they first ambushed him. He declares that if he doesn't beat them into a pulp today, he'll change his last name, until a voice finally cries out for him to stop. The attacker desperately asks if Chun knows who their father is, to which Chun dryly replies by asking if their mother never told them. The young man reveals that his father is actually Chun Sheng, the formidable sect leader of the Qingyan sect. Chun finds the coincidence quite amusing and asks the boy if he's starting to feel afraid yet. The boy suggests that if Chun begs for mercy now, he might stop, but he quickly changes his tune and screams for Chun to stop hitting him. He begs Chun not to hit his face, identifying himself as Chun Jianghe and insisting his father really is the sect leader. Feeling much better after the scuffle, Chun wonders aloud when exactly Chun Sheng managed to have such a grown son. The boy explains that he is actually using a disguise, showing off a curious little item that he finds quite fun to play with. Chun asks how it works, and we learn that the item is the Wanluo ghost mask. It has the power to completely change one's appearance and physique, which Chun realizes is a rather impressive tool to possess. He realizes that with this, he could change his identity and sneak off to enjoy himself without Dongxue ever finding out. But then, a moment later, he catches himself and wonders why on earth he would feel the need to hide anything from Dongxue. The boy snaps back, telling Chun to just wait and demanding to know his name if he has the guts to give it. He vows to find someone to finish Chun off once he returns home, noticing, with some annoyance, how agile Chun is. Chun, never one to back down, tells him he isn't afraid to share his name and has no intention of hiding it. He claims his name is Lu Meng, daring the boy to try and kill him if he thinks he's capable of it. He repeats the name Lu Meng with a smirk, practically inviting the boy to do his worst. The boy nods, committing the name Lu Meng to memory and warning Chun that he'll be waiting for their next encounter. Later, we see Chun Chuan approach his senior, wondering aloud if he has somehow offended him. He tells him not to think he didn't hear those earlier comments about him being incapable or weak. Chun Chuan adds that since he was called out, the senior should also expect a reckoning in the near future. Meanwhile, back at the sect, the boy runs to his father, crying out for him to take revenge on his behalf. He wails that his father's own son has been beaten, which naturally causes quite a shock. The father, Chen Sheng, is horrified, asking who on earth could have turned Jianghe's handsome face into such a mess. Jianghe sobs that the attacker identified himself as Lu Meng, a name that clearly rings a bell. His father tells him to stop talking nonsense, noting that Lu Meng's master came in just 2 days ago in a similar state. He questions how Jianghe, with all his magical artifacts, could possibly lose to someone like that. Jianghe realizes with growing fury that the man not only beat him up but had the audacity to lie to his face. He laments how inhuman the attacker was, just as his grandmother rushes in, calling him her dear grandson. She is heartbroken to see his condition, demanding to know who could have possibly done this to her precious boy. Jianghe starts to say it was Lu Meng, but then he pauses, realizing the name was likely a complete fabrication. He admits he has no idea who the man actually was, and his grandmother tells him to stay still so he can heal. His father, Chen Sheng, tells him to describe the man's appearance so he can order a search and drag him out. Jianghe sniffs and admits that the guy was actually somewhat handsome. He adds that the stranger was almost as good-looking as himself, but his father tells him to get to the point. Jianghe begins to describe the specific details he noticed during their encounter. He explains that the boy had striking, bright eyes and was capable of using several different types of spells. He was dressed in dark blue, tight-fitting martial arts attire with a cross-collar design, and on his wrists, he wore distinctive black leather bracers. Chunsheng mutters that this description sounds incredibly familiar, and his mother silently agrees. Jianghe remembers another detail. There was a particularly beautiful female disciple by the man's side. He thinks her name was something like Dongxue. His father reacts with shock at the name Dongxue, but Jianghe insists he heard it very clearly. He even claims the girl was more beautiful than the famous Lady Huai. Confused by their silence, Jianghe asks what's wrong and begs them to take revenge for him. Chunsheng whispers to his mother, wondering how those two little troublemakers ended up together. The grandmother tells him to stay calm, then instructs Jianghe to go back and clean himself up. She tells him to return tomorrow at noon, though Jianghe wonders if that's when the revenge will happen. His father snaps, telling him to just do as he's told and stop talking nonsense before kicking him out. Chen Sheng complains to his mother about how spoiled Jianghe has become, wishing he were young enough to have another son. His mother tells him to stop. She has already checked the boy's injuries. She notes that the wounds are only superficial, proving that Chun Chuan likely realized who he was and held back. The situation isn't as bad as it looks, but Chun Sheng remains skeptical, asking his mother if she is truly certain. He gestures toward Jianghe's swollen face, which looks more like a bruised melon than the work of someone showing mercy. His mother reminds him to consider Chun Chuan's track record at the sect, 3 fights, resulting in 2 deaths and 1 severe injury. Compared to that, Jianghe got off easy, and Chun Sheng has to admit the logic is hard to argue with. When he asks for their next move, she instructs him to invite Chun Chuan over tomorrow at noon. They will call it a family banquet, a simple chance to reconcile and let the whole messy affair blow over. Chun Sheng agrees to handle it immediately, though the idea of a family banquet carries a weight of its own. We return to Qin Chuan, who realizes that this invitation is nothing more than an attempt at forced mediation. When asked if he actually plans to go, he doesn't hesitate. After all, why would he miss such an opportunity? In his eyes, they are merely fat sheep offering themselves up, and it would be a waste not to take advantage of them. He knows that ordinary spiritual medicines no longer have any effect on his current level of cultivation. This banquet is the perfect chance to squeeze some high-quality resources out of his so-called relatives. He even mentions getting some resources for Dongxue, leaving her surprised that he is actually looking out for her. She begins to wonder if the things he said to her yesterday were actually sincere rather than just talk. Seeing her linger, Chen Chuan bluntly asks why she hasn't left yet, as he is ready to get some sleep. Dongxue pauses and asks if he remembers her promise to repay the favor he did for her. He seems indifferent to the idea of a favor, but her resolve on the matter is clearly much stronger than his. She tells him that after yesterday, she understands his heart, and regardless of what he thinks, she intends to settle the score. Today, she is determined to return the kindness he showed her, whether he wants her to or not. She tells him not to try and stop her, as her mind is already made up. As it turns out, there was simply no escaping it. Chen Chuan finds himself wondering how Dong Xue could be quite this formidable. It's enough to make a man lose his mind. But at the very least, he can take comfort in the fact that he is fully conscious this time around. She asks him if he is heading to the sect master's main hall for the banquet today. He confirms that he is, and when she expresses her desire to join him, he doesn't seem to mind. She admits that after what happened last night, things feel different. She can feel strange changes occurring within her body, which, to be honest, is to be expected given the circumstances. After such a significant event, a lack of change would be more surprising. He agrees she can come, though he wonders if she's even fit to walk. She calls him a weirdo and tells him to mind his own business, her icy exterior finally showing a few cracks. There is a certain satisfaction, he realizes, in seeing a literal ice beauty transformed in such a way. It is a feeling that, quite frankly, isn't bad at all. We see them arrive at the hall, where the sect master greets him warmly, and Chun Chuan offers a respectful bow. He apologizes for being late, claiming last night was rather exhausting, and the sect master, surprisingly, doesn't seem to mind one bit. They are ushered inside to eat, and the sect master notes with a smile that young Dong Xue has joined them as well. The mood is light until Jiang He spots him and immediately begins complaining to his father. He insists that Chun Chuan beat him mercilessly yesterday, claiming the boy only hit harder once he heard the sect master's name. The sect master tells his son to shut up and sit down, directing Chun Chuan and Dong Xue to their seats instead. Chun Chuan offers his thanks, while Jiang He fumes, convinced his father has lost his mind by acting so friendly. He tells himself that once his grandmother arrives, these two will finally get what's coming to them. But as soon as the elderly woman appears, Jiang He's bravado vanishes into a flurry of desperate, clingy greetings. Jiang He clings to her, crying out that he has missed her to death, a display of affection that is, quite frankly, a bit much. He asks what he should call her if not grandmother, repeating the title with desperate, childlike insistence. The elderly woman smiles, noting that he's taking the words right out of her mouth and calling him a good grandson. She tells them all how well-behaved they are and gestures for everyone to take their seats. Dong Xue offers her greetings to the Supreme Elder, who remarks that the girl seems to have grown even more beautiful in just a few days. She begins to comment on her cultivation level, but then she stops abruptly, her eyes widening as she senses Dong Xue's spiritual root. She demands to know what has happened to Dong Xue's spiritual root, her composure breaking into a moment of genuine shock. Chun Chuan wonders if he overdid things last night, while Jiang He immediately begs his grandmother to do something. The sect master asks if something is wrong with Dong Xue's spiritual root, pleading with the elder to find a way to save her. The Supreme Elder tells Chun Chuan not to panic. There is nothing wrong with the girl's spiritual root. In fact, it has been upgraded. The sect master is stunned, questioning how this is possible since she had already reached the high-grade level. He asks if it has truly risen to the heavenly grade, and the elder confirms it. It is indeed a heavenly spiritual root. The elder asks Dong Xue what kind of miraculous encounter she had to receive such a blessing, and the girl steps forward to answer. She admits that certain things have happened to her recently, and that she had sensed a change within herself. However, she hadn't understood the cause, and she thanks the Supreme Elder for clearing up the mystery. As for the specific nature of the encounter, she politely asks to be excused from explaining, which, naturally, leaves everyone wanting more. The sect master grumbles that she's been infected by Chun Chuan's habit of keeping secrets, even from a man of his high status. The elder decides that if the girl doesn't wish to speak, they shouldn't pry, but she notices something else as she looks closer. She observes that Dong Xue carries the subtle signs of a woman who has recently lost her innocence, realizing that Chun Chuan has finally made his move. She concludes that this sudden rise to a heavenly spiritual root must be connected to their union. The elder is certain that this sudden transformation has everything to do with Chun Chuan. That boy is full of surprises. She wonders just how much destiny is hidden within him, while Dong Xue thanks the Supreme Elder for her understanding. The elder waves it off, saying they are all family now and there is no need for such formal titles. She tells the girl to simply call her grandmother, just like Chun Chuan does, and Dong Xue is happy to oblige. She agrees that whatever grandmother says goes, as long as it makes her happy, addressing her warmly as grandmother once more. The elder invites her to the back for a private chat, noting that whatever business the men have is their own concern. She insists that they shouldn't involve themselves in such matters, leaving Jiang He standing there in complete confusion. He wonders what is happening, as he thought they were here to help him get revenge. First his father betrayed him, and now this. He can't believe his grandmother has switched sides too, but the sect master tells Jiang He to settle down. His father decided it was time for an introduction, and he was more than happy to do the honors. He doesn't care about family ties. All he knows is that this man hit his father's only son. He is outraged that his father is protecting the person who struck him, and he decides to issue a dramatic ultimatum. He tells his father he must choose between them, to which the sect master instantly chooses Qin Chuan, without a second thought. Shocked, Zhang He asks if his father has been hiding an illegitimate son behind his mother's back all this time. The sect master calls that nonsense and finally reveals the truth. Qin Chuan is the son of Jian Guoshu. Zhang He is floored, remembering the legendary Jian Guoshu, who reached Foundation establishment in just 2 weeks. He is in total disbelief, wondering how a man like that could possibly have a son, which is a bit rude, honestly. He keeps repeating his shock at Guoshu having an heir, while his father assures him he has no reason to lie. The sect master asks if he still wants his revenge, but Zhang He realizes that revenge is now the furthest thing from his mind. He immediately calls Qin Chuan brother, claiming to be the biological brother of Qin Chuan's own foster parents. We see that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as both father and son have the exact same talent for clinging to a powerful ally. Qin Chuan points out the obvious awkwardness, reminding the young man that he had just given him a beating the day before. Zhang He dismisses the concern immediately, acting as if the violence was merely a misunderstanding between friends. He insists that the beating was actually a form of earnest guidance and a profound lesson from his brother Chuan. He claims it was a case of tough love, and that from the moment he saw Qin Chuan 2 nights ago, he felt a deep connection. He goes on to describe how Qin Chuan's impressive and imposing figure, which was mostly just him fighting, became an inspiration. The image was deeply engraved in his mind, and he tells himself he could never possibly forget such a majestic sight. He points out that even their names, Zhang He and Chuan, both refer to rivers, a sign from the heavens, surely. He declares they were destined to be brothers, though Qin Chuan is more concerned with the physical reality of the situation. Qin Chuan asks him to keep talking if he must, but to please stop wiping his nose on his leg, which is a fair request, honestly. Zhang He looks up with wounded pride, asking if his new idol is already starting to feel disgusted by him. Qin Chuan admits it hasn't reached that point yet, so Zhang He immediately suggests they become sworn brothers right then and there. He begins the formal oath to heaven and earth, declaring that he, Qin Shanhe, and Qin Chuan are now bound together. He corrects himself, noting they even share the same surname, and swears that while they weren't born on the same day, they should at least hope to leave this world on the same day. A bit dramatic, but he's committed to the bit. Qin Chuan is left staring in disbelief, wondering how a lifelong commitment could possibly be decided this haphazardly. Even the sect master is struck by the resemblance, noting that his son's dramatic flair for swearing brotherhood is exactly like his father's. He encourages Qin Chuan to just go along with it, seeing how incredibly sincere, or perhaps just persistent, Zhang He is being. Qin Chuan sighs and finally gives in, figuring there isn't much harm in accepting the offer for now. He notes to himself that he didn't actually recite the oath, but Zhang He is already overjoyed to finally have a big brother. From that moment on, Zhang He officially recognizes Qin Chuan as his big brother, while he happily takes the role of the second brother. Excited by their new bond, Zhang He offers to lead the way, promising to take his brother to a place that is truly fun. He claims it is even better than the Fengyue Pavilion, a bold statement, certainly, and perfectly suited for the two of them. Qin Chuan, however, is feeling a bit skeptical, reminding the younger man that he had promised a place that was particularly exciting. He had even snuck out behind Dong Xue's back for this, only to find that Zhang He had brought him to a local auction house. Zhang He quickly defends his choice, reminding Qin Chuan that he once said the actual level of excitement didn't matter. All that mattered was having a stage to show off his status, and this, apparently, was the perfect venue for it. Qin Chuan remains unconvinced, noting that with his nearly empty pockets, there isn't much showing off he can actually do. But here we learn that Zhang He has a bit of an inside track regarding how this specific auction house operates. He explains that the establishment is actually an asset of their own Xinyun sect, where the best treasures are usually reserved. Whatever the sect doesn't keep ends up on these stages, and he tells Qin Chuan to bid on whatever catches his eye. He insists they can take home anything they want, which, in his mind, is the ultimate way to flex one's power. Qin Chuan realizes he is just here for the ride, deciding that he might as well enjoy the spectacle for what it is. He figures it is like opening a blind box, just as the auctioneer steps up to present the first item to the crowd. We see a mysterious jade box, though the auction house admits they aren't entirely sure what is hidden inside. However, they aren't selling it completely blindly, as their experts have provided a rather prestigious appraisal for the item. They claim the jade box is at least several thousand years old, a classic sales pitch, if we ever heard one. With the promise of a great master's legacy inside, the bidding starts at a steep 1,010 stones. The crowd is immediately skeptical, wondering who would waste that much money on a broken box, which is a fair point. That amount could buy a high-grade technique, and for a moment, it seems there won't be a single bidder in the room. The auctioneer sighs, noting that if no one steps up, this particular treasure is destined to go unsold. Suddenly, a voice rings out, 10,010. The crowd is stunned. 10,000 for a mystery box? People begin to whisper, wondering if this jade box actually contains something legendary, or if it's all just nonsense. Some are convinced it's a scam, arguing that only a plant would jump from 1,000 to 10,000 immediately. They realize the bid came from the young master's private box, leaving everyone confused as to why Jianghe would overpay tenfold. Moving right along, we see the next item presented, a Juyin pill, a common medicinal supplement. The starting price is set at a modest 310 stones, a much more reasonable figure. Once again, the room falls silent, and the auctioneer prepares to declare that there are no interested bidders. Just as he is about to announce the item has failed to sell, a voice shouts, "I'll give you 100,000. Not to be outdone, another voice immediately counters with 100,010. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly to one of pure, unadulterated disbelief. The onlookers wonder which wealthy young master has lost his mind and started throwing money around like water. To be perfectly honest, paying over 100,000 for a useless pill is beyond any logical explanation. The crowd is convinced they are watching a performance by paid actors, as the situation has become utterly absurd. After all, this specific pill has been sitting on the shelf for 6 months without a single person wanting it. Jianghe looks at Qin Chuan with newfound respect, admitting that his big brother truly knows how to make an entrance. He is genuinely impressed by the sheer audacity of dropping 100,000 stones just to show off. Even Jianghe, who loves a good spectacle, confesses that he would never have dared to bid that high. Qin Chuan simply tells him to watch and learn, claiming that when it comes to flexing, he is second to none. Jianghe can only offer his total admiration, fully convinced now that his new brother is in a league of his own. Qin Chuan remains perfectly calm, knowing full well that since he isn't the one paying, he can afford to be bold. The auctioneer offers his congratulations to the winner of the Juyin pill before quickly moving on to the next item. This time, it is a low-grade defensive magical treasure, the kind of rare artifact that truly speaks for itself. The bidding for this defensive piece starts at a relatively modest 810 stones. Finally seeing something of actual value, one bidder immediately jumps in with an offer of 1,010. Another voice scoffs at such a low price for a magical treasure, raising the stakes to 2,000. The competition heats up as a third bidder warns the others not to interfere, pushing the price to 3,000. The auctioneer breathes a sigh of relief, thinking that the proceedings have finally returned to a normal, logical rhythm. He encourages the room, asking if there are any further bids as he begins the first countdown at 1,000. But just as he reaches the second count, a voice suddenly shatters the peace by bidding over 1,000,000. The crowd is absolutely livid, convinced that this blatant plant has finally lost his mind by bidding 1,010. It seems as though the entire auction house has descended into a state of collective madness. Qin Chuan realizes that since the money isn't real to him, he can shout out any number he likes. He turns to Jianghe, asking with a smirk if his display of dominance was impressive enough for the occasion. To be honest, it was a performance that left everyone in the room questioning their own sanity. Qin Chuan pauses, asking for final confirmation that this auction house truly belongs to Jianghe's family. Jianghe insists it is the truth, though Qin Chuan wonders if playing this way won't cause some serious trouble. Jianghe shrugs it off, pointing out that Qin Chuan is doing the exact same thing anyway. Suddenly, the weight of the situation hits Qin Chuan, and he realizes his younger brother might be in over his head. He warns Jianghe that a massive stroke of bad luck is likely coming his way after such a stunt. Qin Chuan sighs, telling his friend that even he can't save him this time, so he'd better start praying. Jianghe looks up in a panic, completely confused about what his older brother could possibly mean by that. He begs for a clearer explanation, admitting that he's starting to feel a genuine sense of dread. Qin Chuan calls him a fool, explaining that his earlier flashy bidding only worked because those items were unwanted. Those previous lots were destined to fail anyway, but this magical treasure is something everyone actually wants. By jumping straight to such an absurd price, he's effectively destroying the reputation of his family's auction house. He asks if Jianghe even cares about the business anymore, or if he's just obsessed with showing off. The realization finally hits the young master, and we see the color drain from Jianghe's face. He realizes they can't keep playing this game, as they have clearly taken things much too far this time. He panics, wondering how on earth he will explain this to the sect master, who also happens to be his father. Jianghe screams for help, certain that his father is going to beat him within an inch of his life. With tears and snot running down his face, he clings to Qin Chuan, threatening never to let go if he isn't saved. He wails about how his family will be penniless after this, which is a bit of an exaggeration, but he's desperate. The sect master appears, noting coldly that the family's financial ruin would be entirely Jianghe's fault. He glares at his foolish son, while Qin Chuan tries to step in and mediate with the sect master. Qin Chuan suggests that Jianghe didn't do it on purpose, quickly pivoting to the topic of his experimental fields. The sect master tells him he can do whatever he wants with the fields, but asks Qin Chuan to leave for a moment. He mentions that his leather belt hasn't been unbuckled for decades, but today, that is about to change. Jianghe cries out to his brother, reminding him that he was supposed to be his savior in this mess. But Qin Chuan simply offers a wave, leaving his friend to face his fate alone. And who could blame him, really? "Father, I was wrong. Please stop hitting me, father." We see that his friend's face is a complete mess. It's a truly pitiful sight. Chuan tells himself he must increase his strength quickly, lest he ever find himself in a similar position. A little later, he gathers the workers, telling everyone to come forward and collect their new seeds. He orders them to shovel out all the existing spiritual herbs and plant these new seeds instead. Yes, they are digging up the precious herbs. The sect master has already given his permission, after all. He announces that from this day forward, this area will be known as Experimental Field Number 1. However, the initial results of the experimental field are not quite what we would call ideal. The grain produced is only slightly better than ordinary crops, with no significant improvement in quality. He sighs, realizing that the first step is always the hardest. Making money is never as easy as it looks. Later, he asks his companion if she is short on snacks, noting how hard she has been cultivating lately. She has been working so diligently that she hasn't even returned to her room to sleep. She retorts that it's all because he scared her, especially with her being a heavenly water spirit root. She tells him he simply doesn't understand how someone like him could act the way he does. She repeats that he truly terrified her, emphasizing her delicate water spirit root nature. It seems she really is made of water. He decides he must also focus on his own cultivation. Of course, this requires massive resources. One only needs to look at Jianghe, who is still in solitary confinement. He wonders when the experimental field will finally succeed. Since he can't solve it now, he'll take his time. He asks if he can return to the room to sleep tonight, having noticed a curious pattern. He has discovered that after every session together, his spirit root shows signs of improvement. She accuses him of using her as a cultivation vessel, but he reminds her that he possesses the power of rules. If he can nourish Dongxue herself, then those ancient plants in the spiritual field should be no trouble at all. She calls him a scoundrel, muttering that men never cherish what they've already won, which is a bit dramatic, really. Since the spiritual field belongs to the wood element, he decides to apply his wood-based rule power to the crops. Suddenly, a strange phenomenon occurs, leaving them both wondering exactly what is happening to the field. It worked. He excitedly tells Dongxue that he succeeded in revitalizing these ancient botanical specimens. Not only have they grown significantly in size, but they have already reached the professional standard for harvest. With these results, their grand plan to make a fortune is finally back on track. There's no time to waste. He tells her not to rush the harvest, asking if she still wants to improve her spiritual root first. He suggests they head off right now, though she protests that she hasn't even had a chance to bathe yet. Dongxue admits to Chuan that she feels a strange change since they started their partnership. She feels as though she doesn't even need to take the initiative to cultivate anymore. A convenient side effect, indeed. He jokingly begs her to please keep practicing on her own, fearing he won't survive until old Chen returns. She gives him a playful, annoyed look, though deep down she knows he's only teasing her. She promises to cultivate properly, and in return, he presents her with a special gift he's been holding. He mentions he heard that consuming this particular item can grant a person eternal youth. She immediately asks if he thinks she's getting old. To be honest, that was a dangerous conversational turn. He quickly denies it, claiming he just wanted to buy her something nice. She decides he's being thoughtful enough. She points to a jade box, asking what it is, and he admits he just bought it on a whim. He realized he forgot to examine it. Since there's nothing else to do today, he decides to study it closely. Looking closely at the object, it appears to be some kind of ancient cultivation technique. He asks her to inject some spiritual power into it, and she agrees to give it a try. He can hardly believe his eyes, realizing that the legends of finding treasures in web novels are actually true. It seems the auction house really is the perfect place to find hidden gems, especially rare techniques like this one. She asks if it's truly that powerful, and he realizes they've just made an incredible profit. He turns to Dongxue and explains that what's inside isn't just a simple technique. It is actually the life's work of a grand master, the true explanation of the array path. This means he could master thousands of years of secret array knowledge, which is frankly quite ridiculous. To be honest, the sheer scale of this discovery is beyond absurd. He begins to wonder if he is actually the chosen child of destiny after all. He jokes that his father might just be a side character, leaving Dongxue confused about this child of destiny talk. She asks what his father has to do with any of this, but he admits it's too complicated to explain right now. He urges her to hurry back to the spiritual field, as their grand plan to get rich is about to reach a new level. It's time to expand the scale, though the onlookers are already wondering how on earth these things were grown. The crowd suspects these are genuine ancient artifacts, though some find it hard to believe. One observer notes that no ordinary tobacco plant should be larger than an 800-year-old tree. And so, he arrives and tells everyone to clear a path and give them some space. He asks why they are all surrounding his spiritual field, while the crowd looks at Brother Chuan in awe. They ask if he really grew these ancient specimens himself, as the results are simply defying the laws of nature. Most of them have lived long lives without ever seeing ancient plants this massive, and this is only the beginning. And yet, as we are about to see, there is something even more defiant of heaven's laws. He decides it's time to show them all what it truly means to surpass the limits of nature. The ancient plants begin to grow even larger before their eyes, leaving the crowd wondering if this is some divine array. Even an array elder couldn't achieve such a feat, and they look at Brother Chuan in pure disbelief. They wonder if there is anything he can't do, though he reminds them not to get ahead of themselves. He jokes that he can hear their thoughts, even the ones they think are hidden. He tells one of them that instead of being a department manager, they might just end up working like a beast of burden. The term department manager leaves them utterly confused, as they have no idea what such a thing could be. He assures them they will understand soon enough, before making a grand announcement to the group. He declares that the Qingyun Group Chen Limited Company is officially established right then and there. Today marks the moment they truly step toward success, and the atmosphere is filled with newfound hope. Meanwhile, others are lamenting how difficult life has become, as 6 months have already slipped away. They worry that if Chun Chuan's experimental field fails, they will be out of options entirely. The only choice left would be to return to planting standard spiritual fruits and lingji mushrooms. The situation is quite dire, as they can barely afford the cultivation resources for their own disciples anymore. One suggests that it might be best to go and see the progress for themselves, having heard some interesting rumors. Apparently, many people have been flocking to the spiritual field lately, including some of the inner sect elders. Surprised by this news, the sect master decides he must head there immediately to witness it personally. Upon his arrival, he is greeted by Elder Zhou, who seems to have been expecting him. The elder bows to the sect master and prepares to reveal exactly what they have been working on. The sect master looks around and asks what on earth he is seeing, his curiosity clearly piqued. Elder Zhou explains that this strange substance is called Leixiao, a recent invention by Qin Chuan. He admits it is his first time trying it as well, urging the sect master not to be in such a hurry. He offers to give the sect master a detailed introduction to the snack, step by step. As he begins to explain how it works, the sect master cuts him off, having heard enough. The sect is so poor they can barely afford to eat, and here they are discussing snacks. He tells the elder to enjoy it himself, just as Chun Chuan notices his uncle has arrived. Chun Chuan mentions he was just about to go looking for him, which seems quite convenient. The sect master has matters to discuss, but Chun Chuan insists they shouldn't just sit there, calling for Dongxue. He tells her to prepare the chives and fetch a jar of his private wine collection so they can drink together. Dongxue nods, acknowledging the request from her young master, Xiaochuan. The sect master sighs, insisting he has no appetite given the dire state of the sect's finances. Chun Chuan simply smiles, telling his uncle that there is no problem a good barbecue cannot solve. And if one meal doesn't work, two certainly will, as he encourages him to start with the barbecue. Dongxue returns with the chives, presenting the uncle with the barbecue and the spicy Leixiao. But the real treasure is the spiritual wine, which releases an aroma that is truly intoxicating. The sect master is stunned, realizing he has never smelled anything quite like this in his entire life. Chen Chuan explains he just finished developing it and invites his uncle to take a taste. He wants to see how it compares to other spiritual wines, though the uncle admits the scent is indeed divine. However, he insists on discussing the sect's heavy burdens, fearing they cannot continue like this much longer. The sect master laments that the sect is likely unable to provide even a single scrap of resources anymore. As he takes a drink, Chen Chuan watches him closely, eagerly asking his uncle what he thinks of the taste. He asks if it is good, while the sect master admits he has never tasted anything quite like this wine in his life. At first, the flavor is subtle, but a moment later, a feeling of pure, dripping refreshment washes over him. The uncle demands to know where he bought such a thing, while Chen Chuan tells him to slow down and take it easy. He assures him there is plenty more and insists that this wine was indeed developed right here by themselves. He encourages his uncle not to just drink, but to pair it with the barbecue and Leixiao for the full experience. The sect master finds it delicious, a true masterpiece, and notices that after eating the chives, his internal spiritual energy begins to shift. It starts to circulate automatically, leaving him in awe of what he considers a divine gift from the heavens. Chen Chuan tells his uncle to eat slowly, before casually mentioning a figure of 1010. The sect master freezes, asking what in total disbelief at the number he just heard. He calls him a little brat, his shock quickly turning into a spark of genuine indignation. He reminds Chen Chuan that he used the sect's spiritual fields, forcing everyone to tighten their belts just to survive. And now, after taking just a few bites and drinks, his own nephew is actually demanding payment. He asks why he doesn't just become a robber, while Elder Zhou tries to calm the sect master down. The elder explains that Chen Chuan is only joking, meaning that the actual value of this meal is 1010. The sect master realizes this means the chives can be sold, which Chen Chuan confirms was the whole point of his research. He shows his uncle the raw materials for the Leixiao and barbecue, explaining his plan to expand the entire operation. He intends to take over the retail area, noting that meat barbecue is even more delicious than the vegetable version. The sect master is amazed to see such a large field of ingredients, all maintained and nourished by a complex spiritual array. Chen Chuan tells the sect master not to rush, promising to go and fetch a few more things for him to see. The sect master can only nod in agreement, his curiosity clearly piqued by everything he has witnessed so far. He eventually asks how Chun Chuan managed to learn all of this, wondering where such knowledge could have come from. Chun Chuan dismisses it as a minor trick, though the sect master suspects he is boasting about such a massive operation. He asks if it requires staff, but Chun Chuan explains he has already set up an automated harvesting array for when the crops ripen. The materials are automatically sent to the factory, and Chun Chuan invites his uncle to follow him further into the facility. They are greeted by Lu Meng, prompting the sect master to ask what the young man is doing standing there. Lu Meng proudly reports that he is now the captain of security for the Qin Yun Group's Chun Limited Company. He officially welcomes the sect master home, leaving the older man to repeat the strange name, Qin Yun Group. He mumbles the words limited company and security captain as if trying to make sense of a foreign language. Looking around at the strange machinery, the sect master asks what all of these things are supposed to be. He repeats the question, his bewilderment growing as he stares at the complex setup before him. Chun Chuan explains that this is an assembly line designed for the automated production of Yahello and barbecue. Everything is then packaged together, a process he has decided to call Jade-prepared dishes. He notes that it might be too much for his uncle to understand, which, to be honest, is a fair assessment. He directs the sect master's attention to the next section, eager to show off the final results of his hard work. The sect master is stunned by the sheer volume, marveling at the massive amount of jade-prepared dishes stored there. He repeats the name, jade-prepared dishes, over and over, trying to wrap his head around the concept. He is utterly shocked by the scale, unable to believe that so much could be produced in one place. Chun Chuan confirms these are the dishes, noting that each box of Yahello snacks will be sold for 10 spirit stones. Chun Chuan explains that the barbecue goes for 30 stones a box, asking his uncle what he thinks of the price. The sect master is floored, wondering how such a tiny little box could possibly cost 30 spirit stones. Naturally, his next question is about the production cost of such an item. When he hears it costs less than a single stone to make, he can't help but let out a startled curse. He stares in disbelief at the massive profit margin, but Chun Chuan tells him not to be shocked just yet. He explains that once the retail area is fully established, the price for the meat skewers will go even higher. A single box will then cost 50 stones, and with that, he leads his uncle toward the next section. He introduces the assembly line for the high-end spirits, preparing his uncle for the next price reveal. He calls out to Ergo to bring over the ledger, and the young man happily complies. 800 stones? The sect master asks if he's trying to commit highway robbery. And the best part? The entire setup cost a mere 10 snacks, yielding a staggering 80-fold return on his investment. Chun Chuan tells him to stay calm, urging him to consider the premium packaging and the exquisite taste. He asks if 800 really seems like too much, and the sect master begins to reconsider. With the inventory ready, Chun Chuan points out that they have everything they need to proceed. The only thing missing is a sales channel in the cultivation world, and he looks to his uncle for help. The sect master promises to handle it, though he admits he isn't quite sure what the specific plan should be. Chun Chuan suggests gathering the leaders of the nearby major sects together for a meeting. He asks if his uncle can manage it, and the older man notes that it should be easy enough. It turns out they were already planning to meet in a few days to discuss a certain secret realm. Chun Chuan repeats the words secret realm, his interest clearly piqued by this new development. And so, we learn that yet another secret realm has appeared, the proverbial backyard for the chosen ones of this world. The sect master explains that Chun Chuan might not know what a secret realm is yet, but it involves several major sects. They all send their disciples in for a trial together, and he mentions that Chun Chuan's father will also be attending. He suggests that Chun Chuan should join them when the time comes, and the young man readily agrees. They decide to discuss the details later, but Chun Chuan suddenly asks what Jiang he has been up to lately. Just the mention of his name makes the sect master fume, claiming that if his son had even a fraction of Chun Chuan's sense, he might live another 200 years, but for now, the boy is still stuck in solitary confinement. Chun Chuan boldly asks his uncle to release him, suggesting that Jiang he is essential for the new sales plan. The sect master is skeptical, wondering if his son is actually capable of contributing anything useful to the mission. Chun Chuan assures him that Jiang he possesses unique and favorable conditions that make him perfect for the job. We then move to a different scene, where a hostess wonders what wind has blown the elites of the 4 great families straight to her Fenghua pavilion, and she quickly calls for her staff to welcome them. She orders them to be escorted inside and served in the prestigious Heavenly Room No. 1 immediately. However, one of the attendants is scolded for failing to notice that their young master is also present. The followers keep repeating the same point, emphasizing the importance of the young man standing before them. They demand to know if she's blind, asking if she truly didn't see their young master standing right there. They mockingly ask the girl if her eyesight is so poor that she can't even recognize a literal god of wealth. The onlookers are stunned, hardly believing their ears as the elites of the 4 families address the chubby young man as young master. If he is the young master to the 4 great families, they realize with a shock that his status must be truly astronomical. And indeed, he confirms it. He is the leader of the most powerful sect in the entire southern wilderness. This is none other than Xinjianghe, the son of the sect master of the Qingyun sect. He is the true heir of the clan, the young sect master himself. The hostess stammers that she was blind to his status, never imagining someone of his rank would visit. She is shocked that he would grace her Fengyue pavilion, proving his big brother was right all along. There is no point in hiding such status, showing it off is half the fun for a young sect master. She eagerly asks which lady she should arrange for him to spend the evening with. She wonders if he would prefer to hear some music first or proceed directly to the usual festivities. Jianghe simply demands their best wine, insisting on eating right here in the main hall, without any girls. As he orders the best food and drink, the onlookers wonder what is wrong with this Qingyun heir. The hostess is baffled, watching a young man of his position refuse the company of any ladies. The crowd begins to whisper, wondering if he is perhaps incapable. It's a possibility, they suppose. Looking at his sturdy build, they conclude he must just be a glutton who prefers food over romance. The staff soon presents him with the finest spiritual wine the Fengyue Pavilion has to offer. They invite him to taste it alongside their most exquisite and delicate dishes. Jianghe is unimpressed, asking if this pathetic drink is truly the best they can do. He accuses them of playing a joke on him, while the hostess desperately pleads her innocence. He scoffs at their best wine, complaining that it has left a terrible, stale taste in his mouth. Deciding he can't take it anymore, he realizes he needs a spicy gluten strip to wash out the flavor. One of his companions asks if this is the famous Yahello that has been causing such a stir lately. We hear that this snack is rumored to not only taste incredible, but to possess extraordinary properties. It is said that a single bite can make one's spiritual energy circulate for a full cycle. Brother Chun, we've known each other for so long. Surely you could share a little with us? It's a small thing. Jianghe asks them if they really think he is that stingy, telling them to simply take some and eat. The atmosphere shifts as they take their first bites, savoring the unexpected flavor. The onlookers whisper, recalling that the strange snack was called something like Yahello. It smells incredible, and we see the crowd wondering what else the young sect master might have hidden away. To be honest, it looks even more delicious than the Yahello they've heard so much about. The hostess sighs, noting it's a pity to have such food without wine, and begs the young sect master's forgiveness. She admits that even the finest spiritual wine in the Fengyue Pavilion isn't good enough for his refined palate. She asks him what kind of wine he truly desires, and Jianghe realizes his moment has finally arrived. He tells her that he was waiting for her to ask, and that from now on, whenever he visits, he will only drink Taizi. Taizi. Suddenly, the hostess orders everyone to stop whatever they are doing. This includes all the ladies. The entire staff of the Fengyue Pavilion is being mobilized for a single task. She demands they find this Taizi immediately, and the girls begin approaching every guest in the building. They politely ask the patrons if they have ever heard of something called Taizi. The ladies beg the men to tell them where this Taizi can be bought, hoping for any lead at all. They explain to the confused guests that Taizi is a wine, a very specific kind of wine. The rest of the city is left wondering why the entire Fengyue Pavilion has suddenly emptied into the streets, searching for Taizi. People ask what on earth that could be, shocked that such a massive commotion is being made over a name. They begin to wonder if this Taizi is perhaps some legendary new treasure that has just appeared in the world. One man speaks up, claiming he knows the secret, and the crowd urges him to speak about this Taizi. He explains that it is a new spiritual wine crafted by the Qingyun sect, and when it was finished, the entire sect was bathed in a sudden burst of light, and the aroma filled the very peaks of Qingyun. It lingered there for 7 days and nights without fading. Naturally, the listeners are shocked by such a tale. They wonder if such a miracle is possible, questioning if Old Sun is simply making it all up. After all, it seems impossible for a single bottle of wine to trigger a phenomenon of heaven and earth. One veteran drinker admits that in all his years, he has never heard of a brew so potent. Old Sun tells them not to doubt him, revealing he used every connection he had to secure 2 bottles. He claims that just a single sniff made him feel as though he were floating among the immortals. It felt like being in a divine paradise, he says, though the others still worry he might be tricking them. They tell Old Sun to stop teasing them and to finally bring it out for a tasting. They offer to pay, and to be honest, they are all becoming quite desperate for a sip. Old Sun sets his price at 1,010, offering to sell them a single bottle. The price leaves them gasping, wondering if he is trying to rob them in broad daylight. He defends himself, noting he paid 800 per bottle and that they are incredibly hard to find. Deciding that the price is fair for such a rarity, they agree to pool their money together. They tell him to bring it out immediately, and he tells them to wait just a moment. We see their awe as he reveals it. Even the packaging looks far more extraordinary than ordinary wine. The glass is so pure it looks like crystal, convincing them it truly must be an item from the heavens. And so, the 4 of them prepare to share the legendary drink together. Old Sun generously offers to take just 610, and the others can hardly wait for him to pour. Immortal wine, they cry out, as if they have finally found the nectar of the gods. One old man, a veteran of the wine world for decades, admits he has never tasted anything quite like this. To have the honor of tasting such a brew, he tells himself, means he can die without any regrets. Another feels as though he has stepped into a divine realm, wondering how such a masterpiece could even exist. He laments that he is only tasting it now, and immediately begs old son to sell him the remaining bottle. He offers the original price, but another quickly jumps in, offering 2,000 without a second thought. The price hits 3,000 as they plead with old son, hoping their long friendship might earn them a favor. But old son is unmoved. Even for 5,000, he refuses to part with such a legendary treasure. He intends to keep it as a family heirloom, a wise choice, perhaps, given the frenzy he just created. We see that the plan was a success. The word has spread across the entire Qingyan market. Their brand of Taizi wine, spicy snacks, and barbecue are now the talk of the town. It won't be long before the news reaches the rest of the cultivation world, and his companions are rightfully impressed. Junior brother Chun is asked how he managed such a feat, as people have been inquiring about the wine all afternoon. The bidding has already reached 3,010, leaving the senior disciples in awe of young Xiaochuan. They truly believe that having a talent like him in the Qingyun sect is a blessing from the heavens themselves. But for Xiaochuan, this is only the beginning, as he already has plans to expand their business much further. He envisions opening branches everywhere, knowing that wine and food are merely the first steps of his grand design. He begins to speak of banking and loans, concepts quite foreign to this world, to be perfectly honest. He even considers how to involve the local entertainment houses, leaving his companions to wonder what he will think of next. He even plans to organize the local ladies into a unified system, giving it a rather grand title. He calls it the Unemployed Fairy Reemployment Plan and turns to ask his uncle for his thoughts. Xiaochuan wonders if the older man finds his vision as brilliant as he does. His uncle agrees completely, though he admits there is no real need to consult him on such matters. To be perfectly honest, he doesn't understand half of it, and lately, he has had no time for his own cultivation. The uncle sighs, noting that his personal progress has stalled while managing these business affairs. Xiaochuan urges him to stay focused, but the uncle points out that the disciples have already started calling him the second sect master. It seems his constant presence in the marketplace has earned him a new title among the ranks. Some of the newer disciples, we learn, don't even recognize the actual sect master anymore. He complains that while Xiaochuan might not need to cultivate, he certainly still does. The sect master wonders aloud how he is supposed to find the time, leaving Xiaochuan a bit surprised. Suddenly, a new idea strikes the uncle, and he looks at Xiaochuan with a mischievous glint in his eye. He suggests that when they next recruit disciples, he will make a formal announcement. He intends to officially appoint young Xiaochuan as the new sect master of the Qingyan sect. This would allow him to take an early retirement, a very tempting prospect, indeed. He envisions a life as a hands-off manager, finally free to focus on his spiritual path. Xiaochuan points out the absurdity of the idea, asking who has ever seen a sect master at only the 7th level of qi refining. The uncle realizes he had forgotten that minor detail, so he settles on the title of vice sect master instead. In this role, Xiaochuan would have full authority to handle all affairs whenever the uncle is away. He tells Xiaochuan to take Jiang He under his wing and use the opportunity to truly sharpen his skills. He exclaims that he can finally be a hands-off manager and focus properly on his cultivation. Xiaochuan smiles, thinking that he should definitely let the old man enjoy that lifestyle. When the uncle asks about the cultivation again, Xiaochuan simply tells him it's all the same thing. As it happens, the sect masters from several other prominent sects have just arrived. They are here to discuss the secret realm, so the uncle leaves Xiaochuan to his work. He decides to head off and do a bit of advertising for their own sect in the meantime. He greets Sect Master Chen, telling him there is no need for such formalities between old friends. Following the old rules, they decide to talk over a meal, and he calls out to a disciple named Xiaoyu. The disciple responds immediately, and the uncle tells him not to bring wine, as he has his own private stash. The guests are eager to start the discussion, asking what the plan is for this year's trials. The uncle suggests that things remain as they were, and that those details can wait until a bit later. Sect Master Chun is distracted, however, noting that he has never seen dishes quite like these before. The others agree, finding each plate more novel than the last, which clearly amuses the uncle. He explains that this is called barbecue, a specialty of the Qingyan sect, and urges them all to try it. The flavor is absolutely incredible, and old Shin finds himself asking how such a thing is even made. They marvel at the exquisite taste, noting a certain flow of energy that pairs perfectly with spiritual wine. And speaking of spiritual wine, the uncle announces its arrival with a flourish. He presents the flying platform, wine, leaving Brother Chen wondering what the story is behind such a name. The color of the wine is beautiful. Looking through the bottle, one can see the liquid shimmering within. The light seems to dance inside the glass, and already, a faint, enticing aroma begins to fill the air. Sect Master Chen notes that the aroma is even more intoxicating than his own sect's famous 100-flower brew, urging the uncle to open it. The uncle agrees, deciding it is time to show them what true wine looks like as he prepares to pour a glass for everyone. He tells them to prepare to have their horizons broadened, and as the wine pours, the guests find themselves staring in utter disbelief. They wonder how such a celestial nectar could even exist in this world, describing it as nothing short of perfection. One guest admits that even the legendary 1,000-year collection doesn't come close to what Chun is serving here. The uncle is feeling quite proud of his flying platform wine, thinking to himself that it is simply top tier, to put it elegantly. He finds their shocked expressions quite amusing, noting that they look like people who have never seen the world before. He points out old Lu, admiring how the man manages to keep his emotions hidden, or so he thinks. In reality, old Lu is reeling, thinking about how he has been stuck at the 5th level of the Golden Core stage for 30 long years. He never imagined that a single cup of wine would allow him to break through his bottleneck, and he calls out to old Chun in shock. Overwhelmed with gratitude for the gift of the wine, he offers a formal bow to his host. The uncle tells old Lu that this was simply his destiny, adding that if he truly wants to thank someone, he should thank young Chen Chuan. The name catches their attention, and they find themselves repeating it in curiosity. They ask if this boy is his personal disciple, marveling at the fact that Brother Chun has managed to find such a rare talent. It is enough to make anyone envious, and they naturally begin to wonder just how high Chen Chuan's cultivation level actually is. They assume he must be the Qilin prodigy of the Qingyun sect, which gives the uncle a perfect opportunity. He decides to use this moment to emphasize Chen Chuan's importance to the sect, essentially giving them a fair warning. It's a clever move to ensure no one tries anything reckless or faces an awkward situation later in the secret realm. He asks the group what they think of the wine, and the response is a unanimous and enthusiastic approval. When he asks if they would like to drink it again in the future, they naturally agree, which is exactly what he wanted to hear. The uncle continues, telling them to go back and inform the disciples of their respective sects that once they enter the secret realm, Brother Chen needn't worry. They reply, promising to warn their disciples not to make things difficult for Chen Chuan. One guest adds that since the boy helped him break through his bottleneck, he won't let anyone lay a finger on him. The others agree, but the uncle realizes they've misunderstood. He wasn't asking for protection, he was giving a warning. He tells them plainly not to let their disciples provoke the boy, leading them to wonder what would happen if they did. They wouldn't even know how they died, he remarks, leaving the guests in a state of complete shock. He asks if they have ever seen a situation where someone stole a single bottle of wine, only for Chen Chuan to take action. Imagine being chased and beaten by a dozen Golden Core elders, all because of that one bottle. The guests are horrified, wondering what poor soul could have possibly fallen into such a miserable state. Me, the uncle admits. Yes, it was him. To be honest, it's a memory he'd rather forget. He explains that Chen Chuan is so bold, he even dares to strike the sect master himself. And since the elders all take the boy's side anyway, the uncle has one piece of advice for his friends. He suggests they tell their disciples to simply stay as far away from the boy as possible. There is quite literally nothing that Chen Chuan is afraid to do, which is a terrifying thought. The guests can only stammer in response, realizing this disciple is truly far from ordinary. Moving past the warnings, they ask if there is any wine left, hoping to take 3 bottles home with them. Another demands 5 bottles, but the uncle snaps back, telling them they must be joking. He only gets 1 bottle of this flying platform wine a month, grumbling that Chen Chuan is a bit of a miser. Meanwhile, we see Chen Chuan himself, who has hidden the stash in his room and wonders who is gossiping about him now. He justifies the small supply to himself, wondering if they've ever heard of the concept of hunger marketing. He grumbles to himself, suspecting that some other blind fool has come to steal his precious wine again. But as he turns, he freezes in shock, realizing his father has suddenly appeared in the room. Chen Chuan stares at the empty bottles, asking his father just how much flying platform wine he's consumed. His father scoffs, retorting that after drifting around for 6 months, he shouldn't have to report every drink. He asks if he isn't allowed to enjoy himself after returning, but Chen Chuan remembers the allowance he left with. The sect master had given him tens of thousands in spirit stones, yet he spent it all, and even ended up in debt. The father sighs, explaining that the world of cultivation is simply filled with too many temptations. Even a man of his experience, he admits, has moments where he simply cannot control his spending. Chen Chuan notes his father's talent for wasting money and asks exactly how much he owes. His father shrugs it off, claiming it isn't much, only about 80,000 spirit stones. Chen Chuan agrees that it isn't much, at least not by his current standards. He hands over a card from their Qingyun Group bank, mentioning it only has about 500,000 inside. He tells his father to spend it sparingly, leaving the old man completely stunned by the massive amount. The father mentions he heard from young Dongxue that Chen Chuan had been making some money lately. He never imagined it would be this much, but Chen Chuan just wonders if this is really considered a lot. To the boy, this is just the beginning, especially when considering all their various business ventures. He casually mentions that the net assets of their Qingyun Group have only just reached 500 million. His father can barely breathe, repeating the number 500 million in a state of pure disbelief. He never expected that in his old age, he would finally get to live the pampered life of a wealthy heir's father. Chen Chuan finds his father's choice of words a bit odd, but decides that as long as the old man is happy, it's fine. Changing the subject, Chun Chuan asks about his father's current cultivation level, only to hear he is still at the peak of the 9th level of qi refining. He is stunned. His father has been away for 6 months and still hasn't reached foundation establishment, suggesting he spent the whole year just playing around. He complains about how hard he works to earn money, wondering why his father can't show a bit more ambition. The old man pauses, realizing those words sound incredibly familiar, and for a very good reason. He points out that these are the exact same scoldings he gave Chun Chuan as a child, though the boy insists he isn't wrong. His father retorts that he knows nothing, explaining that a secret realm opening soon contains exactly what he needs for his breakthrough. The system had warned Chun Chuan that using a pill for foundation establishment wasn't ideal, and speaking of the secret realm, Chun Chuan suddenly decides he wants to go too, eagerly telling his father that he wants to enter the secret realm as well. His father immediately dismisses the idea, asking what he could possibly do there when it is so dangerous. He suggests that if the boy wants to see his father's heroic and dashing figure, he can simply watch from the outside. Apparently, there is a great heavenly eye array that can broadcast the events inside the realm in real time. Chun Chuan realizes this is essentially a live stream, which makes him even more determined to go and show off his skills. He knows opportunities like this don't come twice, and eventually, his father gives in and agrees. The secret realm is restricted to those with cultivation levels below the foundation establishment stage. His father boasts that he will be able to walk tall and won't suffer any losses, earning a quick thanks from his son. Then, the old man tells him to hurry up so that he can hold a grandson sooner rather than later. He adds that Chun Chuan shouldn't think he's oblivious to the fact that the young girl, Dongxue, has already been won over by him, causing Chun Chuan to call out to his father in exasperation. He asks if they can't be a bit more serious, but his father just tells him not to worry and promises to help him out. Chun Chuan sighs, wondering if his father could manage to stay serious for even just a few minutes. As Chun Chuan prepares to enter the secret realm, his grandmother pulls him aside to offer a few words of caution regarding his rule power. He reassures her, promising that unless it becomes an absolute matter of life and death, he won't use that particular strength. She nods, noting that Jiang He will also be going with him, and expects the two brothers to look out for one another. Her only wish, quite naturally, is for both of them to return home safe and sound. Chun Chuan jokes that he won't just bring his brother back safely, but perhaps even a little well-fed and plump. The secret realm finally comes into view, and the order is given for all disciples to prepare to disembark from the ship. Their destination is the gathering point for the Qingyun sect, where the other participants are already waiting. The onlookers notice the Qingyun arrival, whispering amongst themselves and wondering if the young man leading them is indeed Chun Chuan. Some mention that their own sect master has spoken of him, though at first glance, he doesn't seem particularly impressive. They've heard he's the one who invented those popular snacks, leading them to assume his heart isn't truly set on cultivation. Meanwhile, Jiang He notices his friend scanning the crowd and asks what exactly he is looking for. Chun Chuan explains he's looking for his father. Old Chun promised he would be here, yet there is no sign of him. A small doubt crosses his mind. Perhaps his father decided not to come after all. Before the realm is opened, an elder steps forward to introduce the history of this mysterious place to the gathered disciples. We learn that this realm dates back 100,000 years, born from a time of great upheaval. It was created after the invasion of demons from beyond the heavens, serving as a final stand. This was the place where the ancient immortals finally sealed the darkness away for good. Only those below the foundation establishment stage may enter, and there is a secondary restriction as well. The strength of the monsters inside is similarly capped, ensuring nothing exceeds the limits of the disciples. If everyone is at the same level, Chun Chuan realizes the challenge might be different than he expected. Something feels off. Something feels deeply wrong about this, especially regarding what happens after they enter the secret realm. The elder continues, explaining that their mission is simple. They have only one objective. They are to repair as many of the 60 altars scattered throughout the realm as possible. Whichever sect manages to repair the most will be declared the winner of this entire trial. And to ensure the safety of the disciples, a priority, at least in theory, there is an extra precaution. Every disciple at the peak of the qi refining stage is instructed to approach their respective sect masters. There, they will receive a foundation establishment pill to keep on hand for emergencies. The crowd erupts in excitement. After all, a foundation establishment pill is no small gift. Some marvel at the sect's generosity, while others argue it's merely a tool for survival. Deep down, they know that using a pill to force a breakthrough can limit one's future potential. Naturally, the next question on everyone's mind is what the actual reward for winning will be. The elder announces that the prizes have been provided collectively by the 5 great sects. He gestures for them to look, revealing the treasures they are all fighting for. We see 5 high-grade spiritual treasures and 10 bottles of 4th-tier spirit pills presented to the crowd. But most importantly, the Qingyun group has stepped in with some very exclusive sponsorships. They have provided 100 boxes of their famous, specially made spicy strips. And to top it off, 100 bottles of flying heaven Taizi, which leaves the disciples in awe. The mere mention of 100 bottles of Taizi is enough to make anyone's head spin. The leaders of the Wind and Thunder sect immediately bark orders, demanding their disciples bring home the win. They are told not to bother returning if they fail, while the Danchi sect, less fond of violence, watches on. Even so, they cannot afford to show any weakness in front of the others. The Danchi leader suggests that his girls could help Chen Chuan and the Qingyun group. In exchange, he proposes a 40% share of the rewards, a fair deal, perhaps. Chen Chuan agrees easily, noting that it's a perfectly reasonable arrangement. Vice President Yu wonders if the rewards for this secret realm have always been this generous. Something about the scale of it all feels slightly off to him. He turns to Chen Chuan, seeking clarity on why things feel so unusual. Chen Chuan admits he doesn't know. The realm only opens every 60 years, and he is only 50. He laments that he wasn't even born during the last opening, despite his undeniable natural talent. Having reached the peak of foundation building so young, he is now too overqualified to enter. The narrator notes that this was quite the boast to make right to someone's face. As a result, Chen Chuan jokingly tells him his bonus is gone, much to the man's dismay. The secret realm finally opens, the foundation building tools are set, and the disciples depart. The masters shout their final encouragements, desperate for their sects to bring home the victory. The Danchi disciples are specifically reminded to stay close to Chen Chuan at all costs. With a collective shout of agreement, the disciples prepare to face the unknown. Suddenly, a figure flashes past and vanishes into the entrance, likely just a straggler. The leaders decide it's of no consequence and turn their attention to the heavenly eye mirrors. Deep down, Chen Chuan knows that Qingyun's true trump cards won't be revealed so easily. He watches with a satisfied smile, confident that everything is proceeding exactly as planned. We see the leaders observing the mirrors, noting how orderly the youngsters are, and praising Yu Yuan for a job well done. Another leader boasts that his own sect's Li Jin is the truly organized one, already beginning to arrange their battle formations. Turning to his companion, he asks why the Qingyun group is still standing perfectly still, not making a single move. He wonders aloud if Chen Chuan perhaps forgot to brief them on the situation inside the secret realm, which would be quite the oversight. Inside the realm, the disciples are getting restless, asking what they should do now that the other sects have already started their missions. They ask if they should hurry to repair the altars as well, but the response is a calm question. What exactly is the rush? As the saying goes, the early worm gets eaten by the bird, so they decide to let the others stay busy while calling for Jianghe. He is told to bring out the items that were prepared beforehand, and he happily complies with the request. Meanwhile, Brother Lu is asked by a worried disciple if Qingyun's lack of movement is actually part of some deep, hidden conspiracy. Brother Li Jian agrees that the alliance between Qingyun and Danchi is not something they can afford to take lightly. They decide it would be best to scout out Qingyun's true intentions first, and they set off together to investigate. But when they finally get a good look at the group, they are left utterly speechless by what they find. They can hardly believe their eyes. The disciples are simply sitting there, eating and drinking as if they were at a festival. It seems they aren't worried about the progress of the secret realm at all, as Ergo receives his specific instructions. He is told to grill the kidneys a bit longer, while Jiang He is tasked with handing out a bottle of spirits to everyone present. Lu Meng is then told to share the spicy snacks with the rest of the group, ensuring no one goes hungry. The sisters from the Danchi sect are told not to be polite and to make themselves feel right at home, a very hospitable war zone, indeed. As they enjoy the feast, they offer their sincere thanks to Brother Chen Chuan for his unexpected generosity. One disciple remarks that this is the first time she has ever tasted such a delicious and high-quality meal. The wine is so good that she finally understands why her sect master is always talking about it back home. The spicy snacks are absolutely delicious, Brother Chen Chuan. One disciple is so impressed that she jokingly declares she wants to have his children. Chen Chuan can't help but feel that he has heard that particular line somewhere before. But amidst the feast, a voice of reason asks if it's truly all right to ignore the secret realm like this. Junior Sister Gu is told not to worry and to simply look at the girls from the Danchi sect. He notes how thin they look and insists that they really ought to eat a bit more. After all, one can't fight without energy, though she still harbors some lingering doubts. She points out that everyone on the outside is watching their every move. And indeed, the observers are appalled, feeling that treating the secret realm like a game is utterly scandalous. One leader sighs with relief that his own disciples haven't been lured in by such temptations. He warns that if this continues, they are bound to lose the competition, but Chen Chuan seems occupied. A caption appears on screen, winning hand. Chen Chuan asks what Junior Sister Gu said, but another disciple tells her not to bother with him. He clearly has a plan, so they might as well relax and play a few rounds of mahjong. It is quite comfortable, after all. We see that the entire atmosphere of the Qingyun group has shifted into something unrecognizable. The aroma is so tempting that even Brother Lu's followers ask if they should try some secret realm barbecue. Lu snaps back, telling them to forget it and swallow their spit, reminding them they are here for a trial. He insists they must take the top spot, noting that the Qingyun people have clearly lost their ambition. They are only thinking of food and play, and he is certain they will be crying when the time comes. Meanwhile, our group feels quite refreshed. Having eaten their fill, they notice the hour is growing late. Chen Chuan instructs the female disciples to rest while the men finish tidying up and begin pitching the tents. The men respond with immediate enthusiasm, addressing him as Boss Chuan. The female disciples can't help but gush over how incredibly considerate their senior brother Chen Chuan is. However, a small voice asks if they shouldn't be repairing the altars, since the other three sects have likely finished several. He assures them there is no rush, as it's better to conserve energy, especially since the sun is already setting. After all, who knows what kind of monsters might crawl out at night? Safety, he insists, is the top priority. Deep down, he finds it hard to believe the sect masters claimed that this secret realm holds no real danger. Meanwhile, the rival disciples watching from afar are stunned that the Qin Yun group is being so incredibly leisurely. They look on in disbelief, noting that Chen Chuan's group even had the foresight to bring tents. One disciple asks his senior brother if they are here for a trial or a luxury vacation. The others admit they are exhausted too and wonder aloud if they might receive the same kind of treatment. Having repaired 3 altars in a row, they truly have no strength left to continue the mission. Their leader finally relents, telling them to notify everyone of the change in plans. He orders them to rest where they are, deciding they will follow the Qin Yun group's lead for once. But when the disciples ask where the tents and barbecue are, they are met with a cold, disappointing silence. Instead, the leader demands they stay alert and arrange for guards to keep watch throughout the night. He notes how lax the other group is, failing to even set a watch, which, in his mind, is an invitation for disaster. He tells his followers that if danger strikes, they shouldn't feel obligated to lend a helping hand. Back at the camp, a disciple asks Boss Chuan if they should set up a night watch of their own. Chen Chuan scoffs at the idea, wondering why on earth they would need a watch while he is there. He tells them all to get lost and head into the tents to get some rest. As for himself, he figures his role as the head of security is effectively useless for the night. Deep in the brush, we see the disciples sharing snacks and enjoying the quiet atmosphere. They laugh as they pass the food around, noting that senior brother Chen Chuan has truly made the night comfortable. Watching from a distance, the rivals wonder if Chen Chuan is truly safe without setting a single guard. Old Xiao turns to the others, telling them not to let Sect Master Gu's concerns worry them too much. He admits that while their boss Chuan might have average cultivation skills, his mastery of formations is second to none, a fact that changes everything. Suddenly, a strange noise echoes through the air, catching the attention of the Qixing disciples. Susu, one of the Qixing members, points toward the darkness, sensing something approaching. It's an insect swarm, and the realization hits them instantly. Everyone needs to prepare for battle. They are ghost-faced insects, and the sheer number of them is staggering to senior brother Lu. A disciple asks if they should take their enhancement pills, but Lu tells them to wait, recalling the sect master's advice. Since the insect's level isn't high, he believes they can win if they just endure this initial wave. Meanwhile, they glance toward the Qingyun camp, where everyone is still sound asleep. They decide to ignore them, figuring the Qingyun group is simply reaping what they sowed. One of the leaders offers a half-hearted apology to Old Chun for what is about to happen. He hadn't expected these little beasts to appear, but he can't help but offer a bit of criticism. He points out that the disciples under Chen's command are being far too lax for their own good. He warns that this won't end well, even if the ghost-faced insects are only at the second stage of strength. But the sheer numbers are overwhelming, and Chen Chuan and his group remain blissfully unaware of the danger. The leader tells himself there is no rush, deciding to wait and see how things unfold a bit longer. Desperate cries ring out as a disciple begs his senior brother to finally take the Zhuji pill. They are reaching their limit, and we see that quite a few of their comrades have already fallen. The disciple warns that if the senior brother doesn't act now, their entire force will be wiped out. He urges them to endure just one more wave, claiming the ghost-faced insects are starting to lose heart. As the struggle continues, the others begin to wonder why senior brother Lu still refuses to take the pill. They question if his own future prospects are truly more important than the lives of his fellow disciples. It seems senior brother Lu isn't the man they thought he was, appearing indifferent to their survival. Meanwhile, the Qingyun group is still asleep, and Susu blames Chun Chuan for this reckless lack of caution. Ignoring the warnings, she decides to find Chun Chuan herself, terrified for the safety of her sisters. She fears that if they die in such a senseless, confused way, the Qingyun sect will be disgraced. She mutters that she couldn't live with herself, calling out to her senior sister in distress. But then, a voice suggests she take a much closer look at the situation around them. Strangely enough, not a single insect has managed to actually attack the Qingyun camp yet. The observers realize something is off and demand to see a wider view of the campsite. What they see leaves them breathless. It is a killing formation, and an incredibly sharp one at that. It even possesses an automatic defense function, a masterpiece that seems almost impossible to believe. Such a feat could only be achieved by a true grandmaster of formations, which is exactly what Old Xiao predicted. There was no need to worry, after all, as the sect master finishes his impressive display of hidden power. If Chen Chuan were here right now, he would surely be scolding him to death for such a display. Senior brother Lu, it is no wonder your Qingyun people aren't worried. You had already prepared everything. Did you set up this killing formation in advance? To be honest, a formation of this caliber is unheard of. That is our very own Qin Chuan, a genius formation master whose talent knows no bounds. By arranging everything ahead of time, one can finally sleep soundly without a care in the world. With Qin Chuan around, there are no accidents, so we can all relax and enjoy ourselves. He invites the senior sisters from Ganshi to join them, offering leeks that Qin Chuan personally cultivated. They wonder if it's true, having smelled the delicious aroma long ago, and find the food truly exquisite. Being a disciple of the Qingyun sect seems like pure bliss, while others outside are left to fume in envy. While they sleep soundly, the poor Fenglei sect is on the verge of being completely wiped out. Senior brother Li still refuses to take the Zhuji pill, leading others to feel he is unfit to be their leader. They decide that once this is over, they will certainly impeach him for his lack of action. The situation has become critical. If he doesn't use the pill now, they are truly finished. With a look of pure frustration, he finally gives in to the inevitable. The crisis is finally resolved, though they know their future cultivation will be much harder from now on. At the very least, they can leave now without facing punishment, even if the cost was high. They assume that over at the Qingyun camp, there probably isn't even a single bone left intact. They decide to go and see for themselves, only to find a sight that seems utterly impossible. They wonder where the bodies are, questioning if the swarm devoured every last trace of them. Under an insect attack of such massive scale, they believe it's impossible for anyone to remain unharmed. They are all still alive, which is no small feat, and they are shocked to see he is completely unharmed. He wonders why he should be in trouble, though even he is taken aback by the massive pile of ghost-faced insects. The creatures are stacked with such neat precision that one can't help but wonder if they encountered any real danger at all. He realizes he didn't feel a thing during the night, and it finally clicks why Qin Chuan didn't need him on patrol. It turns out that a powerful formation had been prepared long ago, keeping them all safe while they slept. While some marvel at Qin Chuan's incredible skill, others are consumed by a sudden, bitter resentment. They demand to know why he didn't warn them, blaming Qin Chuan for the heavy casualties their three sects suffered. They insist he take responsibility, but the others quickly fire back that their own lack of strength is the real issue. They defend their senior brother, questioning why any of this should be considered Qin Chuan's fault. After all, we have to wonder, is he expected to complete the entire trial for them as well? The others stammer, asking why he didn't at least mention that the night would be so incredibly dangerous. They argue that since he set up a formation, he must have known something, and they feel entitled to his protection. Qin Chuan simply scoffs, wondering by what logic he was ever obligated to share his secrets with them. He asks why on earth he should have saved them, a question that leaves them sputtering for a valid reason. He reminds them that they only remember him now, though not a single one of them thought to warn his group last night. He points out that if it weren't for his own specialized methods and foresight, everyone from the Qingyun sect and Ganshi Valley would likely be dead right now. Their camp would be nothing but a field of withered bones, so he coldly asks why their deaths should matter to him. The observers note that this young man certainly has a knack for drawing intense hatred toward himself. They wonder if he has given any thought at all to the difficult position he's putting the rest of them in. One of the elders tries to smooth things over, noting that Qin Chuan doesn't exactly have a way with words. He looks at the others, asking if they are truly angry, but the response he gets is one of pure shock. They aren't angry at all. They are mesmerized, asking old Qin if he saw what just happened. It turns out the boy used the Mystery 7-kill formation, a legendary technique long thought to be lost to time. The observers are stunned, wondering how the Qingyun sect could possibly possess such a deep and ancient heritage. They question if it's wise to trust a rank 7 disciple with such power, but old Qin has a correction to make. He admits, rather awkwardly, that he wasn't the one who gave Qin Chuan that formation at all. To be honest, it's a bit embarrassing, but Qin Chuan refuses to let anyone manage his cultivation. Somehow, the boy found a 1,000-year-old inheritance on his own and mastered it without any help. He's become a formation master through sheer self-study, which is enough to make any teacher feel a bit redundant. One elder jokingly admits he wants to hit the boy, while nearby, junior brother Yu watches with concern. He wonders if it's truly safe for Qin Chuan to be quite this arrogant in front of the other sects. We see Li Jin and Lu Yuan leaving with dark expressions, clearly unhappy with how they were treated. The disciples worry they might strike at Qin Chuan in secret, putting the Qingyun and Ganshi groups in grave danger. However, the senior disciples aren't so sure that Qin Chuan is the one who needs protecting. In fact, they believe that if those three sects actually try to attack him, they are the ones who will suffer. When asked why, the answer is simple. Qin Chuan is far more dangerous than he looks. Whether inside the secret realm or out, the Qingyun sect has powerful figures watching over their own. Suddenly, our attention is drawn to a mysterious figure moving with incredible speed through the woods. The observers wonder why this disciple is acting alone, but for now, they decide it's best to simply ignore him. We return to the others, deciding it is best to see how the little ones are progressing with the altar's restoration. Elsewhere, another piece is found, and a voice calls out to confirm the next step of the plan. He asks if placing these items into the altar exactly as instructed is the key to everything. He wants to be certain that this is how Chen Chuan will finally obtain that specific treasure. The mysterious voice confirms that a certain seal exists within the ruins of this ancient battlefield. And once that seal is broken, the energy released will be exactly what his son, Chen Chuan, requires. The man agrees, though the voice offers one final, chilling reminder about the cost of this action. Once the seal is undone, many people will die, a fact that would give any normal person pause. But he simply shrugs it off, noting that as long as he and his son survive, it doesn't really matter. He asks if his own opportunity will only appear after the others have finished reinforcing all the seals. The voice tells him he must be patient and avoid any reckless moves, but he has heard enough. He snaps at the voice to stop its endless chatter, even threatening to quit this whole endeavor entirely. To be honest, he's tired of the nonsense and is already looking for a chance to replace his unseen partner. Meanwhile, back with our main group, a disciple asks why on earth they are still traveling on foot. The others point out they have no choice, since none of them have reached the golden core stage yet. They believe that without that rank, flight is impossible, but Chen Chuan seems to have other ideas. Suddenly, a spirit boat appears, leaving the others to wonder if the Qingyun sect is truly this wealthy. It's rare for even disciples to have such a vessel. They are rich, certainly, but this is on another level. The disciples are in awe, noting that this boat is even larger and more impressive than the sect master's own ship. Chen Chuan just tells them to get on board, remarking that only a fool would choose walking over this. The sight of the vessel immediately triggers a wave of indignation, with others crying out that this must be cheating. The disciples of the Fenglei sect complain that they are forced to walk everywhere, questioning why he gets such a luxury. They begin to shout in protest, demanding that something be done about this perceived unfairness. As the shouting grows, one of the leaders tries to smooth things over, asking Chen Chuan not to take offense. He tries to explain that the disciples are simply, well, he isn't quite sure how to finish that sentence. Chen Chuan calmly asks if there is actually a rule against using a spirit boat, knowing full well there isn't. Since no such rule exists, he concludes that using the boat is perfectly acceptable. He even suggests that the other disciples could use their own boats, assuming, of course, that they actually own any. It is a bit of a low blow, but he maintains that his use of the vessel is entirely within the regulations. The others can only seethe, wondering which sect could possibly be wealthy enough to give its disciples such expensive treasures. Deep down, they know he is technically right, which only makes them want to punch him even more. Chen Chuan dismisses the complaints of the paupers as they finally locate an altar that hasn't been repaired yet. His companion asks how they should proceed, and Chen Chuan tells them to handle it however they like. He instructs Jiang He to fix the altar while he takes a moment to scout the surrounding area. The rules state they must repair the altar and plant their sect's flag, but they don't forbid a little extra preparation. And since the rules are silent on the matter, he decides to take full advantage of the loophole. Once the altar is fixed and the flag is flying, the disciples ask if they should leave someone behind to guard it. Chen Chuan shakes his head, deciding instead that it's time to try something far more interesting. He begins setting up a killing formation, prompting a worried Jiang He to ask if this might be crossing a line. Chen Chuan simply smiles, arguing that he is merely taking reasonable steps to protect their hard work. He reasons that if they leave the flag alone, all will be well, but if anyone approaches with ill intent, well, they've been warned. With that bit of business concluded, we follow them as they head off toward the next location. Meanwhile, the disciples of the other sects watch them leave, calling the Qingyun group fools for not leaving anyone behind to guard the site. One of them immediately orders a subordinate to go and pull up the flag, and the disciple moves to obey without a second thought. A disciple turns to senior brother Li, remarking that it seems this trial will only truly be a contest between their three sects. Li agrees, noting that it goes without saying, they've never liked the Qingyun group anyway. Their plan is simple, they will follow from a distance, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For every flag Chen Chuan's team plants, they intend to tear it down, and they plan to do much more once the opportunity arises. They are mid-scheme, plotting their next move, when something entirely unexpected happens. A panicked cry rings out as a disciple reports that Zhang Sen has been killed instantly, leaving the others in a state of shock. They wonder if a monster attacked, but the truth is far more clinical. It was a killing formation. The moment Zhang Sen touched the flag, the formation cut him down, a rather harsh lesson in curiosity, to be honest. They are stunned that anyone would be ruthless enough to use such a lethal formation in a place like this. Junior brother Lu tries to calm the group, suggesting that Chen Chuan couldn't possibly have many of these formations left. He urges them to stick to the plan, promising that once they catch up, they will surely avenge their fallen comrade. Senior brother Li shoots him a look of pure disbelief, asking if he actually possesses a spirit boat to catch them with. Since they don't have one, chasing them is a fantasy. He decides they should focus on finding their own altars to repair instead. Back at the sect, the elders observe that Chen Chuan might have been a bit heavy-handed, though he is technically one of their own. They admit that the other disciples acted with malice first, so Chen Chuan can hardly be blamed for protecting his interests. In the end, they decide to let it be, hoping this painful lesson will keep the others from bothering Chen Chuan again. The elders of the Fenglai sect sigh with relief, feeling that their lineage isn't entirely lost thanks to Danqi's disciples. They had the foresight to follow Chen Chuan from the very beginning, which turned out to be a wise move. Because of that choice, they haven't fallen into the same miserable state as the others, a small mercy, really. Jiang He tells his leader not to say another word, as he is well aware they've avoided a truly pathetic fate. He notes that once this particular altar is repaired, their trial will be nearly complete. At that point, they can finally head toward the center of the secret realm to wait for the immortal fate to appear. Chen Chuan pauses, asking for more details about what this immortal fate actually entails. Jiang He explains that the immortal fate is, quite literally, a wisp of immortal energy. Specifically, it is known as the purple chi of the heavenly Tao, a rare and powerful force. When used by a cultivator, it provides a massive boost to their progression toward the immortal path. It is a far superior method of advancement compared to standard pills or even a natural breakthrough. Chen Chuan nods as the pieces fall into place. He finally understands the true value of what they are chasing. He realizes this must be his father's true goal for this journey, and if that's the case, he knows what he must do. With a newfound sense of purpose, he decides to lend a hand and tells the group it's time to move out. He tells Jiang He they are heading straight for the center, as he has something major planned, a grand gesture of sorts. A little later, they arrive at the central altar, but the sight that greets them is not what they expected. Chen Chuan spots a strange, eerie pattern on the altar that his father never mentioned in his instructions. He suspects this was prepared by old Chen, which would mean the man is likely somewhere nearby. He asks Jiang He if every single sect will eventually converge on this specific location. Jiang He confirms that they will, though most claim they are only here for the sect rewards. In reality, they are all here for this immortal fate, which means that very soon we will see another fierce struggle break out, an inevitable clash, to be honest. Chen Chuan realizes that whatever his father is planning, he cannot allow anyone to interfere. He also knows they must remain undetected, so he turns to Jiang He with a sudden question. He asks Jiang He directly if he actually wants this immortal fate for himself. Jiang He simply brushes the idea aside, explaining that the items he needs for his own breakthrough have already been prepared by old Chen, and they are just as valuable as any immortal fate. He admits he only came here to accompany his friend. Then Chen Chuan turns to ask junior sister Gu and the others. They agree they don't need it either, as the sect only sent them here for the sake of experience. Chen Chuan nods and tells them that since they have no claim to it, they should take the group and return to the place where they first entered the realm, a request that shocks Jiang He. He protests, realizing Chen Chuan intends to face the three major sects alone, which seems like madness. The others chime in, noting that 3 people from those sects have already reached the foundation establishment stage. They ask if he is simply trying to protect them from getting hurt, insisting that they aren't afraid. But Chen Chuan cuts them off, telling them there is no need for further discussion. He senses that what is about to happen here won't just be a simple battle between cultivators. Deep down, he suspects a massive, unpredictable change is looming over the secret realm. He admits he isn't sure he can keep everyone safe when that happens, and looks sternly at Jiang He. He tells Jiang He that if he still considers him a brother, he must lead the group away immediately. Jiang He tries to argue, but Chen Chuan silences him, telling him to have faith and just go. He reminds them that he is, after all, a grandmaster of formations. We see the onlookers watching in disbelief as the group retreats, leaving Chen Chuan entirely alone. One of them mutters that this is absolute madness, wondering what Brother Chen could possibly be thinking. They question if Chen Chuan is being far too conceited, considering he is facing 3 foundation establishment experts. For a mere 7th-level chi refiner to face them alone seems, to be honest, a bit overconfident. Even his allies are surprised, hoping that perhaps he has a hidden trump card up his sleeve. A voice notes that, despite any good intentions, there is still a massive gap in their cultivation realms. Facing 3 masters at once is a tall order. They believe no trump card could bridge that distance. They wonder if he intends to rely on his formations, yet such lethal arrays are notoriously difficult to manage. At the 7th level of chi refining, they calculate just how many he could realistically deploy. Perhaps 1, or maybe 2, if he is truly skilled. It isn't as if he could suddenly deploy 10 lethal formations all at once, right? But then a question hangs in the air. What if he could deploy 100? The idea seems absurd. Wait, we see the onlookers freeze as they look toward the center of the clearing. It appears that Chen Chuan actually has the power to set up 100 formations after all. The crowd is stunned by the sheer scale of it, and Chen Sheng can hardly believe his eyes. He asks if this is truly something a 7th-level cultivator can achieve as the Mystery 7-kill array appears. Then comes the Blazing Fire array, followed immediately by the Ghost Water Underworld array. Even the Purple Lightning 5 Thunder array joins the mix. The variety is simply staggering. Chen Sheng realizes that this was why he had been trying to usher them away just moments ago. One of the masters demands to know if Chen Chuan truly intends to wipe out all 3 of their great sects at once. Chen Chuan simply smiles, asking how they could possibly suggest such a thing. He reminds them that, in this southern wilderness, the Qingyun sect has always been the one in charge. He reveals that he knows their three sects have already formed a secret alliance to take them down. Since they plan to seize Qingyun during this secret realm, he sees no issue with making a few preparations of his own. The masters are shaken, stammering that it should have been impossible for him to know their hidden plans. They point out that he never even left the sect grounds, making their secrecy seem absolute, but he merely offers a polite apology. He explains that he recently made a new sworn brother who happens to be incredibly reliable. There are many matters, it seems, that don't require him to show his face personally. And now, he invites them to watch closely as the scene unfolds. He tells them they are about to witness exactly how the so-called geniuses of their sects will fall. The enemies mock him for arriving so late, wondering why he is alone and where his spirit ship has gone. They demand to know the whereabouts of Chun Xianghe and the other Qingyun disciples, but Chun Chuan remains unfazed. He calmly states that they aren't necessary, as he is more than enough to handle this situation alone. They call him arrogant, reminding him that they currently have 3 Foundation establishment experts on their side. To them, crushing a mere chi refiner like him would be as easy as stepping on an ant. Chun Chuan simply dares them to try, which, to be honest, is a bold move given the odds. However, the masters aren't entirely foolish. They hesitate, sensing a trap. They suspect he has already laid out a lethal array, prompting Senior Brother Li to take caution. Senior Brother Zhao joins in, immediately issuing orders to all the disciples to prepare for battle. The enemies decide to join forces, confident that they can break through his lethal array together. Senior Brother Zhao sneers, convinced he has seen through Chun Chuan's plan and predicting his imminent downfall. He declares that once Chun Chuan is dead, they will hunt down every last one of his companions. Their goal is clear, to find the rest of the Qingyun disciples and finish what they started. They intend to wipe the Qingyun sect off the map of the southern wilderness forever. The leaders rally their disciples, shouting that Chun Chuan's only defense is gone and it is time to strike. A chorus of voices rises, chanting for the destruction of Qingyun and the death of Chun Chuan. As they clamor for the sect's treasures, Chun Chuan sighs, wondering why they insist on forcing his hand. They dismiss his words as a bluff, certain that his primary defense has been neutralized. They mock him, asking what a mere chi refiner can possibly do without his precious array. Chun Chuan simply looks at them, asking why they ever assumed he only had one array prepared. Before they can react, he commands a second, even more powerful lethal array to rise. The enemies are stunned, unable to comprehend how he could have set up so many traps in secret. They begin to curse him, calling his tactics despicable and cowardly. Chun Chuan finds this quite amusing, pointing out the irony of a massive crowd calling a lone man shameless. Senior Brother Lu lunges forward in a rage, but his allies quickly pull him back, urging him to stay calm. They realize they cannot charge through the array, but they assume he is trapped inside it as well. Their new plan is simple. They will wait outside the perimeter until he is forced to come out. Chun Chuan watches them with pity, noting that their ignorance is truly their greatest weakness. He asks them if they really believed he was standing here all by himself, before calling out for his father. Senior Brother Lu is left reeling, unable to believe that Chun Chuan actually has backup waiting in the wings. Chun Chuan asks if he really thought everyone was as foolish as him, noting that he is now the only one left. The senior brother scoffs, reminding him that anyone entering this secret realm is capped at the Foundation establishment stage. He claims that since they are at the same level, Chun Chuan cannot kill him any more than he can escape. Chun Chuan simply smiles and asks what would happen if he possessed the power of the Nine. His father chimes in, trying to remember the term, the Nine-turn innate spiritual root, to be precise. Chun Chuan nods, confirming that the power of the Nine is exactly what he is referring to. Then he pauses, wondering why he is bothering to explain anything to a dead man before telling him to perish. The senior brother's bravado vanishes instantly as he begs for his life, but it is far too late for that. Later, Chun Chuan tells his father that according to Jianghe, the immortal garden is right here and it is time to advance. His father agrees, ready to begin the breakthrough process at last. Suddenly, a guardian beast appears in the garden, and Chun Chuan urges his father to focus while he protects him. His father tells him to hold on just a little longer, promising that the process will be over soon. Chun Chuan prepares himself, grateful that he had the foresight to set up his arrays in advance. A new voice mocks him, calling him Chun Sheng and pointing out the 2 companions he relies on so heavily. The enemy laughs, noting that despite all his schemes, Chun Chuan failed to predict the arrival of the beast nest. He warns that once the nest spreads, the entire realm will be overrun and his son will be torn apart by monsters. The others grow impatient, arguing that there is no point in wasting words on a man who is already doomed. The 3 Golden Core Masters decide to join forces, intent on wiping Chun Sheng out once and for all. They believe their grand plan is finally nearing completion, and to be honest, they seem quite pleased with themselves. The response is simple and decisive. Good. It seems Chun Chuan was right all along. In this world, one really does need to use their head to survive. The enemy scoffs at the remark, calling it pure ignorance, though he is the one about to be surprised. Chun Chuan asks them quite calmly why they ever assumed he was standing here all alone. He repeats the question, letting the weight of their miscalculations sink in as the atmosphere shifts. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Mother, wait," signaling the arrival of someone unexpected. The realization hits them like a physical blow. Could this be the powerhouse Zhang Chunlan, the great elder of Qingyun? They stammer that it's impossible because she is supposed to be dead, but she simply asks who told them that. She stands before them, very much alive, mocking the idea that she had ever passed away. The great elder immediately issues her command. The Qingyun disciples are to take down the Fenglei and Xianyang sects. She adds that those from the Minghuang sect who lay down their arms shall be spared, and her followers answer in unison. The disciples shout their loyalty, promising to strictly follow the orders of the great elder. With the tides turned, she looks at her enemies and asks if they have anything else they'd like to say. One of them sneers at Chen Sheng, telling him not to be so smug because, in the end, no one has truly won. He points out that Chen Jianghe is Chen Sheng's only son, looking between him and Zhang Chunlan with a cruel grin. He mocks the tragedy of a parent outliving a child, telling them to watch closely because the end is coming fast. Very soon, he claims, they will have to witness the horror with their own eyes. He warns that the Qingyun disciples will be devoured by the beast nest, leaving Chen Sheng's side in a far more miserable state. Panic begins to set in as an ally asks Chen Sheng what they should do, given the overwhelming scale of the nest. Even a Golden Core master cannot face such a force. They wonder if they are truly meant to watch their disciples die. Chen Chuan tells junior sister Gu not to worry, insisting that there is still plenty of time. He calls out to his father, wondering if he is ready yet, because if he doesn't break through now, the Chen family line is going to end right here and now. His father tells him to move aside as he finally arrives, looking, to be honest, quite impressive. Chen Chuan asks if he succeeded and what his current level is, to which his father casually claims he is at the peak of the Golden Core. He praises his father for being so fast, but then pauses in complete disbelief as the realization of that rank sinks in. His father tells him there is no need to be envious of a Golden Core rank. He promises to help his son secure a fortuitous opportunity that belongs specifically to him. Chen Chuan is surprised he is involved, but his father reminds him that he is his son, after all. He believes that whatever the father has, the son must also possess. He commands the space to open, though the timing seems a bit unfortunate. Chen Chuan panics, asking what he is doing as a hand begins to reach out from the crack, but his father tells him not to fear. He tells his son to step back, even as Chen Chuan screams about an outer demon and begs him to run. His father calmly explains it is merely the corpse of an outer demon and tells his son to watch closely. He stops the entity from escaping, successfully capturing something and handing it over to his son. Chen Chuan looks at the gift, realizing it is the essence of the Taiji. When asked how he feels, Chen Chuan admits that the world suddenly feels much more real to him. Furthermore, his control over the power of the laws seems to have become far more effortless. His father is satisfied, noting that the system calls this the primordial qi of the beginning. It is the very foundation of his law powers, ensuring that from now on, nothing will stand in his way. His father encourages him to give it a try and start his cultivation right then and there. To his absolute shock, Chen Chuan finds he can cultivate normally again, and in an instant, he reaches the peak of the qi refining stage, though his father warns him not to rush into a breakthrough just yet. We learn that his father has been busy gathering information about the southern wilderness where they live. It turns out this is merely the lowest tier cultivation region on the entire continent. He insists that when they eventually move to higher regions, they must have the power to walk with their heads held high. Therefore, he demands that his son's foundation be nothing less than top tier, which is a tall order, to be honest. Chen Chuan realizes his father hasn't been idle during his time away, noting how much he's learned. His father scoffs, joking that all those snacks he shared weren't for nothing, which makes sense in its own way. However, Chen Chuan looks around at the ruined secret realm and wonders how they will ever find an exit. His father simply smiles, assuring him that leaving is actually quite a simple matter. Suddenly, voices call out in relief as they find that Brother Chun and the village chief are both safe and sound. Chen Chuan beams with pride, telling the others that with his father around, there are never any accidents. The others ask Zhang Wo how he is faring, and he proudly announces that he has successfully reached the Golden Core stage. This is wonderful news for the Qingyun sect, as they have officially gained another powerful Golden Core expert. It seems a total breakthrough for the sect is finally within reach, though the speed of his progress is almost terrifying. Reaching the Golden Core in less than a year is enough to make any ordinary cultivator feel a bit inadequate. One of them admits he feels quite discouraged by the comparison, which, to be fair, is a perfectly natural reaction. Turning to the matters at hand, they ask how things were resolved outside, noting it was all thanks to this father and son duo. The sect leader admits that without them, Qingyun would have been doomed, and offers his deepest thanks to them both. "Thank you, Uncle Zhangwo. Thank you, Senior Brother Chen Chuan," the disciples cry out, though Zhangwo insists it was just a small matter. He claims he was merely running errands, and that the actual plan was all Chen Chuan's doing, which is quite modest of him, to be honest. He beams, noting how lucky he is to have such a son, before turning to Jiang He and telling him to look at his older brother. He tells the boy to learn from his brother's example in the future, and Jiang He quietly agrees, likely feeling the pressure. The sect leader's daughter tells her father that given Jiang Wo's current power, the sect can't really offer him much more help. She asks Chun Chuan what he might need, but his mother chimes in, saying she has already handled her son's reward. She assures them that everything is prepared and there is no need for anyone else to worry about it. The sect leader is surprised by her decisiveness, but he quickly turns to the crowd and commands all disciples to listen. With a booming voice, he makes a grand announcement that will change the hierarchy of the sect from this day forward. He declares Chun Chuan the vice-sect leader of the Qingyun sect, granting him authority over all matters, large and small. As for Jiang Wo, he is promoted to the rank of Special Elder, a position of immense prestige. His status is now equal to the sect leader himself, but before the cheers can start, the duo interrupts with a "wait a moment." The sect leader is confused when they seem to decline, but Jiang Wo admits that they have something else in mind. We see that the father and son have already reached a decision about their future together. They intend to leave the sect behind and truly explore the vast, mysterious world of cultivation. And so, they prepare to say their farewells, leaving the sect leader in a state of absolute shock. He asks if they are truly leaving, and when they confirm it, he warns them to think very carefully about this choice. He explains that the world outside is dangerous, where nascent souls are common and golden cores are everywhere, a terrifying thought. He fears their current strength might not be enough, but Chun Chuan simply smiles, telling his uncle there is nothing to fear. He has complete faith in his father, believing that Jiang Wo possesses a talent that rivals the very earth itself.